Hey, what's up? It's cute What If this side. Today we will be seeing, what if Deku went to Juvenile Detention Center? Now before we move ahead with the fic, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for future what ifs like this. Aizawa let out a tired grunt as he walked towards the Juvenile Detention Center in downtown Mustafu. He had hoped that he wouldn't have to do any more visits after spending the morning seeing potential students for UA. In fact, he had already unpacked his favorite yellow sleeping bag after lunch. Then Principal Nezu called and informed him of an interesting applicant, a juvenile delinquent that was well known in the area if the police reports were to be believed. My head's already hurting, he grumbled as he entered the building. This kid'll be a problem child, I'm sure of it. He stopped at the front desk, a thick sheet of bulletproof glass separating the officer from him. His eyes flickered to the 3 cameras in the lobby, then to the heavy metal door set into the wall beside the window. He knocked on the glass until the officer turned on the intercom. My name's Shouta Aizawa, he said. I'm here to speak with the JDC administrator about one of your words. Yes, sir. Go ahead and have a seat. Captain Tatsumoto will be with you momentarily, the officer said with a bored drawl. Aizawa felt his eye twitch as he moved to sit in one of the wooden chairs that lined the walls. He pulled out the file on the boy and began looking through it. Several counts of assault, truancy, and vandalism. Why do you want this kid in UA? Nezu closed the file as the metal door opened and a man with beer gut stepped out. He was dressed in a fairly decent dress shirt and slacks, and his arms still held an impressive amount of muscle. He was bald, with a neatly trimmed goatee that was specked with silver hair. Mr. Aizawa, he greeted, his voice deep and quiet as he bowed respectfully to the off-duty hero. Thank you for coming in on such short notice. Aizawa returned the bow. UA is always willing to go the extra step for applicants who show promise. Tatsumoto nodded. Let us have this conversation in my office, he says, turning back around and entering the metal door. Aizawa followed closely behind him, looking around the long hallways. He watched as small groups of teenagers in gray jumpsuits walked down the halls, being escorted by officers from one spot to another. Several doors lining the walls were open, revealing entire dorms lined with metal bunks and a few metal tables bolted into the ground. Most of the boys in the facility were talking in hushed whispers at the tables, half watching the TV mounted on the wall inside of a metal and glass box. They climbed 2 flights of stairs, showing similar views on each floor until they reached a heavy metal door with a small window in it. Here we are, Tatsumoto said, unlocking his office door and inviting Aizawa in, who noted the window that showed what looked like a rec yard. I know what you're thinking, erasure, Tatsumoto began as he closed the door behind them and took a seat behind his desk, motioning to one of the brown leather chairs sitting in front of him. Aizawa sat down as he once again pulled the file, and while I'm sure you've seen his profile and record, I want to assure you that those days are behind him. It still raises some concerns, Aizawa said. The last charge was barely a few weeks ago in this very facility. The boys in this facility are all volatile, and you can see in the court brief that it was ruled as self-defense. He leaned forward. The boy he fought was attempting to run the pod he was in. He was taking people's commissary against their will. Guess he bit off more than he could chew. It seems that way, Aizawa sighed. His file says he's been in and out of this facility since he was 5. Tatsumoto sighed. Yes, I'll never forget that first day of his, he muttered. A boy of 5 getting brought in after he admits to killing his father. He shakes his head, self-defense after the bastard killed his mother, and then went for him. He stayed here for a week before the cops dropped the charges and placed him in foster care. Aizawa's eyes widened at the explanation. Poor kid, he muttered. I'm guessing that this is probably the root of the reason that he's been back here since. Partly the other part is the people he hung around, not only in here but at school. To put it simply, he became friends with delinquents and followed their lead. Although he's always been respectful to staff, his relationship with others his age and almost all of his foster families usually lead to one or more spectacular brawl. His file says he's been in and out of foster care. Could you elaborate on that? The trauma he went through as a child, paired with his newfound disdain for parental figures, made it difficult for any foster family to connect with him. He's ran away from almost every single foster home he's been in. For a while he was almost exclusively living on the street until he was busted for tagging a building alongside a few others when he was 11. That's when he was sent to a more strict family. Strict? Tatsumoto nodded. The Jones family in Saitama were known for turning problem children like him into success stories. The state believed they would be the best answer to his problems. Burned their house down 8 months after they took him in. That deviates from every other charge he's ever had. Aizawa started. Why would he suddenly turn to arson, and why against that specific family? We didn't find out ourselves until the end of that year when he took a tumble down a flight of stairs. Tatsumoto grunted. The medical staff that we have here found scars, whip marks from belts and switches, brands seared into his back. It took the doctor about 2 hours to get the story from him. Apparently the Joneses were devout Christians, and saw his quirk and resulting attitude as a sign that the devil was in him, and acted accordingly. They're lucky the kid didn't just burn down the house with them in it. What about the last foster home? It says there was an incident that landed him here once more and landed his foster parent in Tartarus. Ah yes, I was actually sad to hear this report. He grimaced. Soran, he became a foster about 4 years ago, and had several smaller children under his care before the kid went to him 3 years ago. We didn't hear anything about him for the entirety of those 3 years until about a month ago. Turns out Soran is the notorious dragon of the West. Of the Caldera Syndicate, Aizawa asked in surprise. How did that get past the background check? It seems the man never used his real name in any of his illegal dealings. Hell, he was the only one in that group that was never arrested until now. Cops found out from an anonymous tip and raided the house. Did he try to fight his way out? Is that why? No, that's not why he's back. Tatsumoto said abruptly. Soran surrendered peacefully. Didn't even raise his voice to the officers. The kid tried to fight back until Soran told him not to. The authorities only arrested the kid because he had activated his quirk. But they're just waiting on the judge to sign some paperwork to release him from here. Aizawa huffed. He was resisting cops just a month ago. Is there something different this time around? From what I'm hearing, it doesn't seem like he would be UA material. You don't mince words, do you? Tatsumoto asked dryly. You know, I was once a regular in these walls, and now here I am, a retired hero and administrator. He stood and walked around the desk, sitting on side of it as he stared out the window towards the juveniles in the rec yard playing basketball. This time around I can tell the boy is different. He's no longer looking for and trying to start fights. He has been much more courteous to his peers and has taken to focusing on academics. His anger issues and violent tendencies have been curbed for the most part. Aizawa quirked an eyebrow. What do you think prompted this turnaround? In my honest opinion, I believe it was Soran himself who helped him turn a new leaf. Their quirks are similar, very similar, and Soran may have used this to connect with him and train him. Do you think Soran was trying to conscript him? Tatsumoto actually laughed at this. The Caldera Syndicate has been inactive for over a decade. He chuckled, and evidence shows that it was Soran himself who helped turn the lights off on it. The man was, for lack of a better word, retired. No, I believe that Soran saw this boy and wanted to stop him from continuing down the same path he did. You seem to have an awful lot of respect for a retired supervillain. Tatsumoto shrugged. I have talked with him before, when checking in on his word a few times. He leans back, crossing his arm. Is there any questions you would like to ask? His quirk, Aizawa began, leaning forward. It's labeled as fire manipulation. Could you shed some more light on it? Tatsumoto nodded, looking at Aizawa. Fire manipulation, or firebending as he has taken to calling it. He can produce flames from his hands, feet and mouth, and can control fire around him to an extent. His control varied for most of his time here, though this last stay has shown he has increased his control over it. How much is increased? Aizawa asked. During a class on quirk usage he was able to produce flames that were almost cold to the touch. He chuckled. Never thought I would feel a room temperature fire. He stood up fully, staring at Aizawa. Would you like to meet him? Aizawa sighed and stood up. Yes, if it's possible. Tatsumoto smiled and stood. Follow me. He is currently in a segregated block due to the fight he had participated in. Tatsumoto explained as they walked into the block in question. 8 rooms line the walls, all of them heavy metal with meal slots built into them. He is being pulled off restrictions tomorrow, though he has requested to stay in his seg cell. Apparently it helps him focus. Aizawa nodded as they stopped by a door labeled with a large black 4. Tatsumoto unlocked the door. Midoriya, Tatsumoto greeted as he opened the door. You have a visitor. Aizawa stepped into the doorway, his eyes scanning the Spartan room, from the made-up bed to the simply wooden desk where the boy in question was sitting. Dressed in the same jumpsuit as everyone else, the boy had the top zipped down and tied around his waist. A simple white shirt hid several different scars that trailed up into the sleeve. He was a healthy skinny, with lean defined muscles and long curly green hair. The boy looked up at Aizawa, then looked down. Aizawa noted the papers on the desk and the pen in his hand. Hello, Aizawa began. I'm Shouta Aizawa. I'm a teacher at UA. Hello, sir. Midoriya greeted quietly, keeping his eyes averted. It's a pleasure to meet you. Aizawa looked at Tatsumoto, who motions to the bed. With a sigh Aizawa steps in fully. May I? He asks the boy, who looks up slightly before looking back down. Go ahead, he muttered. Aizawa sits down and leans forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I was sent here to speak with you about possible enrollment to UA. Aizawa begins as he watches Izuku begin to tap his pen against the table, leg bouncing as the boy kept looking from Aizawa back down to the floor. You did put an application in, didn't you? Why, yes, sir. Izuku mumbled, forcing himself to look up at Aizawa. To want to be a hero, to turn my life around and help others like me. I see, and why should we give you a chance? Your criminal history alone would exempt you from most hero schools. Not to mention the notes on your anger management problems. Izuku chuckled humorlessly. These last 4 years have taken a lot of my anger out of me, he mumbles, looking down at his calloused hands. I'm not the delinquent who skips school to look for fights. Truthfully, I want to avoid them at all costs, but what's the point of having my quirk if I can't help others? Aizawa nods slightly. What can you tell me about your time with Soran? He asks. Immediately Izuku perked up. You mean Uncle Iro? That's what he told everyone to call him, he said with a sincere smile and a warm light in his eyes as he reminisces of the past. All honesty, my stay with him was the best time of my life. He was like an eccentric uncle, giving everyone who stopped by his tea shop wisdom And advice, he was able to teach me how to properly use my firebending. It's what we call our quirks, he explained quickly. At least that's the name of the fighting style. He used it to teach me how to control my temper, and fire is the reason I want to be a hero. Aizawa slowly stood up, making Izuku flinch slightly. Thank you for your time, Midoriya, Aizawa said. Thank you for speaking with me, Mr. Aizawa, Izuku said, giving a small bow. Aizawa turned and walked out of the cell. Tatsumoto gave Izuku an encouraging nod as he closed the door and locked it. What do you think, he asked as he caught up with Aizawa. Aizawa didn't say anything until they stepped out of the block. Do you have a room where I can make a quick phone call, he asks. Tatsumoto grinned. You can use my office. A few hours later, Izuku was in a daze as he walked out of the JDC, an old yellow backpack hanging off one shoulder and a duffel bag in his hand, now dressed in a simple t-shirt and jeans as he followed Aizawa into the lobby. Good luck, Midoriya, one of the officers called out to him from the door, several others joining him. Show them what you can do. Don't let them psyche you out. Can't wait to see your debut, kid. You definitely have a lot of people rooting for you, young Midoriya. Tatsumoto chuckled as he followed the boy and Aizawa to the waiting car. I hope to see you going far. Thank you, Captain Tatsumoto, Izuku stuttered, giving him a small bow as Tatsumoto laughs. Take care of yourself, kid, Tatsumoto said, giving Aizawa a respectful nod before walking back into the building. Let's get going, Aizawa said, stepping into the driver's side while Izuku quickly got into the passenger side. Thanks to Principal Nezu, your release paperwork was pushed through. Aizawa began as he started the car and began driving. Understand that this chance he is extending to you is a one-time thing. If you mess it up, you won't be getting another one. Why, yes, sir, Izuku said. You'll be staying at an apartment that is contracted through UA for students who are from out of town and need a place to stay. You'll have your own apartment so long as housing doesn't require you to have a roommate. This is where you'll be staying until the UA entrance exam, rent and utility free, and, depending on the student's needs, grants a small stipend for groceries. If you pass, then you will continue to stay there. If not, you'll be re-entered into the foster system. Yes, sir, Izuku mumbled as he looked down. You're free to come and go as you please. Aizawa continued on, but be mindful that this complex is home to no less than 5 heroes, including me. If there's any indication that you're running amok in the streets, then you'll be kicked out and your chance of going to UA will be over. I promise I won't throw this chance away. Thank you, Mr. Aizawa. Aizawa grunted as he pulls into a small, gated, apartment complex. 3 buildings in all surrounding a small park with a pool. He scans an ID card to open the gate and continues in. Follow me, he says, stepping out of the car and heading towards the center building, Izuku quickly following. They climb up to the 3rd floor and stops at the 5th apartment. Apartment 34 degrees Celsius, he says, handing Izuku a key card. That key card opens your door, and the gate, do not lose it. Why, yes, sir, Izuku says as he unlocks the door and steps in, looking over the medium-sized, sparsely furnished apartment, his hands running over the linoleum counter as he steps down a hallway just across from the front door. I'll leave you to it, Aizawa says, stepping out of the apartment and closing the door behind him. Izuku barely notices Aizawa leaving as he opened one of the 4 doors in the hallway, coming into what was probably the main bedroom, with a simple full-sized bed and generic sheets and comforter, and a wooden desk not unlike the one he had at the JDC. A room all to myself with no one around to search it randomly, Izuku mumbles as he sits down on the bed. This is heaven. A month later, the next day, Aizawa slowly walked towards his apartment, forcing himself to keep his eyes open as he sluggishly searched his pocket for his key card, mentally chewing out Midoriya for causing so much paperwork as well as the meeting he had to attend that morning. If and when he passes, his guardianship will be transferred to his homeroom teacher, Nezu stated to Aizawa as well as the other teachers in the room, though I have my doubts he will fail. If he does, then he will be placed back in foster care. Is everyone understanding? Aizawa sighed as he opened his door, stopping himself from walking in as he caught movement out of the corner of his eye. He looked over and grunts as he sees Midoriya running on the concrete sidewalk that circled the apartments, slick with sweat and struggling to keep his breaths even. He looked like he had been hard at work for a while. At least he's taking the preparation seriously, Aizawa muttered as he stepped into his apartment, closing the door without a look back. A month later, Izuku controlled his breathing as he went through his katas, keeping all of his muscles tensed as he moved from one form to another as he thought about the last month of his life. In all honesty, it was strange to have as much freedom as he did. Most of his foster homes had enforced a strict curfew and punished anyone who broke it harshly. But here he was free to stay out as late as he wanted, with only a tired glare from Aizawa to make him think about coming home earlier. It usually worked. It was also unnerving how many heroes were in this area. Even in Iroh's shop, they were situated in a less than nice neighborhood and only saw a hero if a chase moved there. But here, with 5 heroes living in the apartments and several more stopping by to visit, he was hard-pressed to find a day where there were no heroes around. Not that he wanted the heroes out of the area, it just made him nervous that they would harass him, which, thankfully, they didn't. He was also surprised at the attention that Aizawa gave him. For the first 2 weeks the man was standoffish and seemed to hate him, though he did give him some tips to help regulate his breathing when running. About 2 weeks back he had gone from watching him from the walkway of the second floor to watching him from a nearby bench, giving comments and tips on his forms or asking what he was writing in his journal in between workouts. By now Izuku was more or less used to Aizawa's presence. "You're stiff." Izuku jumped and whirled around, standing in a defensive stance as he stared at Aizawa, who was standing in a tank top and shorts, arms crossed. "You need to loosen up. If you're stiff it'll make your movements jerky and easily readable." "Alright," Izuku muttered as he relaxed. "Do you have to sneak up on me?" "I don't, you just don't pay attention." Aizawa says, looking at the sun slowly slipping down towards the horizon. "I heard you were volunteering at a beach cleanup." Oh, yeah, I was walking by it and saw just how much trash was on it, so I started cleaning up what I could. I guess word got around and more people began showing up." "I take it you're not going out there today?" "Oh no, today I need to focus on my katas," Izuku said sheepishly, scratching the back of his head. "It can't just be strength training." "You're right," Aizawa agreed, looking back at the boy. "What are those forms you're using?" "My forms? Oh, it's the fighting style that uncle made up," Izuku said with a grin. "He always told me that it's the fire inside that makes my temper so volatile, and taught me these forms to help relax my mind. Meditating also helps, but these katas also help me fight with my fire." "It does. How would you like to spar?" Or why you sure TT, that's a good idea," Izuku asks, worriedly as he looks around the apartment complex. "It'll be fine, neither of us will use our quirks," he says, getting into a fighting stance. "Oh okay," Izuku says, getting into a defensive stance, reactively dodging Aizawa's opening jabs and blocking a roundhouse. He throws a few punches of his own, putting Aizawa on the defensive. It ends when Aizawa gets a hard jab in on Izuku's side, making the boy drop his guard and leaving him open to another kick from Aizawa that sends him sprawling. "You need to use a little aggression in your fighting style," Aizawa said, passively waiting to counterattacks leaves too many openings. "Go on the offense." "Alright, let's go again." 40 minutes later, Izuku was gasping for breath as he once again landed on his back. But unlike the first time where he simply laid down, he used his arms and shoulders to regain his feet and pressed another attack at Aizawa, this time with an axle kick that was followed up with a few roundhouses. Aizawa barely flinched as he tanked the attacks and grabbed Izuku's leg, flipping him over his back and slamming him into the grass. "Better, you're actually pressing attacks and taking what advantages you can. But you're throwing caution to the wind and not planning out your attacks. You need to keep a level head in a fight." "Yes sir," Izuku sighed as he sat up. Aizawa looked to the horizon, noting how far the sun had dipped. "Let's call it a day," he says, holding a hand out to Izuku, who gratefully takes the hand and stands up. "You hungry?" Yeah," Izuku said cautiously, feeling confusion when Aizawa began walking away. "There's a ramen stand not too far from here that's pretty good. Let's go." Izuku blinked, then smiled. "Yeah, sure," he says, running to catch up with Aizawa. The two walked in a companionable silence until they got closer to the ramen stand. "You keep training like this and you'll be ready for the entrance exam," Aizawa said quietly. "Keep up the good work." "Yes sir," Izuku says with a determined expression, giving the man a wider smile. "Thank you for your help." Aizawa puts his hands into his pockets, staring straight ahead. "Don't mention it, kid. Now let's get some cold drinks while we wait for our food." Aizawa yawned as he stepped into the teacher's lounge at UA, looking at a few reports that had been given to him by Nezu. Most had to do with potential students who would be coming to take the entrance exam and had a good shot to actually get into the hero course. "Hey Erasure," President Mike greeted loudly as Aizawa walked towards the table. "What you looking at, Boo Dai?" "Potential student files," Aizawa says, looking at some of the more promising of the crop. "Including that Midoriya kid," President Mike asked with a shit-eating grin as Aizawa glared at him. "I hear he's got a good shot." "Same shot as everyone else," Aizawa muttered as he took a seat, his mind going back to the last 7 months since Izuku Midoriya had been given his second chance. The boy had become a well-known figure around the apartments, with few finding a reason to hold a grudge against the boy. Most give him a wave of greeting when they see the boy doing his workouts. It was also a common sight to see Aizawa accompanying him, training the boy where he could. "You can't tell me you're not pulling for the boy to make it to your class." "I'm not allowed to show bias," Aizawa muttered. "Whatever you say," President Mike said with a carefree shrug as Midnight walked in. "What are we talking about, boys?" she asked as she lounged back into her chair. "Nothing," Aizawa said just as Mike said, his son. "Oh yes," little Midoriya Midnight gushed. "I've heard good things about your boy Zawa." "He's not my boy," Aizawa grumbled. "You talk about him like he's yours." Mike snickered, always gushing how well his training is going and how you just wish he would take some time to relax. "And how he's overworking himself." Mike stopped when Aizawa flashed his quirk, intimidating the loud voice user while Midnight began to giggle. "What did Ms. Joke say when she found out she's a mom?" Midnight asked, eyes twinkling mischievously. "I'm not going out with her, and he's not my son," Aizawa growled. "I seems to remember a drunken call at 2 in the morning informing me that you were taking a certain someone home too. I will tie you up and lock you in your office." Aizawa snapped tiredly. "Oh, you're kinky today." Before Aizawa could say anything, the other teachers showed up, forcing him to keep his mouth clamped shut as Nezu stepped in with a skeleton-looking man with long hair. "Good evening everyone, let's get this meeting started," Nezu said cheerfully as he jumped onto the table. "Our first order of business, we have a new staff member joining us this semester as the new Hero Foundation teacher, as our previous teacher Whiplash will be retiring. He's easy on the eyes," Midnight said while licking her lips, staring pervertedly at the skeleton man, who looked slightly uncomfortable at her attention. "Yes, his name is Toshinori Yagi, or as all of you know him as, All Might." It was quiet for 3 beats before chaos rang out. "All Might. He's way too skinny to be him. There's no way. This makes him even more desirable." Toshinori coughed up blood at Midnight's exclamation, before swelling to his hero form. "Thank you for the reception," All Might laughed, before shrinking back down to his other form. "Any questions you may have about this form is covered in the packets that were delivered to your offices. For now, just accept the fact that he is on our staff. I hope we'll be working very close together, Toshi," Midnight said in a sultry tone, licking her lips. "I hope so too," Toshinori gulped. "Now, onto this year's entrance exam. Nezu says, this year we have a special case in the applicant pool. I am of course talking about Izuku Midoriya. He's the first applicant with a criminal record that you've allowed to actually take the entrance exam." Cementos says, "Why didn't you reject his applicant like the others?" "Normally I would have, but looking into the boy's history and talking with my old friend Tatsumoto, I decided to make an exception this year. The last time UA allowed an applicant with a criminal history to take the entrance exam, they went villain and attacked the other applicants." Snipes grunted, "What if this kid does the same? The boy shows no villainous tendencies, though I agree we cannot be too careful, so the Hero Association is willing to have 2 heroes on standby just in case he tries to turn villain." "He won't," Aizawa said coldly, making everyone look at him in shock, with Midnight and Present Mike looking nervous. "I've spent a good deal of time with Midoriya this summer. I guarantee we have nothing to worry about." "I agree with Erasure," Midnight said, with Present Mike nodding along. "How can we possibly give this boy a second chance if we're doubting him before he even takes the entrance exam? We will have to take a vote on the matter." Nezu says, "All those in favor taking the precaution and having 2 pro heroes on standby at his testing center, raise your hand." Cementos, Snipes, Vlad King, 13, Ectoplasm and Lunch Rush raise their hands. All opposed. Aizawa, Midnight, Present Mike and All Might raise their hands. Sadly, it carries. Nezu says, "Pro Heroes Manual and Ms. Joke will be on standby." Aizawa huffed and leaned back. "Now, onto the next subject, the sports festival." Aizawa stepped out of his car, eyes scanning the small park in the middle of the apartments until they fell on the form of Izuku Midoriya, sitting cross-legged with his hands in his lap, one laying atop the other. Around him were the neighborhood kids, who were balancing whatever they could find on the still boy, giggling quietly as they placed more and more outrageous things atop him, finishing with a bucket full of water on his head as Aizawa walked up, quickly scampering a safe distance away as Aizawa glanced towards them with a small smile. "Midoriya," Aizawa called loudly, making the boy jump then give a small scream as things began crashing around him, water soaking him as the bucket tipped over. "Really guys?" Again Izuku groaned as he gave a half-hearted glare to the laughing children. "Your fault for not paying attention." Aizawa drawled as he sat on his usual bench. "I thought you were meditating in your room since the last time they pulled this." "Yeah, but it was such a nice day," he sighed, then looked at Aizawa. "You look tired." "Aren't I always?" he asked, leaning forward. "Principal Nezu had a meeting today, concerning you." "Oh, is he retracting his offer?" Izuku asked anxiously. Aizawa shook his head. "It's been decided that there will be 2 pro heroes watching the battle center you will be testing in." Izuku deflated a little. "Are they really that worried I'll do something?" "Apparently, I am sorry that the vote passed. If I had a say in it, then it wouldn't be happening." "It's fine," Izuku said, looking at his mentor. "I'll show them that I'm serious about being a hero." Aizawa smiled. "I know you will, kid. No, come on. We still have some laid out. Let's get some training in." "Yes, sir." A few weeks later, Izuku stared at Yue, a strong feeling of accomplishment welling up inside him. "I made it," he said softly, putting his hands into the pockets of his sweater. "I'm here." He took a deep breath and took his first steps towards Yue, only to immediately trip on an out-of-place brick. "Shit," he exclaimed as he did his best to keep his footing, stumbling a few steps before expertly regaining his footing and continuing on. "Oh geez, that was a close one." He let out a relieved sigh as he walked, completely unknowing of the girl behind him with her hand raised and a surprised look on her face. It didn't take him long to reach the auditorium he had been assigned. He put his hood up as he walked, trying his best to keep a low profile as he found his seat next to a spiky-haired blonde, who was currently glaring at the stage with his arms crossed, muttering something under his breath. "Shitty little not showing son of a bitch." The quiet grumblings made Izuku sink into his seat a little further, hoping the guy wouldn't turn his irate mutterings towards him. A few moments later the lights turned on over the stage, revealing Present Mike. "No way," Izuku said in awe. "Good evening and welcome listeners to you. Can I get a yeah?" "Yeah," Izuku shouted, raising his fists, unrealizing in his excitement that he was the only one to do so. "Oh, we have a player here. How well then can I get a hey?" "Hey," Izuku cheered again, this time a blonde kid with a black streak in his hair joined in alongside him. Well, this is a receptive audience. Now let's get on with the explanation of what you'll all be doing after the written exam, which will be a 10-minute practical exam. You cool cats will be conducting 10-minute mock battles in one of our many battle centers. You will be facing off against robots to earn points. Points will be awarded for the type of robo-villain you defeat. There's 3 of them, and the numbers on them are the amount of points they're worth. Excuse me, another light came on, illuminating a severe-looking student who was glaring ahead at attention. You say there are only 3 villain types when the handbook given to us clearly states there's 4. If this is a mistake on the school's part, it is disgraceful, and shows poorly on the celebrated name of UA. He then turned and pointed at Izuku, and you stopped that, muttering, "If you're not going to take this seriously, then leave." "Excuse me," Izuku demanded. Any embarrassment or shyness that he exhibited at being called out disappeared. "Who the hell do you think you are, calling me out like that? I got just as much a right to be here as you do. And yet you continue to disgrace us with your indecent and poor attitude. Come on up here and I'll show you an indecent and poor attitude," Izuku snapped angrily. Whoa, calm down," President Mike called. Despite trying his best, he was grinning and barely containing his laughter. "Examinees number 7111 and 8256, please cool your jets. Any physical fighting will result in both of you being removed from the applicant pool." Izuku clenched his jaw as he sat down. "Sorry, sir," he called out, leaning back as the blonde at his side chuckles. "You're a spunky little extra, aren't you?" he asked as the question 7111 had asked was being answered. Izuku grunted, barely paying attention to the boy as they were all dismissed to the written exams. A few hours later, Izuku stood just outside the gates of his battle center, barely paying attention to the world around him as he tied his sweater around his waist, leaving him in sweats and a black tank top. "Hey!" The cheerful exclamation shook Izuku out of his thoughts as he flinched and brought his arms up as he whirled around. "Ready for a fight?" Whoa, friendly, the girl behind him squeaked out, holding her arms up in a placating manner. "Sorry, didn't mean to startle you." Izuku took a calming breath and relaxed. "It's all right, no harm," he said, laughing nervously. "I'm sorry, but I don't think I know you." "Oh, where are my manners?" She extended her hand, smiling happily. "Ochako Uraka at your service." Izuku hesitantly shook her hand. "Izuku Midoriya," he says. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I saw you outside when we were walking in. You tripped and I was going to use my quirk to stop you from falling because it's not good karma to fall before a big day. And of course it's rude to use a quirk on someone without their permission. But I assumed you'd be fine with not falling. But then you caught yourself and I was so surprised." And she trailed off as she stared at Izuku, his face a burning red in embarrassment at finding out someone saw him almost take a tumble. "Yuha. I'm guessing I didn't need to add that part, huh?" she asked sheepishly, blushing. "And not really," he stuttered, "but thank you either way." Uraka gave a relieved chuckle as Izuku scratched the back of his head. His eyes went slightly past her to where a familiar student was stalking towards them, arm moving robotically as he walked, only to stop at the glare Izuku gave him. "Go." Everyone looked up in surprise at President Mike's exclamation. "There's no warning in life, kids, now go." Without a second thought, Izuku suddenly propelled himself forward with his fire, sparing only a small glance back to make sure he didn't burn anyone as he flew across the city, cutting the fire off as he reached the far edge of the city, falling towards a grouping of several foe villains. As he landed in a roll, the voice of Iro seemed to echo in his mind as he popped up into a basic defensive position. "Remember the basics, Izuku. The more advanced katas are powerful, but it is not the mighty towers or weapons that keep the castle from falling, but its strong base." Simple and precise fireballs from his fists and legs quickly reduces the 7 one-pointers into slag. After each attack, Izuku returned to his defensive stance, despite how fast he was delivering the attacks. He quickly moves on to another grouping of 4 ones and 2 3. He spends the beginning dodging their attacks and lets out a pain grunt as a punch from one sends him flying, leaving him sprawled on his back as anger courses through him. Your fire is easily fueled by anger and aggression, but this makes you sloppy and prone to mistakes. Controlling your breathing will help keep a level mind and inner peace to effectively use your fire. Izuku lets out a puff of fire from his mouth before jumping up and attacking the group once more, letting his fire loose as he darts between them, moving from one group to the next until he stops at the end of the street, covered in sweat as he looks back at the destruction he had wrought. Over 20 bots were now practically molten puddles on the ground. "That's about 30 points," he breathes out as he leans against a building, looking towards the main street. A few other bots in his way. With a grunt, Izuku shoots off again, destroying 4 more 3-pointers with spinning kicks along the way. As he bursts into the main street, he destroys another 3-pointer with his fire breath before he pivots and punches, sending a steady stream of fire at a 2-pointer that had come after him from one of the side streets, its internally wiring melting as it comes to a slow stop in front of him. Izuku lets out a breath as he slowly turns around, his eyes widening as he sees a boy with purple hair get hit back by a 3-pointer. He shoots off and catches the boy before he could hit the concrete. "You good?" Izuku asks him. "Why, yeah." The boy stutters out, glaring at the 3-pointer as it charges them. "Can you take it?" Izuku asks as he jumps back, narrowly dodging a sloppy swipe by the vehicle. "Don't think so," the boy says, and without hesitation, Izuku attacks, his foot slamming into the bot's neck and unleashing golden flames into its head, making it fall over. Thanks, the boy says bitterly. Try going for their joints. Izuku says to him, making the boy look at him in surprise. Doesn't take much to fuck up their internal wiring. Clean kick to the joint should at least immobilize it for a follow-up. I didn't know that. The boy said, how do you? Kicks with no fire were taking these things out on the joints. You just gotta be in shape. He said, giving the boy a grin. Now get after it with that. Izuku blasted off again, crashing into similar situations as he went. He gave a helping hand where he could, running distractions on the bots to give a boy with weird balls on his head the chance to stick the bots down, or giving what appeared to be an invisible girl the chance to jump on the robot's back. There's more bots deeper into the city, don't just stay on this street, Izuku called. Uraraka looked back at him and smiled. Thanks for the advice, she thought as she darted down a side street, running into more bots. Within 2 minutes they were all scrap, that's 30. A few moments before, viewing room. Well, this is a very promising batch, isn't it? Nezu asks Toshinori as he looks at the different monitors. You can say that again, Toshinori says, watching as Bakugo eagerly attacks the robots. Some students will attempt to use their combat skills to gain as many points as they can, Nezu said conversationally as he looks from Bakugo's screen to one currently tracking Ada, while others use coolness under pressure to keep up. And others use both, Toshinori commented, watching Izuku Midoriya tear through the bots. Then narrowed his eyes as he watched the boy help out a few others. Are they allowed to help each other? It's not against the rules, and we do have rescue points to account. But I don't think advice and orders count, Nezu hums as he watches Midoriya help a concussed applicant to his feet and off to a side street where there were less bots, but his concern over the other applicants is worth noting. You're right, he's definitely trying to help everyone he can. Toshinori nodded. Izuku Midoriya, I ran into him when he was helping a non-profit clean up Mustafu Municipal Beach. They allowed him to sparingly use his quirk to cut apart larger trash so it'd be easier to haul off. He's a good kid. A good kid with a criminal record. A member of the school board scoffed. Give it time and he'll start attacking the other applicants when he realizes he doesn't have enough points. I think he's got enough points as is. Midnight laughs. He's destroyed over 34 bots, bringing in a current score of 50. Not as high as others, but definitely within the top 5% of scorers. Nezu agreed. Let's see how they react to the gimmick. Izuku stopped his attack on a one-pointer as the ground began to shake. He looked up alongside everyone else as the gigantic zero-pointer appeared. Jesus fuck everyone, get out of here, he shouted, directing a few slower applicants away as they all ran. That's supposed to be a small obstacle, he grumbled as he scanned the street, making sure everyone was out before he took off running. Oh, help someone. Izuku skids to a stop as he turns around once more, eyes zeroing in on a girl stuck in the rubble. Another girl passed out a few feet from her. God damn it. Izuku groaned as he ran towards her, passing by a confused Ada, who stops to watch him run, his eyes widening when he sees the girl stuck in rubble. Izuku gets to her side in a few seconds, sliding to a stop beside her as he grabs the rubble, pinning her. Uraraka, are you hurt anywhere else? Izuku asks, as he strains to push the rubble. And no, but I think my ankle is broken, and I'm at my limit. She struggled out, looking on the verge of throwing up. She was hit by rubble. I was trying to help her. Just relax, I'll get you both out of here. Izuku reassured her as he pushed, straining until Ada suddenly slid to his side, pushing the same piece of rubble until it finally lifted up enough for Uraraka to pull her leg out. Let's go, Ada said as he picked up Uraraka and the other girl and began running, Izuku on his tail, looking back as the zero-pointer locked onto them. We won't get to safety in time, Izuku called. We will if we keep running, Ada shouted back. Izuku slowed down as once again Iroh's voice echoed through his mind. This next form I show you not because I think you will be able to do it now, but because I know one day you will be able to. Keep running, Izuku commanded Ada as he planted his foot and pivoted around, beginning to move his hands through wide arcs, 2 fingers extended. Are you crazy? Ada cried. Just keep going, Izuku snapped as blue arcs of electricity began to spark at his fingers. To summon lightning is the highest achievement firebenders like us can achieve. It is the purest form of fire and requires the utmost control and precision. Izuku felt the power begin to swell inside of him. A white-hot burning sensation ran through his stomach, into his chest and down into his arms, threatening to overwhelm him as he neared the end of the kata. To use the lightning, your mind must be clear and your soul at peace. I believe you will one day reach this state, and it may very well happen when you save the lives of innocents. Izuku lets out a guttural scream as he jabs his 2 fingers out. Thunder roared as blue tendrils of lightning shot from his fingertips, slamming into the zero-pointer and traveling through its circuitry before exiting out its the area in blue light for a few moments until the last of the lightning left Izuku. Slowly the zero-pointer collapses back, crashing through several buildings as it comes to a groaning stop. Izuku grins as his knees start to give out. The timer sounds, indicating the end of the test. Who didn't think it would work, he mumbled as he fell forward in a dead faint. Midoriya, Uraraka cried out as Ida set her and the other girl down. I'll go check on him. Ada reassured her as he ran back to Izuku's side. Are you okay? Ada asked as he checked the boy over for injuries, only to find scrapes and scratches from the other robots. He's barely injured, so why is he unconscious? Must have overused his quirk. An aged voice said, making Ada turn around as Recovery Girl walked towards them. Poor dear, but that's what happens when you do something you're not ready for. She tapped something on her phone, making two medical bots roll forward with the stretcher. Now, while they're getting him settled, is anyone else injured? As she moved on to help Uraraka, Ada looked at Izuku once again. All that power, that conviction selflessly threw himself into saving her, and I hesitated. Truly must be a better student than I. In the viewing room, the teachers and various judges were going crazy. Nezu was cheering alongside All Might, who could not believe the display of power he had just witnessed. Aizawa frowned as he watched the bots take Izuku to Recovery Girl's office. Reckless problem child. He sighed, already thinking of the scolding he'd be giving Izuku on his non-existent self-preservation skills. And in the back, dressed in white and blue furs with a pair of skiers goggles hanging from his neck, Paku Agna, otherwise known as Pro Hero Whiplash, narrowed his eyes at the boy who reminded him of a certain villain he had faced years ago. A dragon of the West. Izuku sat in his living room, staring with dead eyes at his TV. He had been in a similar state for the last month since the entrance exam, going through his days in a zombie daze that unnerved most who passed him. Only a few of the heroes living at the apartment knew why he was the way he was. The aftermath of Izuku destroying the zero-pointer had Izuku waking up in Recovery Girl's office, with Recovery Girl simply ushering him off to get rest. Izuku wasn't able to find out much else on his chances, only that the results would be coming in the mail. What if I failed? How long would it take them to come and kick me out? Would Aizawa try and help me? Would he be the one to kick me out? What if they want to get me in trouble for destroying that zero-pointer? Izuku groaned as he let his head fall into his hands. I haven't even heard from Aizawa in the last month. What if he just doesn't want to break the bad news to me? He sighed as he slowly stood up and headed for the kitchen, intent on making himself a cup of instant ramen. The mail slot opening and closing stopped him. Ever so slowly he looked towards the front door and the letter that had just been pushed through. With a slight whimper he saw the UA symbol and picked the letter up. It's my results, he muttered, slowly going back to the couch and sitting down. Okay, just like a band-aid, he muttered before ripping the letter open, dropping a metallic disc onto the coffee table. It soon sparked to life, displaying a holographic projection of, I am here as a projection. Izuku jumped back at the exclamation. No way, All Might, he said in awe. Yes, it is I, All Might, here to tell you your score for the entrance exam. Why? You ask. Because starting this semester I will be a teacher at UA. Izuku gaped at the hologram. All Might, a teacher. Now where was I? Yes, Izuku Midoriya, you scored 52 hero points, which is more than enough to pass. But that wasn't good enough for a go-getter like UAC. Another part of the exam that is kept under wraps is the inclusion of rescue points. Points awarded for displaying heroic acts during the exam, and you did quite the heroic thing. The holograph changed to a video clip of him and Ida helping Uraraka and the other girl, as well as Izuku destroying the zero-pointer on his own to give them time to escape. Izukumidoriya, 64 rescue points. Tenya Ida, 15 rescue points. Ochakouraraka, 35 rescue points. Not only did you pass the exam, you shattered my own score of 113. Izuku let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Welcome, young Midoriya, to your hero academia. Izuku quickly wiped away a few tears gathering at the corners of his eyes. I did it. He whispered, I did it. He said louder, slowly standing up and walking to the window, then turning around and letting out a loud cheer. I did it, he whooped, running around his apartment like a crazy person. I can't believe I did it, oh sweet Agni, thank you. Woo, cheered and bounced around until he was too tired to continue, breathing heavily as he flopped back down on the couch, pulling out his phone as a notification rang out. A message, he mumbled as he opened his phone. Aizawa, come to the ramen stand. Izuku quickly jumped up and ran out of the apartment, taking the steps 3 at a time before taking off at a fast jog. Soon he was at the ramen stand, where Aizawa was sitting, 2 bowls of ramen already waiting. I already ordered, so go ahead and eat, Aizawa said as he slurped some noodles up. Yes sir, thank you, he said, taking a seat and digging into the ramen. I'm sorry I haven't been around, Aizawa says as he takes a sip of his drink. I've been bogged down by all the paperwork from the entrance exam. It's even cut into my patrol times, but congratulations on passing the exam. Thanks, Izuku responded around a mouthful of noodles before swallowing. I couldn't have done it without your help. HMPH, I doubt that kid. You're one of those who just doesn't know when to quit. He turned back to his noodles as Izuku grinned. Kind of a backhanded compliment, but I'll take it, he thought as he continued to eat. Both were quiet as they finished their ramen and began to walk back towards the apartments. I'm sure you already know this, but I'll be your homeroom teacher. Aizawa began as they mounted the steps. Don't think that means things will be smooth sailing. I don't believe in favoritism and will probably be pushing you harder than the others. Izuku stopped in front of his apartment, opening the door. I expect nothing less, he says with a grin as he looks at Aizawa. Don't worry, Dad, I'll make you proud. And with that, Izuku stepped into his apartment and closed the door, leaving Aizawa outside, stunned at what Izuku called him. With a small chuckle, Aizawa smiles as he puts his hand on the door. I know you won't, son, he said softly before moving on, hands in his pockets. Inside the apartment, Izuku had fallen to his knees in morbid embarrassment. I can't believe I just called him Dad, he lamented. He must be so confused. 1 week later, Izuku yawned as he slowly walked up to the principal's office. Why couldn't we have had this meeting after school? He grumbled to himself as he knocked on the door, putting his hands into his uniform pockets. Come in. Izuku stepped in, looking around the principal's office with curiosity. This isn't anything at all what I thought your office would look like. What did you think my office would look like, if you don't mind me asking? Nezu asked curiously, his kind smile not slipping an inch. Well, I don't know, maybe pictures of former students or more bookcase. For a second I thought you'd have a hamster wheel in here or something. The gymnasium has a perfectly good track. There's no need for exercise wheels, Nezu said jovially, making Izuku's sweat drop. Now, let's discuss the topics I have for you today. The first being the UA Sports Festival. As the top scoring student of the entrance exam, you will be expected to give the sportsman's oath at the beginning of the festival. This is not up for discussion, do you understand? Yes, sir, Izuku said dutifully, though lamenting the idea of standing up on live television and speaking. Now, another reason I wanted to talk with you is the potential backlash you will be facing while here, he said. Of course, we did not divulge your past to anyone not essential. But some of these essential personnel believe your attendance here to be a bad idea. Several Hero Association higher-ups suggested that your criminal record should have been enough grounds to disqualify your scores and keep you from attending. And while I threw their suggestions in the trash where they belong, I cannot stop the general public and even students from attempting to dissuade you from attending here. I want you to know that you have the support of not only myself, but the entire faculty. We want you to realize your goal, Midoriya, and we will never attempt to dissuade you. Do you understand? Yes, sir, thank you for the opportunity, Izuku said, bowing to the animal. You're quite welcome. Now, why don't you go ahead and head to class? I'm sure you'd like to interact with your fellow students before classes start. Hearing the dismissal, Izuku bowed again and walked out. As the door clicked shut, the bookcase at Nezu's side slowly opened up, revealing Paku, clad in his old hero uniform. You shouldn't let him continue here, Nezu, he says with a sneer of disdain. Everyone deserves a second chance. Paku, he is young and wishes to be a hero. He was trained by that man. He growled, I doubt his intentions are as noble and pure as you make them out to be. The Dragon of the West was inactive 20 years before we arrested him, and has shown no desire to continue his former work. It is very possible that Midoriya is sincere in his attempts to become a hero. Paku scoffed as he walked to the door. Believe what you want. I for one will be keeping close tabs on the boy. Izuku let out a small sigh of relief as he reached the Class 1A door. Wow, that's a huge door, he mumbled, popping his necks with a grunt. Alright, first day of school with people you don't know, let's do this. He pushes the door open, immediately flinching back when the open door reveals a shouting match. Get your feet off of that desk, it's disrespectful. Disrespectful to who? 4 Eyes. Izuku sighs as he watches the tall boy from the entrance exam berate the blonde-haired boy he had sat next to. I'm already regretting this. It's disrespectful to the upperclassmen who sat in these desks before us. Well, if they get offended by something as small as that, then they're not worth my time, are they? Ida bit his tongue as he straightened up. Look, we got off on the wrong foot. I am Tenya Ida. I graduated from Sumi private school. How, what do you think you're better than me? The blonde-haired boy demanded to know, jutting his chin out. I'll kill ya. Did you just threaten me, your schoolmate? Izuku slowly steps into the room, intent on just skirting around the two, only for his movement to be caught by both of them. Q, Ida says quietly, turning fully to him. Hello, I am Tenya Ida from Sumi. Yeah, I heard you when I opened the door. Izuku interrupted with an awkward wave before extending his hand. I'm Izuku Midoriya. It is an honor to meet you, Ida said, shaking his hand robotically. I must admit I misjudged you at the entrance exam. I thought you were just there to disrupt the other test takers, but you showed yourself to be a better student than I, with how you figured out the secret part of the exam. I didn't figure that out at all, Izuku said in confusion, letting go of Ida's hand. I just did what I thought was right. I promise, you're probably a much better student than me. I truly doubt that. So you're the one who stole the #1 spot from me? The blonde-haired boy snapped, cutting Ida off and jumping to his feet. You don't look so tough. Izuku turned his gaze to the boy, eyes narrowing slightly. Looks familiar. I didn't steal anything. Like everyone else, I just did my best to pass the exam. Not my fault you were easy to beat. A tick mark appeared on his forehead. You think you're better than me? I don't think I am, but if the entrance exam is anything to go off of. Izuku trailed off, smirking as the boy turned a deep shade of angry red. Before anything could come of this, the door opened once more. Oh hey Midoriya. Izuku turned around. Oh, hi Uraraka. I just knew you would pass, she cheered, giving a little hop as she pumped her fist in the air. The blonde-haired boy sat back down in his chair with an angry huff as Uraraka took over the conversation. You were so cool at the exam that there was just no way you'd fail. Oh thanks, I did my best, he said bashfully, scratching the back of his head. I'm sure, and thank you for saving me, she bowed. I didn't get the chance to say it since I had to leave before you woke up. Oh, don't worry about it, he said, waving her off. Anyone in my position would have done the same. That's where you're wrong, Midoriya. Ada interjected, arm making a chopping motion. The only reason I had turned back to help was because I saw you run to her aid. Had you not, I may have simply continued running. Yeah, and so many people ran past us when I was calling for help, Uraraka pouted. You were the only one who came back. Izuku stuttered, at a loss for what to do. Thankfully, he noticed a familiar yellow sleeping bag slowly inching towards the door. I think we should talk about this later, the teacher's here. Both Ada and Uraraka turned around and jumped at the yellow sleeping bag. You're all being irrational. Aizawa droned as he forced himself to stand, slurping on an apple juice box. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down. Wasting time as a hero is irrational. Now take your seats. Instantly everyone was in their seats. Next time I expect all of you to be in your seats and quiet before I enter the room. Aizawa said, stepping out of his sleeping bag, his hand clasping a plastic pack. My name is Shouta Aizawa and I'll be your homeroom teacher. Now, I want all of you to grab one of these uniforms and get changed. Then meet me out on the practice field. He held up the UA gym uniform before tossing the one in his hand to a boy on the front row. And be quick about it. But sir, what about orientation? Uraraka questioned. We aren't going, it's a waste of time. Aizawa drawled, UA prides itself on breaking tradition and allowing teachers to teach how they want. Hurry up and change, we don't have all day. Quickly everyone went to the locker rooms and changed into the workout clothes, all of them whispering and guessing what they were about to do. Izuku waited until everyone was changed before he changed himself, following after everyone to field, keeping in the back beside Uraraka. Aizawa counted all the students, satisfied when he marked everyone present. Alright, up until now you've all been pretty restricted on quirk usage, mostly being confined to certain days in PE or private tutors. Here at UA you'll be allowed to use your quirks whenever physical events take place, which means I need to know where you all are at in terms of quirk usage. To gauge this, you will be running the national fitness test with your quirks. He pulled a softball with a weird metal band on it out of his pocket. Bakugo. Aizawa said, what was your softball throw back in middle school? 75 meters give or take. Bakugo grumbled. Here, he tossed the ball to the boy. Do it again. Only this time around use your quirk. Anything goes so long as you don't leave the circle. Bakugo looked at the ball, then to his teacher. Anything goes, he questioned. Just don't leave the circle. All right, you asked for it. Bakugo stepped into the circle, then wound up the pitch, throwing the ball with a powerful explosion behind it and a screaming of the words die. Die. Several in the group questioned as they watched the ball soar. The state only focuses on how you can do without your quirks to make things fair. He says, I say this line of thinking is stupid and squashes potential. He holds his phone up, showing the distance. 705 meters, they exclaimed. Alright, this is what I'm talking about, a red-haired boy cheered. Using our quirks as much as we want. This is going to be fun, the pink-skinned girl shouted, making Izuku flinch. You foolish, thought as he broke out into a cold sweat at Aizawa's glare. Fun, he asked coldly. If you're here for fun, then you may as well leave now. All of you are here to be heroes, nothing more, nothing less. He took a step forward, but if it's fun you want, fine, we'll make a little competition out of this. The person who comes in last place today will be expelled. A shocked hush fell over the crowd at the proclamation. But that's not fair, Uraraka cried. We just got here. Fair, Aizawa scoffed. Do you think natural disasters and villain attacks are fair? No, life isn't fair. As heroes you must understand that and do what you can to mitigate the damage and go beyond plus ultra. Now enough talk, let's get this show on the road. Izuku breathed a sigh of relief. This was better than what he thought was going to happen. I thought we were headed to Hell Week. He thought as they walked to the track for the first event. Midoriya, Bakugo, you two are up for the 50-meter dash. Everyone else line up behind them. The two went to the starting line, most steering clear of being behind Bakugo. You guys may want to get back, Izuku said to the few behind him. Those who had been in his battle center had quickly retreated several steps, while those that hadn't looked confused as they took a few steps back. Izuku sighed. Good enough. He mumbled as he turned back and got into a running position as the boy counted down. 3, 2, 1, go. Bakugo took off with a powerful explosion, laughing as he went. His laughter stopped when he noticed Izuku keeping pace with him, arms trailing behind him as his fist spewed jet-like fire that propelled him across the finish line. 4.03 4.04. Bakugo glared at Izuku, who looked to where he had started. The 3 students who hadn't gotten back far enough were slightly singed. Sorry, he called them. You guys okay? Uraraka asked them worriedly, patting at a small flame that had caught on the tip of the red-haired boy's hair. That's a powerful quirk, he said faintly. Yeah, the invisible girl whispered, her face and arms outlined by soot before she shook it off. Enough talk, Aizawa called. Next two, you're up. Throughout the rest of the exercises, Izuku used his fire sparingly. In the standing long jump, he propelled himself a good 6 feet past the sand pit, getting beaten out by Bakugo and a girl with the frog quirk, and in the distance run he snagged third behind the same girl, and Ida, whose engines had smoked everyone. Most of the other tests he couldn't use his fire but still did decently. Finally, it was time for the softball throw. Izuku narrowed his eyes at the softball, unaware of the heterochromatic eyes watching him intently. With a deep breath, Izuku wound up the pitch and threw it. a jet of fire propelling the ball into the air, extinguishing as the ball arced into the sky. Without breaking a sweat, Izuku began to throw punches, sending several small fireballs into the air, each one hitting the ball on its way down and boosting it further with small explosions as the compact fire seemed to burst apart, creating mini suns in the sky for a few seconds until the ball hit the ground. 1,400.3 meters. Aizawa droned. Izuku grinned as he walked back to the group, several staring at him in surprise. Bakugo was still glaring at him. All right, Aizawa called, gaining everyone's attention as he lazily motions to an electronic board. Now that we're done, I feel like it'd be too tedious to tell you your scores individually, so here. He pressed a button and the rankings shot up onto the board. Those of you who ranked lower, recognize where you need to improve and work on it. Izuku nodded as he saw his third-place score. Good. He muttered. No. Everyone looked over to the short boy with purple balls on his head as he shakily pointed at his last-place placement. Oh, and no one's being expelled. What the entire class except for a few exclaimed. It was a logical deception, Aizawa said with a creepy smile. A ruse to make you work harder. Izuku narrowed his eyes as Yaoyorozu beside him began to tell everyone how she had already figured that out. No, it wasn't, he thought as Aizawa yawned. Had anyone taken this lightly, you would have expelled them without any hesitance. I guess we all exceeded your expectations. All right, class is dismissed. Everyone pick up a syllabus from the classroom before you leave. The class quickly disbanded. Izuku stayed, not wanting to change around everyone else. You did good today, Aizawa said, walking up to his young ward. I'll be busy tonight, so don't expect an after-school workout. Yes, sir, Izuku said, giving him a slight bow. Aizawa stared at him for a bit. Try not to stay out for too long tonight, son, he said, walking away, hands in his pockets. Izuku's eyes widened. Did he just coughed and shook his head? I'll be home before curfew, Dad, promise, Izuku called to Aizawa before heading towards the locker room. HMPH, problem child. Aizawa muttered with a small smile, stopping short as he rounded the corner and found Midnight waiting. So the adoption went through, huh? Midnight asked with a laugh. Should we change the roster to Izuku? Aizawa. Do it and I kill you in your sleep, Aizawa threatened. Now, I'm not into snuff films. She laughed, flanking him as he continued walking. But seriously, Midnight continued, arms behind her head. You two are practically father and son, so why not just make it official? He's already in the custody of UA. Putting unnecessary paperwork through now would take months. By the time it goes through, he'd probably be of age. True, but still, you could do it for the symbolism. Aizawa let out a long-suffering sigh as he glared at one of his oldest friends, eyes squinting slightly. Is that a hickey on your neck? Yep, she said cheerfully. It better not be from one of the upperclassmen. Nope, she sang, stopping slightly as they stopped at the teacher's lounge. All Might was walking out in his skeleton form, buttoning up his shirt and showing several love bites on his neck and chest before he fixed his collar and tie. Good evening, Aizawa, he greeted, his eyes resting on Midnight. Oh, Nimiri, hi, he said softly. Hey, Toshi, she winked, making the skeleton grin. It's good seeing you both, but I need to be going, running late for a meeting. He gave them a wave goodbye as he walked away. Aizawa turned his gaze to Midnight. You really can't help yourself, can you? Nope, Ms. Joke and Mount Lady will be jealous. I truly cannot be more disappointed in you. Oh, come on, you gotta give me props for that. Aizawa silently held his fist up, making Midnight cheer and bumps it with her own. Is this an actual relationship this time, or are you just getting your kicks in? Aizawa asked as they continued walking. According to him, it's too dangerous to have a real relationship, but that's fine for me. That just means we get to have fun. She licked her lips. He may be a skeleton, but you have no idea just how powerful he still is, especially when he... Save the talk for Mike. I really don't care beyond what I asked. Aizawa interrupted. You're no fun anymore. I never was. You used to never stop laughing when you were with Emmy. That was her quirk. Sure, Aizawa. Izuku chatted politely with Ida and Uraraka as they walked, mostly just answering their questions as they reached the station. I still don't think it was okay for Mr. Aizawa to use such deception against his own students, Ada stated. Heroes should always be truthful. Yeah, but he was right, life isn't fair, and this is a good example, Uraraka exclaimed. What do you think, Midoriya? I think we should count ourselves lucky he didn't expel anyone. Midoriya said truthfully, he's known around school to expel entire classes if they didn't meet his requirements. Wow, so he must really like us, Uraraka gushed as the train came into the station. Welp, this is my train. Mine as well, Ida said, pushing his glasses up. It was a pleasure talking with you, Midoriya. Have a good rest of the day. Yes, see ya, Midoriya, Uraraka cheered as they boarded the train. Izuku waved goodbye as the doors slid close and the train left. With a sigh, he sat down at one of the benches nearby. So, the annoyed voice of Bakugo said, making Izuku jump and look over to where the boy was leaning against a pillar, glaring at him. You don't remember me, do you? Sorry, I don't seem to recall us ever meeting before today, Izuku apologized sheepishly. If it makes you feel any better, I barely remember anyone I've met the last decade except for maybe 2 people. Bakugo sneers at this, glaring at the boy. Figures, you really are such a Deku. Izuku's eyes widen at the nickname. I haven't heard that name since he stared at Bakugo, slowly standing up. Kaken. So you'll be out late tonight. Izuku sighs as he holds the phone to his ear. Yeah, it's important, and I promise I'll head straight home as soon as I'm done. All right, I believe you. Just make sure you don't get into any trouble and be back before curfew. I won't, thanks Dad, Izuku said before hanging up, looking over to Deku, who was lounging on 3 seats, arm hanging on the window as he looked out of it. Izuku slowly sat down across from him, resting his elbows on his knees and clasping his hands in front of his mouth, staring down at the ground. Slowly the train pulled into the next station, stopping for a few moments to open the doors and allow anyone to board or leave the train. Neither boy moved as the doors slowly slid closed. Mom did everything to try and find you, Deku said softly, making Izuku look up. She was at the precinct every day pushing the cops for information on you, but since she wasn't family they wouldn't give her much information. You were lost in the system. At least that's what they told her. Old lady was depressed when she couldn't find you. He looked at Izuku, didn't understand it for the longest of times, but she said she owed Auntie and Ko to take care of you, and she failed. Izuku slowly let his hands fall forward. I'm having a hard time processing this. Izuku mumbled. Why, you don't think she would try and find you? I didn't think anyone would, he said quietly, making Deku raise an eyebrow. When I was in the foster system going from shitty home to shitty home, I dreamed of someone showing up and whisking me away, some long-lost relative or something. After so long I just figured I wasn't important enough for that fairy tale ending. She tried, Deku, said softly, sitting up fully as the train slowed once more. She really did. With a sigh he stood up as the doors opened. Let's go. Izuku nodded and followed the boy off the train. So who was that you were talking to? Deku asked as they made their way down the street. My dad, he said. Well, Mr. Aizawa, he explained upon seeing Bakugo's confusion. He's been my mentor and guardian for the last year, give or take. Huh, weird, Bakugo drawled, shoving his hands into his pockets. Our homeroom teacher is your dad. Think he'd go easy on us because of that? Izuku snorted. Yeah, right. You have no idea how terrified I was when Ashido said what we were doing was fun. He may be a good guy, but Dad really takes hero work and training seriously. Last time I said training was fun, he put me through a hell week. My limbs were so sore that I couldn't walk up the stairs. Harsh, wonder why he didn't do that today. He scoffed, instead of just trying to scare us with that bullshit expulsion line. Oh no, he was serious, Izuku said, making Bakugo look at him in surprise. Had we not taken the assessment seriously, he would have expelled last place and anyone else he thought wasn't up to snuff. Well, at least he's not full of hot air, Bakugo sighed, walking up the steps to his house, opening the door and looking back when he realized Izuku wasn't following. The green-haired teen was staring at the house, a mixture of emotions on his face. Come on, he says, we made it this far, don't wimp out. With a steadying breath Izuku stepped forward, following Bakugo into the house. It was as domestic as any other Izuku has been in. Pictures hanging up on the wall, little knickknacks lining shelves. Katsuki, is that woman's voice shouted from the nearby kitchen. Yeah, it's me, Bakugo yelled back. You brought your late, she snapped. Can it you, old hag? I have a surprise for you, he shouted back, grinning as his mother came into the hallway to berate him, only to stop short when she sees Izuku standing behind him, hands in his pockets and giving her an uneasy smile. Hey, Andy, he mumbled out as she took a small step forward. Izuku, she asks. Making the boy nod, slowly she walks forward, putting a hand on her son's shoulder as she walks past him. He easily steps back so his mother could see his friend. Carefully she puts her arms around him in a hug, tears streaming down her cheeks as Izuku returns the hug awkwardly. Your mother and I went to UA together, Mitsuki explained quietly as she poured tea for Izuku and Bakugo. They were all currently sitting in the kitchen, sitting around the small table after the emotional reunion. We'd been friends for years before that, and we were going for the hero course. Of course we didn't make it. She sighed as she sat down, picking up her own cup of tea. Your mother was so timid and shy, she just couldn't get the drive to pass the entrance exam. And I passed the exam, but got moved to general studies after the sports festival. Apparently my attitude wasn't appreciated by the class, and losing out in the first round didn't help my chances either. She looked up, smiling wistfully as she thought of old memories. But that was fine, we were still close, and we remained close up until she met Hisashi. My father, Izuku mutters. No love in his voice for the man who helped bring him into the world. He was a doting boyfriend, and later on a picture-perfect husband and father, but I could never shake the feeling that there was something off. She shook her head. Your mother refused to listen to me. One of the downsides of falling in love is that you're blind to any faults your partner may have. Got into a big fight our last year, and while we were still friends we weren't as close as we used to be. She looks down into her tea. That changed when you were born. She began to confide in me again, telling me how Hisashi was so obsessed with you gaining a powerful quirk and becoming a hero. He wanted you to fulfill your dream. What father wouldn't? But he didn't want you to achieve it for your own sake. He wanted to ride on the success you could potentially gain, the wealth and prestige, and the doctors said you were quirkless. He was furious. I didn't hear from your mother for a few weeks, and when I finally got a hold of her she was talking about leaving him. She looked up. The night she died was the night she was planning to go. I was supposed to be there, and I tried, but Katsuki was sick and she sniffled as she began to cry once more. Izuku stood and moved to her side, giving her an awkward comforting hug. I don't blame you, He whispered, I can't blame you knowing you did what you could to find me. I don't blame you. Or my mom. The only person I blame is that man for what he did, and Agni willing he's burning in hell. One can only hope. Bakugo agrees. Mitsuki wiped her tears away. Okay, that's enough crying, she says, patting Izuku's arm as he slowly pulls away. Thank you, Izuku. I needed that. No, why don't you tell me about how your life's been? I want to know everything. So Izuku told her about his childhood, omitting some parts that he thought she didn't need to know, speaking fondly about his time with Uncle and Aizawa, trying to gloss over his time in the JDC but begrudgingly telling her when she fixes him with a glare that only a mother could pull off. Soon they're eating the dinner she had made and laughing at some stories that Izuku had from his time running the streets, as well as Mitsuki's own stories from when she and Inko were younger. So your mother is slowly lowering me to the ground, Mitsuki started, and everything's going fine. We thought we'd be able to get down and out the front gate before the teacher even knew we were gone. Well, we didn't account on the fact that the teacher wouldn't be out of the room for long. He bursts through the door and demands to know where I am. This of course breaks your mother's concentration, and I would have fallen to my death or injury if I hadn't have latched onto the ledge. Bakugo burst out laughing as Izuku chuckled. So here I am, hanging on this ledge with 3 stories underneath me, and I can hear the stupidest conversation I've ever heard going on above. She laughed as she began mimicking Inko and the teacher. Where's Mitsuki? Oh, I think she went to the bathroom. Well then, how come I didn't see her? She runs really fast. She shook her head. Meanwhile, I'm doing all I can to haul myself up to look into the window. And when I did, who do I see but Nimiri Kayama? Midnight, Izuku exclaimed. The very same, she confirmed. She opens the window. Doesn't help me up. She leans out and says, so, you just hanging out? They all burst out laughing as Mitsuki tries to continue. And I say, well, isn't it obvious that I've fallen for you? And she got so flustered that she almost fell out of the window herself. I can't imagine Midnight getting flustered, Izuku says as Bakugo laughs. Oh, back then she liked to think she was so suave and cool. She snorted, but you even looked at her for too long and she would get flustered. She sighed. She got me into that room and I thought I was in the clear, when who walks in but Hisashi Yamada, the loudmouth of UA. He pops into the room and immediately screams, yo Mitsuki, what are you doing here? And I get caught. The 2 boys laughed again as Mitsuki smiled. I got 3 more weeks of detention, and Inko got 2 for aiding and abetting. Made it sound like I was a fucking criminal. Were you? Izuku asked with a grin. I can neither confirm nor deny that with Katsuki here, she drawled as Bakugo rolled his eyes. Izuku chuckled as he checked his watch. I gotta get going. I'm supposed to be home before curfew. Well, don't be a stranger, Mitsuki said as she stood up alongside her son, walking with them to the front door. I expect you to be coming around here at least once a week. I promise to drop in as much as I can, he said. Goodbye, Aunt Mitsuki. She waved him off as Bakugo walked alongside him. Walk you to the train, he said gruffly, hands in his pockets. Your mom's cool, Izuku said. HMPH, old hag likes to talk about her glory days, he grumbled, though a small fond smile made its way onto his lips. You should hear the story about the time she met my old man. I'll keep that in mind, he chuckled, stepping onto the platform as the train pulled into the station. Thank you for this, Kaken, I needed it. Don't mention it, nerd. He scoffs. Just so you know, this doesn't change a thing. I'm gonna beat you and become number 1 in our class. Just because the old hag has a soft spot for you doesn't mean I'm gonna hold back. All right, Izuku accepted. Then you better understand that I won't make that easy for you. He stepped onto the train and turned around, giving him a challenging smirk. Good luck, number 2. The doors closed as Bakugo began to scream at him. Don't think you can get all cocky, Deku, I'll kill ya. Izuku sighed happily as he sat down, looking out the window with a smile on his face. Things are looking up, Midoriya, he asked himself as the train sped along. Hours earlier, Aizawa hung up his phone and walked back over to where Paku was sitting, looking down at a case file. You know you didn't need to come with me, right? Aizawa asked as he sat down next to him. This isn't even an actual case, I'm just following up on some things. I know, but anything that involves the Dragon of the West concerns me. Paku sniffed, closing the file with a snap. I just want to get the full picture of Midoriya's time with him, Aizawa grumbled. And I want to find out what he had planned for the boy. Aizawa sighed as the door buzzed open and 2 armed guards walked out. This way, erase your head, Whiplash, one said, beckoning the 2 heroes forward. They walked in silence as they were escorted down narrow hallways, blank, solid steel doors lining the walls. This place is very different from the JDC, or even the municipal jail. Tartarus is where they house the worst of the worst. Paku sniffed disdainfully. Its security is heightened and the guards, armed. I don't think I need to tell you what would happen if it were anything less. No, you don't, Aizawa says as the guards stop at one of the doors. He's a minimum security threat, one of them stated, but still, don't hand him anything. And keep your limbs clear of the bars. Got it, Erasure said as the door slid open, revealing a room with bars cutting it in half. On the other side of the bars sat an old man. His gray hair was long with a bald spot at the front. It was shaggy and unkempt just like the beard upon his face. He wore a simple prison uniform that was stretched by his rotund figure. Currently he was seated cross-legged atop a simple mat, a hot cup of tea in his hands. His eyes were closed as he sipped the tea, slowly lowering it as he opened his golden eyes and looked at the two men. Eraserhead Whiplash, what a pleasant surprise, he said jovially, appearing to be genuine in his happiness to see them. Have a seat. I'm sorry there's no chairs in here, but the mats are mostly comfortable. Paku sneers and remains standing. While Aizawa sits down across from Iro, Mr. Soran he starts, only to stop as Iro laughs. Please, I believe we are all friends here mostly. He adds, giving Paku a side glance, call me uncle, everyone does. Aizawa hesitates for a moment. Uncle, he starts carefully, I'm here to speak with you about Izuku Midoriya. Iro's jovial expression falls into one of concern. Has something happened to the boy, he asks worriedly, is he alright? He's doing just fine. Aizawa assures the man, but I wanted to talk with you about his time living in your foster home. Ah, Iro sighs with a reminiscent smile. Those were good days. He was the oldest child living there. The others, when there were others, were 5 or younger, so we connected a little better than the younger ones. He set his tea down on the floor and settled his hands into his lap. He was an angry, sad boy when he came into my care. I did not know the exact specifics of his former home until he told me himself, but I knew he needed guidance. So I slowly earned his trust and taught him what I could about life. He was a fast learner, and soaked up all the lessons I could give him. Though now that I think about it, Iro wondered as Hen put a finger to his chin. The lessons with the ladies never seemed to stick. What were your plans for the boy? Paku interrupted, ignoring Aizawa's warning glare as he stepped forward. My plans for him, well, I had thought to maybe adopt him and have him stay with me permanently. A boy needs a stable home to be able to achieve his dreams and flourish. So you're a humanitarian now. Paku scoffed, you expect me to believe you taught this boy your fighting style to give him a better life. I taught him the art of firebending to help him control his anger and focus his mind. Iro said evenly, closing his eyes as he crossed his arms. Those of us with the inner fires of Agni are hot-tempered and quick to lash out. While I will admit that these forms can be used for battle, they offer the secondary purpose of containing that anger and focusing it into something productive. Were you trying to teach Izuku Midoriya and guide him to restart the Caldera Syndicate? Paku demanded to know. Iro opened his eyes, looking at Paku in confusion. Why would I want to do that? I'm the one who helped dismantle the syndicate. Aizawa's eyes widened as Paku spluttered. I see you are confused. He sighed, not many know this after all, but after the death of my son, Lu-Ten, I quit the syndicate to find inner peace, and achieved it after 4 long years housed in the temples of the Shaolin monks. It is they who helped me refine my firebending and taught me how to control that fire, instead of letting it control me. When I returned to Japan, I put in an anonymous tip and had my brother and his cohorts arrested. He gives them a sad smile. I know that I have done a lot of bad in my life, and I know there is nothing I can do to fully redeem myself, but I have put no more evil in the last 20 years. I took Izuku in and trained him because he reminded me of my deceased son. I did what I could to help him out of that dark part of his life, and hope that he continues upon the right path even while I am in here. Paku scoffed at this and turned away from the man when Aizawa glared at him once more. He is continuing on the right path, Aizawa said. He enrolled into UA, and achieved the highest score in the school's history. Iro grins as he puffs out his chest. I taught him everything he knows. Is he doing well in the school? The first day was today, but from what I've seen he will go very far as a hero. You have no idea how much it warms my heart to hear this. If you see him, please tell him I am proud of him. I will. A knock at the door made Aizawa stand. Thank you for your time, uncle. Hopefully I will be able to visit again soon. And I'll talk with the administrator, see what we can do about getting you some visitation hours so you can see Izuku. That would be wonderful. Iro sighs, you have a good day, Eraserhead. You too, Whiplash. Paku just sneers as he walks out. Aizawa gives him a small bow before following, the guards quickly flanking them as they walk out. Paku stays silent until they're out of Tartarus. I don't trust that man. He muttered, I know he is up to something, and it all centers around Midoriya. Midoriya has shown no signs of following Soren's younger self into a life of crime. Aizawa says sharply, don't you mean uncle? He sneers. Aizawa took a calming breath. Midoriya is a model student with a bright future. He states, glaring at the man, before walking towards his car. Give him the benefit of the doubt. Paku narrows his eyes. Are you sure your feelings for the boy haven't blinded you to his faults? He asked, making Aizawa stop. You're close with the boy. You've trained him. How do you know he's not just playing you? Aizawa turned his head slightly, giving the man a measured glance. How do you know your hatred for Iro hasn't blinded you to his good qualities? He asked, looking away. He's still young, Paku, and deserves better. With that, Aizawa stepped into his car, leaving Paku standing alone in the empty parking lot, looking down with narrowed eyes. Izuku trudged into class, yawning as he gave a half-hearted wave to Uraraka. Hiya Midoriya, she greeted. You look tired. Train was stopped for 2 hours last night when I tried to head home. He mumbled as he sat down in his chair. I didn't get to sleep until 1. That's bad luck, she winced. Will you be alright? I'll be fine, he said, giving her a tired smile. The conversation ended as more people began walking in. Bakugo was one of the last, giving Izuku a small nod before sitting down in front of him. Soon classes started, and Izuku did his best to stay awake. During math he ended up dozing off, to be awakened by a less than impressed ectoplasm. Thankfully it was soon the afternoon, and the foundational hero class was guaranteed to wake him up. I am coming through the door like a hero, All Might exclaimed, entering the room in a spectacular fashion as his class began to gush. It's All Might, Kirishima exclaimed. Wicked cool, Kaminari agreed. Isn't that his Silver Age costume? Welcome young heroes to the Foundational Hero class, the pro hero boomed, posing with his fists on his hips. In this class you will learn the fundamentals of what it takes to become a hero. And today's lesson, battle training. Instantly Izuku and Bakugo sat up a little straighter. You're going down today, Deku, Bakugo laughed. This kind of training is what I live for. Whatever you say. Second place, Izuku smirked as Bakugo began to angrily splutter. Looks like we already have some eager players in the room. Don't worry young men, you'll get your chance to shine. All Might laughed. Of course one part of being a hero is the uniform. He pulled a remote out and clicked a button, making 2 rows of suitcases slide out of the wall. Get changed and meet me at training ground Beta. Soon everyone was grabbing their uniforms and heading towards the locker rooms. Only Izuku remained seated, waiting until everyone was out before grabbing his costume. Young Midoriya, head to the locker room. You don't have much time. All Might said to the young man. I was going to change here, All Might. Izuku said respectfully, opening the case and looking inside. I don't think that's allowed, young man. All Might began uncertainly. We did it yesterday, please, All Might. All Might sighed, then nodded. I'll allow it for today, but next time you'll have to change out with the others, understood? Yes, sir, Izuku said, nodding his head to the man. With that, All Might walked out, leaving Izuku to change out of his uniform, revealing the scars of his childhood. Many scars, especially those on his arms, were the result of training. Small uneven scars from tumbling through all kinds of terrain, and burn scars from when he had practiced with his quirk. Others were from the various fights he had gotten into, wounds from knives, and people who had a ballistic-type quirks. But on his back were wounds of a different kind, lacerations made by a whip and switch, leaving long scars along the left side of his back. The kanji for demon and monster had been carved into his shoulder blade, the clean lines speaking of someone who had done so many times before, and on his rib cage, just under his arm, a brand had been pressed into his body, depicting the Christian cross. Izuku sighed as he pulled his costume out, staring at the simple green-colored robes. He had taken inspiration from Uncle and based his costume on the robes that the Shaolin monks wore. Quickly he put the robes on and looked down. His right arm and left shoulder and pectoral were uncovered, while his left side was completely covered, keeping his more horrendous scars from being seen. His ankles were wrapped tightly with a lighter shade of green cloth, which also covered part of the pointed black boots on his feet. With a roll of his shoulders, Izuku gathered up his clothes and headed for the locker room, wincing when he entered and noticed that there were still quite a few students still changing. Already changed? Kirishima asked in surprise. Yeah, Izuku answered, placing his clothes into one of the lockers. He must be shy about changing around other guys. Mina snickered, shrinking when Izuku fixed a glare on him. Cool costume though, Kaminari said, looking Izuku over. Man, look at those scars. Must have been a rough training course for you, huh? Yeah, training. Izuku mumbled, walking towards the exit. See you guys out there. Later Midoriya, Kirishima called. Man, guy's kinda cold, ain't he? He asked the others after Izuku left. Not like we actually know him. Ajiro pointed out, I mean we barely know each other as it is. True, but you'd think he'd open up more since we're all gonna be around each other for the next few years. Give him time. Sato said, pulling the cowl of his uniform over his head. I'm sure that's all he needs. Out on the training ground, Izuku and Bakugo were the first to be waiting alongside Ada. Nice pajamas, hothead. Bakugo snickered. Says the guy who put giant tacky grenades on his arms and honestly thought it made him look cool. Izuku shot back with a grin. Oh, just wait, these got a surprise in them. Bakugo said with a malicious smirk. You two are strange. Ada commented, but I'm assuming all this talk is simply just another form of your rivalry. Got it in one, Ada. Izuku said, looking the boy up and down. Nice costume, by the way. Thank you, it's designed to be much more aerodynamic, though I could have done without these decorational pipes, he said, tapping on said pipes that were jutting out from his stomach. Adds character, Izuku said as more of their classmates appeared. Wow, you guys look so cool, Uraraka gushed as she walked over. I wish I had been more specific in my costume. This suit is skin tight, she whined, wiggling from side to side. Izuku blushed and averted his eyes alongside Ada, while Bakugo continued to stare at her. It won't snag on anything if it's tight, Bakugo pointed out, doing his best to keep his gaze firmly on her face. Don't complain, round face. Round face, she asked, looking slightly insulted. Before anything else could be said, All Might landed in front of them. Look at all of you, he boomed. It's important to look the part, and right now. You all look so cool, he laughed before posing once more. Now it's time to see if your skills match up. I hope you're prepared, you zygotes. All Might Sensei, Ada called with a raised hand. This area is much like the combat areas we were in during the entrance exam. Will we be conducting urban battles? Sort of. Today you'll be conducting an indoor battle scenario. But what about basic training? Tsu asked curiously. The best teacher is experience. Having said that, today you'll be going up against your own classmates. No easily defeated mindless robots here. Isn't that dangerous? Uraraka fretted. How bad can I hurt the other team? Bakugo asked. Doesn't my cape look magnifique? Yama purred. Let me explain, All Might exclaimed, before pulling a small handbook out. Alright, today's battle scenario is this: a team of villains have procured a weapon of mass destruction, and the heroes have to stop them. Heroes win this exercise by either securing the weapon, or capturing all the villains, while the villains win if they manage to keep the weapon out of hero hands or capture the heroes. And to decide the teams, he pulls out a simple box. You will be drawing lots. But sir, wouldn't it make more sense to pair us up yourself? Ida asked. Think about it, Ada, Izuku started before All Might could say anything. A lot of times heroes have to partner with whoever is on scene. Right, you are young Midoriya. Now everyone line up and grab one piece of paper out of the box. Soon everyone pulled the paper and paired up. Izuku smirked as Uraraka walked over to him. Looks like we're partners, she cheered. Yep, Izuku grinned. Alright, now that you've formed your teams, it's time to draw for the first matchup, which will be— he reached into two boxes that were now beside him, pulling out little white balls with letters on them. Team A versus Team D. Bakugo grinned. Finally he laughed, giving Izuku a side glance as the other boy chuckled. Hey Bakugo, look, I'm on Team A, second place for you again. Don't think you being on Team A has anything to do with this fight, Deku. Team A will be the heroes, Team D, you're the villains, so go into the building. You all have 15 minutes to plan for the exercise. Everyone else, follow me to the observation deck. I can barely make sense of these blueprints. Izuku sighed, looking over the several sheets of paper that All Might had given them. I think it's showing the first few floors being a mix of twisting hallways and small rooms. Yep, Uraraka chirped, but after the third floor the hallways disappear, and you wind up with two floors that are simply full-sized rooms, with another winding hallways floor at the very top. Coolier quirk is zero gravity, right? Yep. Okay, so I think we should float up and enter into the third floor. I doubt they're gonna put the bomb on any of the hallway floors, Izuku said, especially with Ida's quirk. Sounds about right, she agreed. So what's the plan beyond that? If Bakugo's going to do what I think, then he's gonna come straight for me, Izuku said, rolling the plans up. If that's the case, then as soon as he engages, I want you to slip away and head for the bomb room. What if it's Ida? Then we're kinda screwed since he's faster than my flames. Izuku sighed, but I'm almost certain that Bakugo will be coming for us. Alright then, let's get into position. As soon as we get the go-ahead, I'm gonna go down and blast Deku and round face out the building, Bakugo stated to Ida. Don't you think I would be better off patrolling? Ida inquired. I'm faster. And you don't have very good mobility, Bakugo interrupted. You can't make sharp turns, and Deku will take advantage of that. I can easily wipe the floor with that nerd. Got it. Start. Instantly Bakugo shot out of the room, leaving Ida behind. Wait, shouldn't we have an actual plan? We're supposed to be partners. Izuku and Uraraka quietly stepped through the window, Izuku already in a defensive stance as he looked around. Infiltration success, Uraraka quietly cheered. Remember the plan, Izuku whispered as they began walking down the hall. Stairs should be right around this corner. Maybe we should— Uraraka gasped in surprise as she stumbled slightly. Izuku steadied her, then caught movement out the corner of his eyes. Pushing Uraraka away, he quickly fell back, easily dodging the explosion Bakugo sent his way. Uraraka, move, he commanded, rolling forward to her side as he sent several fireballs at Bakugo, who dodged as best he could. With a sweeping wave of his arm, Izuku erected a wall of fire between the two, absorbing an explosion. Go. Uraraka took off up the stairs as Izuku dropped the wall of fire, staring Bakugo down in a low defensive stance. I told you that you wouldn't be on the top forever, Deku. Bakugo sneered, stalking towards his friend, rival. Come on, Bakugo, a sneak attack is so not manly, Kirishima whined. Manly or not, it's still a viable strategy, and don't forget young Bakugo is in the role of the villain, All Might boomed. Did you see those reflexes on Izuku though? Kaminari asked. Dude's skilled. His style is heavily influenced by Northern Shaolin Kung Fu. Ajiro commented, from what I can tell it's several different styles, but well-rounded altogether. Okay, but was it really smart to split up? Mina piped up. Wouldn't they be better off trying to take Bakugo down together? Midoriya has already shown some form of control over fire that's not his. Todoroki said plainly, Bakugo's explosions may not be full fire, but it would stand to reason that Izuku could lessen their effects. Unless he has a limit. Yaoyorozu said. He may not be able to control a certain amount of fire, or be able to produce fire over a certain temperature. He might not. Todoroki countered, these last 2 days Midoriya has consistently produced fire without any adverse. My father who'll overheat after using his quirk too much. Couldn't he just use that lightning move Uraraka told us about? Mina asked. I think that'd be easier than actually fighting. Young Midoriya was warned against using that attack. All Might said, gaining his students' attention. It's too powerful and could lead to serious injury in this scenario. Izuku grunted as he pressed the attack, quick jabs and kicks sending fire at Bakugo, who easily dodged the fire and sent his own explosions back at Izuku. Izuku weaved between the explosions with nimble footwork, eyes widening when Bakugo suddenly appeared in front of him. Game over, Deku, Bakugo snarled, only to growl in anger when Izuku easily blocked his attack, producing flaming daggers from his hands and slashing at Bakugo. The two traded glancing blows until Bakugo kicked Izuku back, grinning as one of his gauntlets flashed red. It's ready. What's ready? Izuku questioned, tense and ready to counter anything Bakugo said after him. You were making fun of these gauntlets before we started. Bakugo sneered, but if those nerds in the support department made these right, then they've been storing up my sweat for one big explosion. He leveled the gauntlet at Izuku, who tensed further as a small pin sprang out. No, Bakugo, don't pull that pin, you could kill him. He won't die so long as he dodges. Bakugo laughed as he pulled the pin and sent a powerful explosion at Izuku, who quickly conjured a shield of fire in front of him, only for his defense to be overwhelmed, sending him flying back as the explosion tore through the side of the building. What the hell was that? Ada questioned, broken from his monologue as the building shook. Uraraka quickly turned on her radio. Izuku, what happened? She called over the radio. Izuku. Young Midoriya, are you alright? Midoriya, come in. All Might called into the radio as Kirishima shook his head. Man, that was powerful. There's no way Midoriya is walking away from that without an injury. Kirishima worried. Why would Bakugo even use that? He could have killed him, Kaminari exclaimed. Put the rest of the building in danger too. What if he had hit a load-bearing wall? Yaoyorozu fretted. I don't think he cares so long as he wins, Su said bluntly. He had faith that Izuku would be able to counter the explosion, Shoto said. At the very least he should be safe from any severe burns, but that's not what he should be worried about. That concussive force in such a small space would still injure Midoriya. Bakugo, use those gauntlets again and your disqualified attacks destroy the strongholds and risk damage to the weapon you're supposed to be protecting. Are you shitting me? Fine. Hey, shitty Deku, you give up. A high-pitched ringing echoed in Izuku's ears as he slowly opened his eyes, finding himself lying face down on the ground. With a groan he forced himself up to a standing position, his costume slightly tattered and soot-covered, but none the worse for wear. Slowly he turned to look at Bakugo, frowning in confusion as the boy seemed to be yelling at him, his voice sounding muffled and far away. The ringing died down and he was finally beginning to hear what was being said. Up, Deku, submit. Young Midoriya, are you alright? Stay still, I'm going to stop the fight. Fine, Izuku slurred out. Don't stop the fight. You don't sound too well, Midoriya, Uraraka said worriedly over the radio. Maybe you should listen to All Might. I said don't stop the fight, Izuku ordered, getting into his stance as Bakugo exploded towards him. You need to learn to stay down, Deku, Bakugo snarled, fist cocked back. But a sweeping kick from Izuku sends him crashing down, tumbling across the ground. His eyes widened as he quickly rolls away as Izuku was suddenly jumping towards him, stomping his foot down where he had been before, sending more fire his way. Izuku gave him no breathing room as he pressed the attack, a righteous fury alight in his eyes as he allowed his anger to fuel his fire. Bakugo used his explosions to propel himself away from Izuku, flying backwards up the stairs and into the larger fourth-floor room. Izuku hot on his heels and forced back into a defensive position as Bakugo begins to use the extra space to his advantage, dancing around Izuku and hitting him with ranged attacks before moving again. Frustrated, Izuku lets a puff of fire escape his mouth before he suddenly rolls forward, spinning around on his shoulders and twisting his hips, sending flames spiraling out around him as he spun, bathing the room in fire and clipping Bakugo in the side, sending him tumbling to the ground as Izuku springs back to his feet, a flick of his wrist sending a flaming whip at his opponent. The fire warmed to the touch as it lashed towards Bakugo's neck. Bakugo narrowly avoids the whip and raises his arm, eyes widening as he sees a crack in his gauntlet, already leaking nitroglycerin as Izuku sends his whip forward again. Deku, wait, Bakugo started, his warning coming too late as the flames touched the liquid, and an explosion shook the very foundation of the building. As the building shakes, it gives Uraraka the edge she needed to finally grab onto the bomb. I got it, she cheered as All Might proclaimed the heroes the winners. Uraraka celebrated as Ida walked towards her, pulling his helmet on. Congratulations, he said warmly, you did good today. We need medical bots to the 4th floor, stat. Oh no, Uraraka whispered as she and Ida shared a look before running towards the stairs, thundering down them in time to see the state of their friends. Both were barely conscious on the ground. Izuku was lying back against the wall, uniform covered in dark soot, and several new lacerations and cuts from the now destroyed gauntlet. Bakugo himself was lying face down on the floor, covered in burns and weakly coughing as he forced himself to crawl towards Izuku. Deku, he rasped out. Deku, goddammit, Izuku, answer me, you idiot, he snapped, body beginning to tremble at the sight of Izuku, unmoving and eyes closed. I tried to warn you, you dipshit, I tried, fuck. Izuku coughed, making Bakugo stop. I didn't know what you were yelling, Izuku whispered hoarsely, cracking an eye open to glare at Bakugo. Ears were still fucked from the first explosion. He gave a harsh cough. You're lucky your gear kept you from 3rd-degree burns. Bakugo let his body collapse, giving a weak chuckle. Yeah, guess I'm lucky, who fuck me, I'm tired, he groaned as he forced himself to roll over onto his back, staring at the ceiling as Uraraka and Ida began to fuss over them. You still ain't shit, Deku. How I know, Kakin. Soon the medical bots arrived and loaded the two onto stretchers, Ada and Uraraka accompanying them to Recovery Girl. You got lucky. The older woman chided as she kissed Bakugo, making the young man sigh in relief as his burns disappeared. Minor burns and exhaustion for you, Bakugo. But Midoriya, those lacerations won't be healing completely. She tutted as she kissed Izuku, who grimaced in discomfort as skin knitted itself back together. Soon the worst of his wounds were healed, leaving behind a fresh new scar that started at the left corner of his jaw and went up to his nose. That's a downer. Izuku sighed, wincing when the old lady and Uraraka glared at him. What, it's not like I intended for that grenade to blow up. Yeah, Bakugo agreed, don't even know how the leak happened. Be that as it may, I want you two to understand the severity of these wounds. You could have easily lost a limb from this. But we didn't. Izuku muttered, wincing as Recovery Girl smacked him on the back of the head. Okay, oh. She's right, Midoriya, Ada chimed in. You shouldn't take this so lightly. Yeah, Uraraka echoed. Izuku and Bakugo shared a look. We'll be more careful in the future. Izuku said. Yeah, what the nerd said. Bakugo scoffed, cringing as Recovery Girl smacked him as well. You old hag, I agreed. Smack. Don't disrespect me, Sonny, Recovery Girl fumed as Bakugo rubbed his head. Now, you two should be fine to head back to class. Thanks, Recovery Girl. Izuku said, standing and walking towards the door. Bakugo grumbled as he followed his friend with Ida and Uraraka bringing up the rear. That fight was intense. Uraraka sighed, bumping into Bakugo's side, making the boy tense. Oh, sorry, did that hurt? No, he said defensively, making Uraraka giggle nervously. You two truly are tenacious if you're able to walk away from injuries like that. Ada commended them both. I've had worse. They chorused, making them glare at each other. Quit copying me, they chorused again, making tick marks appear. You're copying me, Deku, just like when we were younger. Like I'd want to copy you second place. You want to go again, nerd. Uraraka and Ada sweat dropped as the two bickered all the way until they entered the observation deck. Midoriya, Bakugo, Kirishima shouted, running up to the two. That was seriously an epic fight. You guys had us on the edge of the seats the entire time. Yeah, Mina gushed, you guys were awesome. Honestly thought he had you for a second there, Bakugo. Zero said, but you were matching him blow for blow. And you both looked awesome, Mina shouted again. You both looked fabulous, Aoyama started, only to be to the side by Mina. You guys looked so awesome, Ash exclaimed. All Might chuckled as he watched the class interact. Alright students, let's continue on with the lesson, he called, making them settle down. The MVP for that last match was Ida Tenya. Can anyone tell me why? While Yaoyorozu explained why Ida was the MVP, Izuku found a spot to sit down, wincing slightly as he did. You did good out there, Todoroki said stoically, making Izuku jump, having not realized the boy was beside him. Thanks, he said sheepishly. All honestly, I'm surprised things didn't turn out badly. It usually does with fire, Todoroki said, walking away before Izuku could say anything. Guess he's had bad experiences, Izuku mumbled, his hand unconsciously going to a small burn he had on his forearm. You okay, Midoriya? Ada asked him as he walked over with Uraraka and Bakugo. Fine, tired, Izuku said with a strained smile. Who's up next? Team B versus Team A, Uraraka said, kinda worried. Todoroki gives off a very indifferent vibe. He's definitely confident. Bakugo sneered, looking at the monitors. Smug, icy hot bastard. Insulting another student is unbecoming of a hero, Ida started. Can it 4 eyes? Bakugo barked. 4 eyes. Enough, Izuku commanded, making both boys look at their irritated friend sitting against the wall. Sheesh, my concussion isn't even fully healed and you're both yelling right beside me. Apologies, Midoriya, Ida said with a slight bow. Wuss. Bakugo scoffed, but didn't try and restart the fight as the next battle began. Izuku watched as Shoji stepped forward and began monitoring the building with his other arms. There was a pause as Shoji informed Todoroki of something. Then Shoji left the building. What are you doing? Izuku muttered, eyes narrowing when Todoroki froze the entire building. Memories of unrelenting cold flashed through his mind and he shivered before looking over to Bakugo as everyone gaped, and Bakugo met his stare. Both had recognized the display of power and its message. Holy Kaminari started. That's overkill, Jiro muttered. He's completely immobilized, Ajiro and Hagakure, Mina shouted. Not true. Izuku spoke up, getting everyone's attention. His plan is flawed, he only froze their feet. So if he gets too close to one of them they may be able to get capture tape around them. Not only that, but Ajiro's tail is unfrozen, and has an even farther reach than his arms. He scoffed as Todoroki walked within 3 feet of Ajiro. All Ajiro would have to do is gut check him with his tail and wrap the capture tape around him. They all turned back to the monitors, watching as Todoroki simply walked past Ajiro and touched the weapon. He got psyched out. Izuku sighed in disappointment. Sometimes that's all that's needed. Yaoyorozu said, giving Izuku a measured glance. As heroes, if we can psyche out the enemy, then we have a chance to end a confrontation before any lives are lost. And on the flip side, if that wasn't a weapon, but a VIP, then a psyched out hero gets people killed. Izuku drawled. Everyone looked stunned, most having not thought of the other side of the battle trial. Dude, you were smart, Zero said. Izuku shrugged. I used to psyche out people all the time. A bit of flame and an intense stare tends to get results. And what results were you trying to reach? Yaoyorozu sniffed disdainfully. Whatever was needed, princess. Izuku muttered, looking away as Todoroki and the others came back. From here Izuku simply watched the battle trials, wincing in sympathy as Yaoyorozu basically had to fight Jiru, and Kaminari alone as her partner was simply content to watch her work and leer at her. After the last after-action report was finished and All Might took off, everyone walked to the locker rooms. Izuku followed, but didn't change, simply sat on one of the benches as everyone talked. As soon as the last person left the shower he stood and moved that way. Shy Midoriya Mina tried to heckle him as he passed, strong, but worried about size, knew you were overcompensating. Izuku turned his eyes to Minta, who froze under the surprisingly cold glare. Careful, Minta. He sneered, letting a flame sprout from his fingertips. Playing with fire is dangerous. With that he cut the fire and kept walking. Dude, you have like no preservation skills, Kaminari said as Kirishima and Bakugo laughed at the pop-off student. SSS, shut up, it's just posturing, Minta whined, trying to hide his fear. No, he psyched you out, dude, that's what Midoriya was talking about, Kaminari said with wide eyes. No shit, Sparky, Bakugo scoffed, shouldering his bag as he walked out. While I won't condone your distasteful and rude comment, Ada began, glaring at Minta and making him shrink. I also can't just let Midoriya's actions slide. That could have been perceived as a threat. I think it was merely a warning, Takoyami said as he buttoned up his shirt. Our schoolmate is a secretive one, with many scars both physical and mental. So deep, Kirishima said with a grin, and I agree, if Midoriya doesn't want to undress or shower with us, then that's his choice, not like it's against the rules, right? Still a little weird, Mina grumbled. At least he's not a perv, Sato said, following Zero out. Soon the locker room was empty, the only sound was the shower running. A few minutes later it shut off and Izuku walked out, looking about as he went before heading to his locker, unlocking it and pulling his things out, pulling his pants on as the door opened and Todoroki walked in, already dressed and looking at his phone. Midoriya, I forgot that I wanted to ask you. He stopped as he looked up and saw the marks on his back. Izuku turned around quickly. Shit, he said under his breath as he grabbed his undershirt and put it on. Thought everyone was gone. Sorry, he muttered, turning away from Todoroki to continue changing. Midoriya, Howie, Todoroki started, unsure of what to say as the boy finished getting dressed. Forget it, Izuku said curtly, throwing his jacket on and walking past Todoroki, who shook his head and quickly followed him. How can I forget that, Todoroki demanded to know, following Izuku down the hall. Midoriya, is everything all right at home? Everything's fine, Izuku snapped, not looking back at Todoroki. Look, this happened a long time ago. People who did it aren't on the street anymore, so just drop it. But Todoroki started, stopping when Kaminari and Ochako came around the corner. Oh hey guys, Ochako chirped, was wondering where you guys were. Everything all right? Everything's fine, Izuku said with a tired smile, just had a bit of trouble getting dressed, muscles stiff and all, you know. A good massage would help you, bro, Kaminari said wisely. There's a good spot in Hiyashi. I'll be fine, Izuku dismissed, but it looks like you guys were busy, so I'll see ya, he said, going around them and into the classroom. A little squirrely, isn't he? Kaminari asked as he and Ochako kept walking. Yeah, but you can't fault him for it. True. Todoroki stood in the hallway for a while, doing his best to keep his emotions and thoughts under control as he walked into class. He looked at Midoriya, who was half listening to a story that Kirishima was telling, his gaze far off. Todoroki sat down at his desk, filled with a nervous energy as he resolved to, at the very least, let their homeroom teacher know about what he saw. When the bell rang, Izuku was one of the first out of the room, giving his friends a quiet excuse before leaving. While they were rightfully confused, they brushed it off as their friend simply being tired from the day. But Todoroki knew better. As soon as he was able, he was walking down the hall towards the teacher's office, pausing only for a moment at the sliding door before knocking. Come in, present, Mike's voice shouted as Todoroki stepped in, looking from the loud voice hero to his homeroom teacher. Todoroki, what do you need? Aizawa asked tiredly, eyes noting the boy's awkward and hesitant stance. Two saw something today, and I think I need to inform you about it. It's about Midoriya. Aizawa shared a look with Mike before looking back to his student. Go on, he said. Midoriya waited to change until most everyone was finished, Todoroki began, and I was needing to ask him a question. So I returned to the locker room and well, he saw scars on Midoriya's back, whip marks and carvings and in a brand. I'm gonna head out, Mike said uncomfortably. You got this one, Shouta. Yeah, I got it, Aizawa said, not looking away from Todoroki as Mike left. Have a seat, Todoroki, Aizawa said, motioning to a chair across from him. The boy gratefully sits down. Now, only a few people know of Izuku's past. Aizawa begins, Todoroki raising an eyebrow at the familiarity. Most of them are officers in the correctional field, the Hero Association, and the teaching staff here at UA. The only reason I'm telling you is so you don't disturb Izuku with your questions, understand? Yes, sir, Todoroki said dutifully. Aizawa sighed, leaning forward. Izuku has been in and out of the Juvenile Detention Center his whole life. Usually problems with his foster families have landed him in the facility. Wait, Midoriya is in foster care, Todoroki interrupted in shock. Since he was 5, yes, one of these foster families believed him to be a demon, and sought to purify him of it. They did all of that to him, he asked faintly. Yes, we only know so much. Bastards were tight-lipped about their treatment, and Izuku has only said so much about it. I didn't Know about the brand for one thing, but I know it was a traumatic experience for him. So I want you to promise you won't bring this up again unless he broaches the subject himself, understood? Aye, sir, I understand. Good, Aizawa said, giving him a tired glare. I'm trusting you to keep this a secret, Todoroki. If it gets out, then I know who to look at. To promise I won't tell anyone. Thank you, Mr. Aizawa. Izuku burst into his apartment, breathing heavily as he slammed the door behind him. He had managed not to be cornered by Todoroki, surprising, since he had seen him jump up not long after he had. With a shaky breath he slowly lowered himself to the ground, crossing his legs under him and settling into a meditation stance that Uncle had taught him. Struggling to clear his mind as visions flashed through his mind of a knotted whip slashing across his back, the screams of pain as they dug a sharp knife into his shoulder, the smell of burning flesh as a branding iron was pressed into his side, the freezing cold of a metal room with a locked door. A few hours later, Aizawa opened the door to the apartment, eyes immediately training on Izuku, passed out on the floor, deep in a restless sleep. With a sigh, Aizawa picked the boy up, carrying him to his room and placing him on the bed, not daring to put the covers over him for fear of the small sparks igniting on his fingers. Get some sleep, son, he mumbled as he walked out, heart heavy and head hung low. Izuku walked into class, saying a few hellos as he walked to his desk, and pointedly ignoring Todoroki trying to catch his eye. It had been like this for a week now, with Izuku doing his best to ignore Todoroki in class and dodging his attempts outside of class. Thankfully, Todoroki wasn't one to try and socialize out of class. Others had seen the way the two acted around each other and had attempted to ask Izuku about it, only to be met with a dismissive wave of the hand. Nothing's going on, guys, don't worry about it, he would say with an easy smile. Any attempts to ask Todoroki were likewise met with dismissals, though the boy would always hesitate before simply telling them to leave. With this in mind, the class chose to ignore it. Only Uraraka would still try every now and again. Today, like any other day, Izuku was quick to strike up a conversation with Bakugo, who was telling him about the next family dinner his mom wanted him to go to. Quiet down, Aizawa called as he walked in, immediately making everyone face the front. Okay, so we have a lot to cover today. First being you need to choose a class representative. Instantly the room was in an uproar. Me pick me, Kaminari shouted. I want to be class rep, Mina screamed before being nudged back by Zero. No way, it should be me. Everyone please calm yourselves, Ida called out, standing. We should do this democratically. A vote to decide who should be our representatives. We've only known each other a week, dude. Jiru said. Yeah, we wouldn't know each other well enough, Mina agreed. And most everyone would probably elect themselves, Kirishima pointed out. Then those who gain more than one vote would obviously be more qualified to lead, Ida pointed out, getting some to start to nod in understanding. Midoriya, for his part, was absent-mindedly trying to balance his pencil tip on his pinky, frowning when the pencil would topple over and he'd have to restart. Kind of exciting, huh? Midoriya, Uraraka gushed at his side, making Izuku spare her a look. It's just extra work, Izuku said, frowning as the pencil fell again. I'd rather have more time to train. All right, Ada shouted, making Izuku cringe and Uraraka jump. Everyone write down your vote, Sue, if you would be so kind as to collect everyone's vote. 20 minutes later had Aizawa writing the results down, with only 4 people getting more than one vote. All right, the vote passes, Midoriya, your class rep, Aizawa stated, and Yaoyorozu will be. Oh, pass, Izuku said bluntly, making everyone gasp. What, but Midoriya, it's an honor to be, Ada began, only for Izuku to cut him off. It's an honor I don't want, he stated. Honestly, I'm flattered so many of you think I'll be a good leader, but I don't want it. You really want the guy who doesn't want it to be your leader. He jabbed a thumb over to Ada. Give the position to Ada, he's the obvious choice. That wouldn't be fair, Mina exclaimed. Yeah, we voted, so shouldn't Yaomomo be the class rep? If you want to do another vote, then be my guest, Izuku said. I really couldn't care less. The bell rang, signifying lunch. Go get lunch, Aizawa said tiredly. We'll finish this afterwards. Everyone left the room, talking quietly amongst themselves while Izuku packed up his things. Thank you, Midoriya, Ida said as he walked up to his friend. I know that I probably won't get many votes save for yours, but thank you for the endorsement. Izuku gave him a smile. Don't worry about it, man. You're the best person, I think, for the job. I'm sure everyone else will figure that out too. He slung his backpack over his shoulder. I gotta get somewhere, so see ya. Enjoy your lunch, Midoriya, Ada exclaimed, before following everyone else to the lunchroom. Izuku heading a different way, hands in his pockets and a frown on his face. What do you guys think about what Midoriya said? Uraraka asked Sue and Bakugo to sit down at the table. HMPH, nerd's right, Bakugo said plainly. 4 Eyes may be annoying, but he'd be a good rep, just like I would be. Yeah, but no one would be able to put up with your attitude for long, Sue said plainly, making a tick mark appear. Just you watch, Frog, I'll get elected and you'll have to eat your words. I doubt it, Sue said, back to the point. I agree, Ada would be a great rep. He really does care about our class excelling after all. But you would make a good one too, Uraraka whined. Oh man, now I don't know who to vote for. Who'd you vote for last time? Ada asked as he walked over, sitting down beside Uraraka. I voted for Izuku. I didn't think he would turn down the position, she sighed. Then looked at Ada. So, do you think you would make a good representative, Ada? I would like to think I would, but if our class does not vote for me, then I'm sure whoever they do vote for will be perfect for the job, he said proudly, while Bakugo scoffed. Spoken like a true private school nerd. Bakugo sneered. Private school, Uraraka wondered, looking at Ada, who was berating Bakugo for his words. Come to think of it, you do seem to have that elite school mentality, Sue said, and I think I've heard the name Ada before. Uraraka leaned towards Ada. Admit it, you're filthy rich, Uraraka exclaimed, making Sue and Bakugo sweat drop. I wouldn't say that, but Sue is right, Ada said, his chest puffing out. My last name belongs to the Ida family, a family who has a staunch tradition of being heroes. TCH, knew it. Bakugo grumbled, you're related to Ingenium, ain't you? Four Eyes. Yes, he is my brother also. My name is Tenya Ida. There is no need for name calling. I'll call you whatever I want, nerd. He's the hero and Hasu isn't he? Sue asked, interrupting the argument before it could begin. The one with 67 sidekicks. That he is. It is my goal to one day work alongside him, a true Ada man. Wow, Ada, you have such great goals, Uraraka cheered while Bakugo grumbled. Guess that's good and all, but you won't be number one, you hear me? That's me, Bakugo said with a haughty grin. Didn't Izuku beat you twice already? Sue deadpanned. He got lucky, frog. The others at the table laughed while Bakugo scowled, while in the back of his mind he felt a warmth at having people around who weren't afraid to tease him, better than those extras at Mustafu. He thought, before I forget, where is Midoriya? Ada asked. I would have thought he'd show up by now. He usually does, right? Uraraka wondered, looking around. Maybe he had to go to the bathroom. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life with a generic alarm, a woman's voice calling over the speakers. Alarm, we have a level 3 breach. All students begin evacuation procedures immediately. What's going on? Ada asked a passing third year. Someone's broken into the campus, he said. This hasn't happened in all my 3 years here. We better evacuate. Let's make haste, everyone, Ada called, ushering Uraraka and Sue towards the exit. Bakugo right behind them. Soon they were all being jostled and pushed apart by panicking students. Everyone calm down, Ada shouted as he was crushed between a group of guys. Hands off, you purple bald fuck, Bakugo snapped at Minda, who was crying and clinging to him. Oh hey, stop, Uraraka squealed as she jumped away. Stop. Bakugo made it to a wall, kicking Minda off as he looked around, hands already coming up to set off an explosion. This'll get their attention. He growled, only to stop as Ada suddenly flew over everyone, his engine sending him flying for the wall, where he crashed in a comical pose. Everyone stop, Ada shouted, making the entire hall free. There is no need to panic, it's just the reporters from this morning. Please, calm down and show them how proper UA students respond to situations like these. Bakugo slowly walked over to Uraraka as everyone began walking. Look at that. Four Eyes actually had the balls to do that, he said with a grin, making Uraraka beam at him. Yep, it's the glasses, she said, making Bakugo tilt his head. Oh, I saw you getting ready to do something too. Explosion. Figured it would get these extras to shut up for a moment and calm down, Bakugo said with a shrug. I don't know how well that would have worked, but glad we had a backup plan, she cheered, punching his shoulder. Bakugo looked at his shoulder, then at Uraraka, a slight blush creeping into his cheeks. Hey, yeah. He coughed as Uraraka began walking away, completely failing to notice his reaction. Come on, let's get going. Yeah, whatever, Bakugo muttered, following her, barely noticing his own small smile. Soon the reporters had been cleared from the campus and they were told to return to their classes, where Izuku was already waiting, looking about in confusion. Oi Deku, Bakugo snarled, making the boy look over. Where the hell were you? I was eating on the roof, Izuku said, scratching the back of his head in embarrassment. Started meditating and kinda lost track of time. Would have been late if it weren't for that girl. What happened? Uraraka filled him in while the others talked amongst themselves. That sounds crazy, Izuku said, rubbing his neck as he looked at his friends. Must have been terrifying. It kinda was, Uraraka admitted, but Ida had a plan. Enough. Aizawa droned, walking past the students and opening the door. Get inside. We still have plenty to do before this afternoon's training. Soon the class was seated. All right, we still need 2 representatives. I nominate Ida, Uraraka called. Yeah, Kirishima agreed. Dude was seriously manly with how he took over the situation in the hallway. He got everyone to calm down and listen. Hey, did you notice he looked like the emergency exit guy when he hit the wall? That's 3 votes for Ada, Aizawa sighed. 4, Izuku said, raising his pencil in the air. All right, anyone else want to vote? It took another 30 minutes to get the final tallies, with Ada getting 5 votes, Yaoyorozu getting 4, and Bakugo getting 2. Okay, now that we're set with that, all of you get your costumes. We have rescue training this afternoon, so make sure you bring your A game. Everyone began moving, Izuku being one of the last ones to grab his case. Midoriya. Yaoyorozu's hesitant voice made Izuku stop, looking back at the slightly taller girl, who looked unsure. Yeah, he questioned. Is there a reason you didn't think I wouldn't be a good representative? She asked tentatively. I never said that, did I? He asked with a raised eyebrow. You implied it. Izuku sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Do we have to do this now? He almost whined. Kinda gotta get dressed. I just wanna know, I understand that Webbeted heads back in the team battles, but That has nothing to do with it. Izuku muttered, slinging his case onto his shoulder. Look, don't take this the wrong way, but you're kind of a pushover. What I am not, she said indignantly. Really, because this past week I've seen you jump hoops to please people. He retorted, you've caved almost every time Mina or Hagakure push you just a little. And that doesn't bode well for a representative who may have to make a tough call. It will, she hesitated. He sighed, look, I don't have anything against you personally. I'll even admit that there are subjects that you'd run circles around me with. But I grew up on the streets. I know what happens when you have a leader who isn't commanding enough. He walked past her heading for the door. Who knows, maybe you'll prove me wrong. Put someone under stress and you learn more about them, right? Yaoyorozu looked back at him. You grew up on the streets, she asked. Iwi. Izuku smiled sadly. Not everyone gets saved by heroes. He said, continuing out the door. See you, Yaoyorozu. VW. Izuku made it to the others just as the bus pulled up. Hey Midoriya, Uraraka greeted as he walked over. You ready for today? Yep, he said, looking at Bakugo, who had his arms crossed. You're looking sour. Izuku commented. I'm not. Bakugo grumbled. He's bummed that he didn't get class rep. Uraraka giggled. I am not. Who gives a fuck about that anyways, Bakugo shouted, a tick mark appearing on his forehead. Keep telling yourself that. Number 2. Izuku teased. You're lucky the old hag has a soft spot for you. Bakugo scowled as Ada began directing them onto the bus. Soon they were on the move. So Midoriya, Tsu began as they traveled. I'm pretty blunt with my thoughts and feelings, and it occurred to me that your power has a lot of similarities with Endeavor. Izuku laughed. I guess we both use fire, he mused. But there's a difference. I can control other sources to an extent and summon lightning. How do you do that, by the way? Kaminari asks eagerly, cutting the fire user off. Do you have 2 quirks? No, just the one, he reassured. But the man who trained me to control my quirk told me that since it's my body's natural energy that produces fire, that with proper focus and peace of mind, I can expel the energy in its purest form. Who was your trainer? Shoto asked curiously, eyes narrowed at Izuku's hesitance. His name was Iro Soran, Izuku said softly, then gave a soft chuckle. Though everyone knows him as Uncle Iro, he was my foster father for about 3 years. He's a good guy. Wait, you're in foster care? Mina shouted, making everyone flinch from his loud voice. Yes, what's it to you? Izuku asked tightly, glaring at the boy, who shrank back. Dude, that must have sucked, Kirishima exclaimed. It wasn't so bad in some places. Izuku said honestly, I actually made a lot of friends wonder what they're doing right about now. Were any of them cute? Mina questioned, a sly smirk making Izuku shudder a little. How should I know? Izuku asked. So you had actual training from someone? Yaoyorozu interrupted Mina before she could continue. It explains why you're so confident using your quirk. Yeah, he's easily one of the strongest guys in class. Kirishima said, flashy quirk too, better than what I got. For example, he made his arm harden. Might not be flashy, but I'm sure you can take a hit, right? Izuku asked. And you'd be great for rescues. You really think so? No, so man. If we're gonna talk about flashy, then we should be looking at Todoroki and Bakugo. Sue said, but I don't think Bakugo would be too popular with his attitude. What the hell do you mean, Frog? See what I mean? Everyone laughed as Bakugo began to sulk. Yeah, dude, we've only known you for a week and we all know your attitude is akin to a dirty sock. Izuku hit his snigger as Bakugo glared at him. Shut it, Deku. I said nothing. Izuku chuckled. Enough, Aizawa called back. We're here. They all piled out and lined up at the doors, looking around in wonder at the facility. Wow, Izuku whistled, looking around. It's like an amusement park, Uraraka exclaimed. It's so much more than an amusement park, a new voice proclaimed, making the class look over. 13, where's All Might? Aizawa asked. He's not gonna make it, he said, holding 3 fingers up. Had a bit of trouble this morning. TCH, how irresponsible. Well then, I guess we better get started. Alright, so some of you may know me, but I am Pro Hero 13 and welcome to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint. I created his facility myself to teach future heroes the basics of rescue training. Wicked cool. USJ, like Universal Studios Japan. Now, can anyone tell me how my quirk works? 13 asks, making Uraraka raise her hand giddily. Your quirk is called Black Hole, she gushed, and it can break down any matter to a molecular level. Correct, 13 exclaimed, and while it can help move debris, it can just as easily be used to harm. Everyone looked at each other in confusion. Many of your quirks can be used to inflict injury upon each other, and it is our job to teach you how to avoid that and utilize your quirk to benefit those around you. Izuku nodded. It's like my fire thought, looking down at his hand. I can create a fire that can literally melt the armor off the villain butts if I'm not careful. Anyways, let's get started. And 13 stopped as the lights flickered around them. Aizawa narrowed his eyes as he ran towards the edge of the stairs, watching as a black portal appeared. Mr. Aizawa, is this part of the training? Kirishima asks warily as people begin to step out of the portal. No. 13, get everyone out. Those are real villains, Aizawa exclaimed as he brought his goggles up. Where's All Might? A man covered in hands asked, seemingly no one in particular. I was told he would be here. Perhaps we should kill a few brats to get him here. How did they get in here? Izuku demanded, getting into a fighting stance. Don't we have alarms? We do, Aizawa muttered, which means they might have an electric type user who's jamming the signal. Kaminari, see if you can't contact the school. Oh right, Kaminari said, fiddling with his headphones. I'll hold them off 13, get them back to the buses. Right, everyone follow me. As everyone ran, Izuku took up position beside Aizawa, already in his stance. No, Aizawa said sharply, making Izuku look at him. Go protect your classmates. You can't possibly handle them all on your own. Izuku objected. I'm not planning to. As soon as you all get clear, then I'm leaving too. Besides, we need the strongest in the class to protect the others. I'm counting on you, son. Izuku hesitated, then nodded. Don't die, he said before taking off towards the others while Aizawa went diving into the villains. Izuku barely got to his other friends before he was swamped by shadows. No, he shouted as he was suddenly falling through empty space, straight for the flood zone. He hit the water hard enough to force the air out of his lungs. Sorry kid, but we're getting paid for this, a man with a shark quirk laughed as he shot towards the flailing fire user, only to be kicked to the side by a familiar face. Hey Midoriya, Tsu called, wrapping her tongue around his middle and flinging him out of water. Izuku slammed onto the deck of a cruise ship, coughing as he gulped air down greedily. He looked up as Mina was slapped down onto the deck as well. Tsu jumped on with ease. Thanks, Tsu, he croaked, slowly sitting back against the wall, focusing his inner fire until water began to evaporate off of his skin. No problem, Tsu said. This is crazy, isn't it? You can say that again, Izuku scoffed, standing and walking to the edge of the ship, looking at the villains who were surrounding the ship. These assholes are just waiting, he muttered, looking at his fellow students. Why are they even here? Minda asked frantically, tears pouring down the boy's cheeks. What did we ever do to them? I'm assuming they're here to kill All Might. Izuku sighed, squatting down and looking at his compatriots. That hand freak was asking for him, and since he's not here, his next step is to kill some of us and see if it'll lure All Might here. Which is why they split us up. Tsu finished. Exactly, but I don't think they know about our quirks. Otherwise they would have sent you to the conflagration zone. And you to the blizzard zone. Izuku shivered at that. We need to figure out a way to get out of here. They won't wait for long. What are your quirks? My quirk is frog. Tsu said, I can basically do anything a frog can. I can jump high, stick to surfaces, and my tongue can shoot out pretty far. I can also throw up my stomach to clean it and secrete a poisonous mucus. It only stings a bit though. Actually, you can forget those last two. They're not helpful here. Mucus, Mina whispered in an odd voice, making Izuku reach over and slam a fist into the boy's head, making him crumple to the ground. You guys already know my quirk. Izuku muttered, firebending. I can summon lightning, but I'm not sure how that'll affect them. We don't want to kill them yet. Yet Mina questioned, fear in his eyes. Sometimes there's no choice. Tsu said, agreeing with Izuku, but I think we have a choice right now. Yeah, what's your quirk, Mina? Izuku asked. I have these sticky balls, he said, popping one off his head. There's no real limit to them, and they can stick to just about anything. Except me, I just bounce off of them. Anyways, they stay sticky anywhere from a couple of hours to a full day depending on what I've eaten and how I feel. That's useful, Izuku said with a nod, looking over the edge again. Okay, here's how it's gonna go. I'm going to unleash some fire, get a smokescreen going. Tsu, as soon as there's enough cover, grab Minda and get him to shore. Minda, throw some of your balls at the villains. We can at the very least trap a few of them. Understood. Got it, Tsu said. Are you sure we shouldn't just wait here for All Might? Minda asked. I mean, they can't really beat him, can they? We don't know that for sure, Izuku said with a shake of his head. If they say they're here to kill All Might, then they probably have a way. He put a hand on the shorter boy's shoulder. Don't worry though, I'm sure we'll all get out of this just fine. Mina took a deep breath and nodded. Alrighty boys and girls, Izuku said, addressing them and the villains as he jumped up onto the rail, letting fire erupt from his palms, a slightly deranged light shining in his eyes as his lips curled into a snarl. Let's get this party started. With a deep breath, Izuku sent a wave of hot fire into the water, forcing several villains to run as he swept the flames through the water, steam erupting into the sky. Sugo, Izuku commanded. On it, Tsu responded, wrapping her tongue around Minda and jumping into the air. Eat my sticky balls, Minda screamed as he began throwing his balls into the water. What, that won't come off, one villain shouted as his arm and leg stuck to his body, crashing into another villain who was instantly stuck fast to him. What are these things? The villain screamed as the fire swept over them. Sorry boys, Izuku said with a grin as he jumped into the sky, firing off jets of fire from his fist and flying after Tsu. Didn't mean to broil you. That worked out even better than I thought it would. Tsu praised them as they landed on the shore. Looks like we passed the shipwreck zone. We're far from finished. Izuku sighed, getting his breathing under control. We need to get back to the stairs, but I want to check on Mr. Aizawa before we do. He may need help. We can't actively fight these bad guys, Mina whined. Let's just get to the stairs. I'm not talking about actively fighting. Izuku growled. I say we just skirt the edge of the courtyard. If he's doing fine, we won't help. But if he's being overwhelmed, then we can easily take a few out without being seen. I hope you know what you're doing. Tsu said as they began moving. Same here Tsu. He chuckled humorlessly. Aizawa was not having a good day. First there was the break-in by the media. Then All Might had gone and went over his time limit. Now he was in a fight for his life against who knew how many villains with his students scattered to the winds. He needed to finish this fight now, and quickly. Final boss. He growled as the hand guy charged him. He met him halfway, erasing his quirk as he wrapped him in his capture scarf. The guy easily slipped out of the strands and reached him, his hand connecting to Aizawa's elbow as he closed his eyes. Aizawa let out a pained gasp as his elbow began to rot away. He erased the man's quirk again and jumped away. It was hard to tell with all that jumping around. He began, watching as Aizawa took down 2 more grunts. But your hair begins to float when you use your quirk. When it's not floating, you're defenseless. You're no better than a quirkless child. Oh, and I'm not the final boss. Suddenly, the bird-beaked behemoth was behind him, and as Aizawa erased the monster's quirk, it slammed him into the ground, fracturing his other arm as he screamed out in pain. I erased his quirk. I'm sure of it, Aizawa thought as it snapped his arm like a twig and grabbed a fistful of his hair. That means his base strength is as strong as All Might's. The monster slammed his head into the ground, shattering the concrete as it repeated the process again and again, until golden flames washed over its body and it jumped away with a scream of pain. What the leader screamed as he too jumped away before the flames could touch him. You guys are done. Izuku growled as he took a defensive stance in front of Aizawa, Tsu and Minder running to Aizawa's side. Get to the entrance. No, Aizawa groaned out as Tsu began looking over the teacher. He's not doing so good, Midoriya. Tsu fretted while Mina danced from foot to foot in a panic. And these two won't just let us leave, am I right? Izuku asked the man, who sneered at his words. I'm here to kill All Might and a couple of bratty kids. Of course I won't just let you run away. And I for one can't just turn away after what you did to him, Izuku said, sparing a look back at Aizawa. Sorry Dad. With a roar he sent fire at the Namu, who had attempted to lurch forward while Izuku was distracted, once again making it fall back with a scream. Get Mr. Aizawa to the entrance now, I'll hold them off. But Midoriya Minda started. Now Izuku snarled, kicking at the handman as he charged forward, making him dodge the flames and redirect his attack towards the fire user. You're becoming a nuisance of an NPC, he growled, swiping at the boy who easily dodged between the attacks before rolling to the side to avoid a strike from the Namu, bathing it in intense flames before jumping back further. Glad I can make a name for myself against villains, Izuku said with a cocky smirk, punching fire at the man and forcing him back towards the waters. He then backflipped over the Namu and shot his hottest flames at its exposed brain. It shrieked in pain and held its head as it staggered back. This is my chance, Izuku thought, going through the motions to summon lightning, only for a portal to open up at his side, allowing Namu's fist to finally connect with his body and send him flying into a low concrete wall that wrapped around the water fountain. Izuku groaned as his vision blurred, trying in vain to force himself to his feet. You, clean up this mess, we have bigger fish to fry than some NPC, the handman sneered. Got it, boss, a gravelly voice said as wind buffeted the area. Slowly Izuku forced himself to a kneel, shakily looking up to watch as the Namu and All Might clashed in the air, resulting in powerful gusts of wind pressure. In front of him, a group of 6 villains were approaching. Hey Stone, this one's yours. Izuku got into a fighting stance, entire body shaking as blood began to run into his eyes. The guy in front of him was tall, taller than he was, and had a plain gray mask covering his face, only wearing a pair of black pants. Izuku slowly zeroed in on a familiar brand in the guy's right arm. A brand of a cross. Jin, Izuku whispered hoarsely, dropping his stance in shock as the boy stopped. Izuku, the other boy asked uncertainty, arms still up as Izuku staggered back against the water fountain. Yeah, it's me. The two stared at each other for a little while, Izuku bloody and barely able to stand and Jin still in his defensive stance. What's the hold up, Stone? Come on. Jin sighs, you owe me big time, Akuma, he muttered, whirling around and stomping his foot into the ground, making the ground beneath the other villains give and sending them tumbling into the newly created hole. Move, Jin shouts at Izuku as he stomps again, making a large boulder erupt from the ground before a punch ram him sends it flying at one of the larger villains, bowling him over as Izuku ran to the right, Jin hot on his heels as he tears the mask off, revealing green eyes and rugged face. Didn't think I'd ever see you again, Akuma. That makes 2 of us, Izuku wheezed out, a straight kick sending fire into a villain attempting to jump at him, knocking him out with a quick burst of fire from his right hand. Jin was manipulating the earth around him, sending boulders flying to knock over his former comrades, or stomping and whirling his hands to trap them in earth. How'd you get mixed up with these guys? A big teddy bear. Needed some street cred, Jin said with a shrug. Wouldn't have joined this if I knew you were gonna be here. Isn't that a ringing endorsement? Izuku grumbled as they both finished off the last of the villains. Izuku scanned the area and narrowed his eyes as he saw All Might trapped. Jin, Izuku started. I see it. Jin growls, kicking the ground and sending a spike of rock straight for the hand guy, who jumped back in surprise. That guy is Shigaraki, he's the head of this shitstorm. Then I guess we know who to go for, Izuku yells, jumping into the sky and sending a fiery axle kick at the man, who dodges him as well as Kirishima's follow-up. Damn, it almost had him. The newly arrived hardening user groaned as Todoroki freezes the Namu and Bakugo tackles the warp gate user. You thought you could kill the symbol of peace with such weak fighters, Todoroki sneered as he glared at Shigaraki. You're finished. No, Shigaraki snarls, scratching at his neck. This isn't over just because some NPCs come whining Namu. All of them watched in horror as Namu pulled itself out of the warp gate, body falling apart from the ice, only to reform as quickly as it fell back. I thought you said his quirk was shock absorption. All Might gritted out as he stood tall. I didn't say that was his only quirk. Shigaraki laughed. Now, you've made a right mess of things, all of you, and I'm going to be needing Kurogiri back. Namu. With a screech, the Namu suddenly darted forward. Jin, who was closest to Bakugo, threw an uppercut and erected a large rock wall, only to cover his face as the Namu easily rocketed through. No way, that was bedrock, Jin shouted in shock. Kak and Izuku shouted out in concern, only to stare to his side where Bakugo was now standing, looking shocked. You alright? Izuku asked worriedly as Jin ran over. I'm Finn Nerd, who's this? Hello, Jin here. Jin said with an awkward wave, making Izuku shake his head as he looked back to where Bakugo had stood. All Might was now standing there, arms up in a protective guard. You'd order the death of a child so easily, All Might growled. Oh, don't act so high and mighty, All Might. Your little fire user over there was throwing death blows when he was fighting Namu. And isn't it strange how the only approved violence is state-sponsored violence? As the hero and villain traded barbs, Izuku slowly fell to his knees, doing his best not to fall completely as Jin and Bakugo checked over him worriedly. Don't fucking die, Deku, Bakugo spat. This isn't good, his ribcage is practically non-existent. Jin said, looking at Bakugo, and I'm not entirely sure, but he may have a fracture in his skull. Damn it, Deku, Bakugo grumbled. Young Todoroki, I want you and the others to fall back to the entrance, All Might called to the boy. Make sure young Midoriya gets there in one piece. You're sending us off, Todoroki demanded to know. Your fight is over, please. If it weren't for me, you'd be dead by now, Todoroki muttered. And I thank you, but now it's time for you to witness a true pro at work. Hey, Isahat, quit arguing, Bakugo snapped as Todoroki looked ready to argue. Deku's in bad shape. Todoroki sighed and motioned them to follow him as All Might rocketed off at the Namu, the two trading furious blows and feeding them with the powerful wind pressure once more. Bakugo and Jin supported Izuku between them, moving carefully and fast to the stairs as Todoroki and Kirishima covered them. Hey Jin, Izuku mumbled as they moved. I'm sorry that I never went looking for you. Don't worry about Thaakuma, Jin reassured him. I'm sorry I left you behind. Now let's get you to. An explosion sent them to the ground, Jin quickly rolling back to his feet as Bakugo did the same beside him. Izuku forced himself to look up as All Might overwhelmed the Namu. If 100% isn't enough to push you to your limit, then I'll go beyond that. I'll show you what it means to go beyond plus ultra, All Might roared as he sent the Namu flying, crashing through the roof of the USJ. Whoa, no way, Jin whispered in awe. He sent that thing flying. Now that's a pro, Kirishima whooped, looking to the entrance as the other teachers arrived. How back in my heyday, I could have finished a guy like that in 5 punches. All Might huffed out, turning to look at his students as Shigaraki and Kurogiri disappeared. But today it took over 300 mighty blows. Izuku chuckled as he stood up, and just in the nick of time too. How All Might, Izuku asked with a bloody grin as midnight, and Snipes came running up. This isn't a student, Snipes warned, raising his gun towards Jin, who held his hands up and knelt down. He helped us, though, Kirishima objected as they placed cuffs on him. He was still with the villains when they first attacked, Todoroki said plainly. Buto shit, Midoriya, Kirishima shouted as Izuku fell forward, the adrenaline high keeping him conscious fading as he slowly collapsed. The last thing he saw was Jin staring intently at him, concern and regret shining in his eyes. Izuku really didn't like infirmaries, and yet, it felt like most of his time lately was spent in them, being healed from one fight or another, and today was no different, except for the fact that Recovery Girl wasn't the one waiting for him to wake up. Instead, he found himself looking at the minuscule principal and a man he hadn't seen before. Ah, young Midoriya, I'm glad you're awake, Nezu said pleasantly, clasping his hands in front of him. I was worried you would be under until tomorrow. How's everyone? Izuku asked, forcing himself to sit up, wincing as the movement jostled his injuries. Don't worry, they're all fine, Nezu reassured him, leaning forward to push the boy gently. BCK, and please refrain from moving too much. We wouldn't want Recovery Girl to storm in here now, would we? Right, Izuku said with a dry chuckle, eyes going to the other man. Who's this? This is the pro hero Whiplash. He has a few questions for you, but they can wait if you're not feeling up to it. I can answer any questions you have, Izuku said confidently as Paku stepped forward, holding up a file. Jin, Watanabe. He began, putting the file on Izuku's legs. Quirk, earthbending. He's a known petty thug whose main charges usually consist of illegal quirk fighting and petty theft. How is it that you know him? We've known each other since we were younger. He sighed, looking down at the case file. We ran the streets together for a bit, and we were both in the same foster home 4 years back. The Jones family, correct? Nezu asked. Yeah, those assholes. Izuku muttered. Me and Jin were their main targets. We wouldn't roll over when they asked it. It only took a few months before Jin was planning on running away. I couldn't. But I helped him get out of there. Didn't see him again until Toddy never thought he'd go villain. He was always a big softy. Where were you during lunch today? Haku asks pointedly. Several witnesses state you were absent from the cafeteria and didn't make an appearance until after the alarm had been triggered. I was eating lunch on the roof, Izuku said, giving Paku a confused look. Do you think I have something to do with the break-in? It would certainly fit. Haku scoffed. You just happened to be missing during a lunch period when the first level 3 alarm is triggered in years. No one to confirm or deny your location, then your class is attacked, not only by villains, but by villains who know you personally. That is enough, Paku, Nezu says abruptly, leveling an unamused glare on the man. Cameras on the roof, as well as an eyewitness statement from a 1B student. Verify his story. Unless you have proof that young Midoriya here had a hand in the breach other than a connection with the small-time criminal who turned sides to help the students, then I would like you to refrain from accusing my students of anything. Young Midoriya here has my full trust, old friend. Paku scowled, but nodded. I've interviewed all of your classmates, Paku continued stiffly, and I would like to ask where it was that you were warped to. Me, Tsu, and Minto were sent to the flood zone. Izuku muttered. We fought the villains there and went to the courtyard. Why return to the courtyard? Why not return to the stairs? I wanted to make sure Mr. Aizawa was okay. Is he okay? Izuku asked worriedly. His injuries were not life-threatening. Nezu reassured him. He'll be fine with some rest. That's good. Any other questions? Paku, Nezu asked the man, who shook his head. I have everything I need, he muttered, turning and walking out of the room. Apologies for him, he's unpleasant to be around at the best of times. Nezu said, giving Izuku a small bow. Get some rest. Hopefully you'll be out of here in no time. Thank you, sir, Izuku mumbled as Nezu left. He slowly looked up at the roof. By the time Recovery Girl came in to check on him, he was asleep. It wasn't until Sunday that Izuku was finally cleared to leave, which wasn't a surprise considering his injuries had included internal bleeding, several broken ribs, a broken femur and a hairline fracture in his skull. It actually worked out for the best as Aizawa was also released around that time. Currently the two were carefully climbing the stairs of their apartment complex, Izuku allowing Aizawa to lean against him as they went. Almost there, Izuku said to Aizawa, feeling a flash of pity go through him at the gauze-covered man's expense. He quickly opened the apartment door. You'll be fine until tomorrow, right? Sit down, Izuku, Aizawa stated, moving deeper into the apartment. Izuku tensed. I was actually hoping to go to sleep, kind of tired. The injured boy mumbled lamely. Sit down, please, Aizawa intoned, motioning to his couch. With a sigh, Izuku moved to the couch and gingerly sat down, looking down at his hands as Aizawa moved to sit across from him on an old recliner. I ordered you to fall back, Aizawa says, making Izuku shrink in on himself. You ignored me, and almost got yourself killed. I couldn't just leave you. Izuku blurts out, looking up at his teacher and mentor, that hand guy, and his little puppet wouldn't have just let us walk out, so I gave Minta and Tsu time to get you out of there. You shouldn't have been near the center to begin with. Aizawa interrupts, making Izuku bite his lip. You should have returned to the stairs as soon as you had escaped the villains in the flood zone. You wanted to make sure you were okay, Izuku mumbled, slowly looking down again. I couldn't ignore the fact that you were facing off against a dozen villains on your own and I'm sorry. Aizawa sighs, looking to the window for a moment, before standing and moving to sit beside Izuku. While what you did was reckless and stupid, he began, a bit of guilt stabbing into his heart as Izuku flinches at his words. You also saved my life and I can't truly be mad at you for that. I'm proud of you, son. Izuku's head jerked up, staring at Aizawa in shock. What he whispered. I'm proud of you, Aizawa said again. You did what a lot of pro heroes wouldn't have done in that situation. And while I don't want you to see you making a habit of this, I can't help but be proud of the way you took charge. Just please, next time worry about your own safety. He sighs as Izuku suddenly hugs him, trailing down the young boy's cheeks as he sobs. I don't want to see you injured like that again. I promise I'll do what you say next time, I promise. Bakugo glared at the blackboard as his classmates chattered quietly around them. Do you think he'll be back? I don't know, he looked pretty roughed up. Aizawa definitely won't be here. Did you see his injuries? Everyone quiet yourselves, Ida shouted, walking into the room. Class is about to start. Move to your desks. Ida, you're the only one who isn't at his desk, Sato pointed out. Ida grumbled to himself as he sat down on his desk. You guys think Midoriya will be here? Kaminari asks. Of course I will. Everyone looked to the door as Izuku walked in, a few bandages wrapped around his forehead and arm. He was grinning as everyone began welcoming him back. Midoriya, I'm relieved that you have returned, none the worse for wear, Ida exclaimed, leveling a knife hand at his friend. Thanks, Ida. Sorry I haven't been in contact with anyone. Barely got released yesterday, Izuku says sheepishly, looking to Bakugo as the explosive teen is suddenly standing and stomping towards him. Bakugo, Izuku started, stopping as the boy began to whack Izuku on the head with a book. You asshole, you have any idea how worried the old hag was about you? Bakugo roared as Izuku cowered under him. SSS, sorry, I didn't think I'll go see her after school. Stop hitting me, Bakugo. Shit. You better go see her and you better apologize for being an asshole. Their relationship is weird. Sue stated, getting nods from Takoyami and Sato. Everyone get to your seats. Aizawa stated gruffly, walking into the room. Instantly Bakugo and Izuku were at their desks, Bakugo still grumbling while Izuku rubbed his head. Mr. Aizawa, I'm glad to see you back and at full health, Ada greeted their teacher. That's full health, Jiru asked blandly. Shouldn't you be resting up, Mr. Aizawa, Tsu asks. Don't worry about me, heroes can't let something as simple as injuries keep them from their duties. Aizawa said, ignoring Kirishima's so manly comment as he takes a seat. Now, we've all had a busy weekend, and with what happened at the USJ I wish I could say that your time here is about to get easier, but the truth of the matter is, you're all about to be tested. The entire class held their breath as Aizawa glared at them all. The UA Sports Festival is in a month. Instantly the class exploded in cheers, stopping as Aizawa flexed his quirk. To those of you who don't know, he began, the sports festival has basically replaced the Olympics in terms of organized championship-level events. Everyone in the hero department is required to enter and compete. This is your chance to make an impact on the hero profession at large. A large amount of pro heroes watch the sports festival and make their decisions based off of that during your third-year draft picks. So this is our chance to be noticed, Hagakure exclaimed. Some of us more than others. Ajiro laughed awkwardly as Hagakure gushed alongside Mina. Is it really smart to be doing the sports festival so soon after what happened at the USJ? Uraraka asked worriedly. The school board decided that this is exactly what the public needs to know, that UA will be continuing on. Aizawa said, however, don't think that this will just be a walk in the park. The sports festival is a time where anything can happen. You'll have Gen students and support course students who will be turning out to prove themselves. And if you're not careful, they may just be taking your spot in this class. Everyone visibly stiffened at that. They had all thought after the first day that they were relatively safe from being expelled. But now they were in danger of simply losing their seats. Now that announcements are over, let's move on to English. Aizawa says as the door slides open and Present Mike strolled in. Do you guys think Mr. Aizawa was serious? Mina asked worriedly as they all packed up their bags before heading to lunch. Probably, Kaminari sighed. I mean, it has happened before, hasn't it? That it has. Yaoyorozu confirmed. In fact, Mr. Aizawa himself is one of the few Gen Ed students who got their spot in the hero class through the sports festival. So manly, Kirishima said with a grin. I'm stoked now, just think, we could get scouted by actual pros. Izuku chuckled as he opened the door, thinking about going to the roof again when he stopped. Yuanion ordered a flash mob, he asked, jabbing a thumb out the door to all the students staring at them. Everyone in the classroom tensed, some wondering if they were in for another fight as Bakugo began walking to the door. Isn't it obvious? Bakugo asked with a smirk. They're all wanting to get a peek at the class that went up against real villains, he said, scouting the competition before the festival. He looked at all those gathered. Out of my way, extras. Bakugo Ida admonished. You can't just call people you don't know extras. He's right, Kaken, Izuku said, putting a hand on Bakugo's shoulder. You know, I heard a lot about you 1A students. A new voice said, making Izuku sigh as he turned around to look at a purple-haired kid walking over, eyes heavily bagged. But now I'm not seeing what the big deal is about. You're just a bunch of self-entitled brats. You got something to say, Bakugo growled, making a step towards the boy, only for Izuku to stop him. Leave it, Bakugo, Izuku said sternly, his friend scoffing but taking a step back. And you, Izuku turned his attention to the other boy. I can understand not feeling so crazy about us, but I wouldn't belittle anything that anyone in this class has done. And why's that? Because you weren't at the USJ, Izuku said coldly, making everyone around them shift uncomfortably. So do yourself a favor, friend, step off, and let your actions speak for you during the festival. Because posturing before the fact just makes you look like an ass. With that, Class 1A began walking away. Hey, Izuku groaned as he looked at yet a new person. I'm Tetsu from Class 1B. I thought 1A was supposed to be better. Well, I'm coming for all of you. You hear me? The boy roared. And sweat dropped as everyone in 1A pointedly ignored him. Don't worry about what they say, Izuku said to his class as they walked. The only people we need to prove anything to are ourselves and the pros. Yeah, Midoriya's right, Kirishima cheered. We're gonna smash this. Soon the entire class was cheering, Bakugo cracking a grin as Uraraka nudged him good-naturedly. What a day. Izuku sighed as he sat down on the edge of the roof, a tray of katsudon and noodles beside him as he stretched. Thought there was going to be a fight for a moment. He picked up the tray and began eating, happily humming at the pork cutlet. So much better than the store-bought. He mumbled around his food as he felt a familiar presence behind him. You know, you can come sit over here, he called, not looking back as he continued to eat. Behind him, a short girl slowly stepped out, a tray of food in her hands. There's plenty of room for both of us, he said lightly, sparing her a glance as she moved closer. Okay, she said quietly, sitting down next to him, legs swinging over the edge as she began to eat. Izuku finished his food and set it beside him, crossing his legs and beginning to meditate. The two shared a companionable silence until Izuku spoke up again. I wanted to thank you for rousing me from my meditation last weekend, for not thanking you at the time. That's okay, she said, not looking up from her food. You had more important things on your mind. It's still rude of me, he pointed out. So, thank you as well for speaking up for me about the break-in. Don't mention it. Silence returned as she finished eating, looking out over the horizon while Izuku continued to meditate. My name is Izuku Midoriya, he said, not opening his eyes. Yui Kodai, she returns. Nice to meet you. MHMM. With a sigh, Izuku stands up. It's about time for class, he said, holding his hand out to her, which she hesitantly took. Izuku helped her up and let her hand go. Best not be late, right? Lots of work ahead of us. She nods and the two begin walking side by side. Izuku has his hands in his pockets and Yui is hugging her bag to her chest, neither saying anything until they reach Class 1B, where Izuku waves goodbye to her. Hey, you're that fire bastard, aren't you? Tetsu roared at Izuku. You're looking for Endeavor, out of Tokyo, Izuku called back as he went to Class 1A, slipping in just as the bell rang. All right, Aizawa started, putting the roster down. You're all dismissed for the afternoon. Core classes will be the same in the mornings. After lunch you'll be released to train individually. Any time not devoted to studying will be spent in the gym. Understood? Yes, sir. They all responded, heading off to begin their plans. Hey, Midoriya, Kaminari called, running over to the fire user. Do you think you can help me train with my quirk? I know I can't do the same things you can, but you gotta have something to help me out, right? Yeah, sure, let's head to the sparring rooms, Izuku said with a friendly smile. Yobikaburo, Kirishima exclaimed, throwing an arm around the boy as he was trying to talk to Uraraka. Let's spar. I want to improve my hardening skills. Bouger, Bakugo muttered, looking at Uraraka. Do you want to join or? That's fine, Bakugo. Uraraka waved him off with a smile. Mina was talking about going to training ground beta to work on her quirk with Siro and Ajiro. I'll just tag on with them. I'll rate. Bakugo sighed, glaring at Kirishima, whose smile slowly disappeared. Did I interrupt something? Kirishima asked. Shut up, stupid hair, let's go. 1 week later. Ground beta. Izuku dodged jabs from Kaminari. You're projecting too much, he said, sliding into the boy's defense and swiping his legs out from under him. It's easy to tell what you'll do next. It's hard, Kaminari whined, sitting up as he pouted. You have like for years training on my 1 week. The only thing you're doing wrong is thinking too much into it, Izuku said, flicking his forehead. Every time you try to punch you bring your arm back. It should be quick forward movements. Nothing should be going back. All right. Yeah, alright. Great, now get up, let's go again. Uraraka pressed her fingers together. Release, she shouted, making several boulders drop while Mina skated forward, throwing globs of acid onto the rocks as they fell, hitting 2 of them while the third exploded from Aoyama's belly button laser. Coming through, Siro whooped, swinging through the area on his tape, Ajiro right behind him, tail propelling him easily into the air. Ground Sigma. Kirishima grunted in pain as Bakugo let loose another powerful explosion, the force of it making him slide back across the grass. That the best you got, he shouted as Sato suddenly darted in, driving his sugar-fueled punches into the boy's body. You think you're hot shit, Bakugo roared, charging forward again. Around the area, Yaoyorozu was running alongside Jiru and Hagakure, Minda trying painfully to keep up while up in the mountains. Sue was climbing as fast as she could. Below her, outside of a cave, Takoyami was resting as he watched Ida sprint about with his quirk. It's almost time for lunch, is it not? He called up to Tsu. Yeah, but Yaoyorozu told me not to blow the whistle until Hagakure finished 2 laps. Sue called down, looking back to her friends. UA Physical Fitness Field. Todoroki stood in the middle of the field, going through several yoga movements. A few students from Gen Ed followed him through them while Shoji created as many limbs as he could, while Koda was conversing with nearby animals. You ready for lunch, Koda? Shoji asked, walking up to his friend, who nodded slightly as the multi-armed boy looked to Todoroki. When did Todoroki begin teaching yoga? Koda began shaking his head and began motioning quickly while Todoroki turned around. Who are all of you? Todoroki asked in confusion as the Gen Ed kids suddenly took off. What was that about? He wondered to himself as he walked towards the lunchroom. During lunch, how's training coming with you and your class? Izuku asked Yui as they ate. As well as can be, she hummed. Tetsu keeps trying to get all of us to go to the gym. Really? Izuku asked in interest. Are you going to go? Maybe, she said with a shrug. How's your training? Same as usual, only now I'm helping Kaminari with his quirk. Guy thinks too far into it. He sighed, looking at her as she stood. Lunch is over, she said simply, prompting him to stand and take what was becoming his customary position on her right side. The two walking to Class 1B together. Fire bastard, Tetsu roared. Angry guy, Izuku greeted, giving Yui a small wave before walking away. Why do you hang out with him so much? Yui Kendo asked inquisitively as Tetsu seats. She shrugged. He's good company. Why do you hang out with that 1B girl so much? Midoriya Kaminari asked Izuku as the two walked into the weight room, dressed in the UA gym uniform. She's usually on the roof when I go eat, he said, pondering the question, and she's not a bad conversationalist. Enough talk, let's get to pumping iron. Another week later, day of the sports festival. Izuku walked towards the UA stadium, eyes scanning the crowd. Hey, Midoriya, Kirishima called, running up to his friend who stopped for a second to let him catch up. You ready, man? Always, Izuku said flippantly. What about you? I'm pumped, I just know I'll be making it far today, he cheered as they began walking again. 2 weeks of training doesn't feel like a lot of time, does it? Yeah, but it wasn't like we were told to refine or anything, just to prepare. I think we'll all do great. True, so do you know who's delivering that speech at the beginning? I thought it would be Bakugo, but he got kind of tight-lipped about it. Kirishima stopped as he realized Izuku wasn't following him. Midoriya, he asked, looking back and flinching slightly at the look on the boy's face. He was still smiling, but his eyes looked haunted, and ever so slowly he began to squat down, curling in on himself. Midoriya, Kirishima asked unsurely. How could I forget I had to give that stupid speech? Izuku did his best to calm his mind as his class milled around him, quietly chattering amongst themselves while Izuku silently berated himself. The literal one thing you had to do today. And you completely forget Kaken's never gonna let me live it down if I go up there and botch the oath shit. I don't even know what the oath is. Hey Midoriya. Izuku jumped slightly and looked up at Kirishima, who was standing over him with a grin. You ready, man? As ready as I'll ever be. He sighed, standing up as Kirishima gave him a pat on the shoulder. Just relax, man, you got this, Kirishima exclaimed. Yeah, you're right, Izuku muttered, slowly moving to the entrance with everyone else. Midoriya. Izuku stopped and looked back to Todoroki, who was standing tall, looking at the other boy with an intense stare. What is it, Todoroki? Izuku asked cautiously. Objectively speaking, I believe I am stronger than you are. And I want you to know that no matter what, I will be aiming to crush you in the festival. I will not be beat. Izuku actually smirked as Kirishima began spluttering. Come on Todoroki, there's no need to declare war on each other. It's alright Kirishima, Izuku said as Bakugo stepped over. This festival is gonna test all of us. Izuku said loudly, making sure everyone heard. As of right now we'll be actively competing against each other for a chance to win. He looked at Todoroki, who didn't flinch away from his hard gaze. You're gonna crush me? Well then you better be ready to use that fire, Todoroki, because I'll be bringing everything I got for this. Bakugo sneered. You two done posturing? I am, Izuku said, walking to the exit. Let's hit it. The stadium was loud with cheering fans as Izuku stood with his class, hands in his pockets as President Mike began to open the games. Good morning and welcome to the US Sports Festival. Today we will be watching as the first-year classes go head-to-head to show their stuff. Looking down at the entrance tunnel now we have the hero departments, Class 1A and 1B. Izuku looked about with a whistle as they walked. You gonna be able to get it up? Number 2, Izuku whispered to Bakugo, who instantly began to glower. Just you wait, shitty Deku, he grumbled as Izuku laughed. And behind them are our general course classes C, D, and E, followed up by support course classes F, G, and H. Don't all these kids look ready to go, Erasure? They all have their game faces on, that's for sure. Right you are. Now let's go down to the field, where the first-year top student will be giving the sportsman's oath. Izuku took a calming breath before walking forward, stepping onto the main platform beside Midnight. He looked over all of the students, his eyes slowly falling onto Yui, who gave him a small smile and a thumbs up. Izuku smiles and begins to speak. I pledge today to show good sportsmanship and honor. I pledge to treat my opponents with the respect they deserve and challenge them to go beyond plus ultra and show themselves to be worthy of calling themselves students of UA. As he finished, the other students began to clap politely. Izuku nods to Midnight before heading back to his class. Should have just promised to win, Bakugo scoffed. That's what I would have done. That's why you're not number 1, Izuku said smugly as Midnight announced the first event. Ready to see second place again? Ready for me to kick your ass? Izuku grinned. Bring it, Kaken. So, that's your nephew, huh? Hiro smiled as he looked at the other inmate at his side, watching the TV where the sports festival was being covered. That it is, he certainly has grown into himself since we last met, Iro said serenely. Hey Demo, the guy called across the room, catching another inmate's attention. Put 5 soups on Midoriya. I got a good feeling about him. Iro chuckled. I'm glad you believe in my nephew. Come on, trained by the Dragon of the West kid's gotta be a powerhouse. Soren. Iro looked to the cell entrance, where 2 officers were waiting. Let's go, Board is waiting for you. Iro stood. Do tell me what I miss, he said to his fellow inmates as he walked out. Good luck, Iro. Go. Izuku took off into the air, fire trailing behind him as the ice Todoroki tried to use to freeze everyone suddenly went up in steam. Did you think that would work? Izuku taunts Todoroki as the two head straight for the 0-pointers. Todoroki freezes one while Izuku weaves through, doing his best to keep his momentum as he dodges Minda's attempt at attacking him and slamming him into a 3-pointer. And they're off with Midoriya and Todoroki leading by a wide margin. Izuku reached the canyon and instantly jumped, fire shooting from his feet and propelling him skyward once more. Not this time, Todoroki snapped, sending a huge spike of ice at Izuku, who vaults off of it at the last second, turning in midair and unleashing a torrent of fire from his mouth, forcing Todoroki to jump back to avoid being burned while Izuku kept going, sporting a large grin. And with a move worthy of a dragon, Midoriya takes the lead. No, Todoroki growled, running across the canyon while the others caught up. These two are crazy, Uraraka shouted. You're barely realizing this, Sue asked as Ada began sliding down the ropes. This is where I shine. Uraraka sighed as Sue left. Come on, you can't stop now, she hyped herself up, floating across the canyon as Bakugo exploded past above her. Izuku darted between the mines as fast as he could, eyes darting back as Todoroki came running up. Thought I lost you, Izuku said, getting into a defensive stance as Todoroki sent a wave of ice at him. I told you that I would beat you. Todoroki shouted as Izuku's fire went up against his ice, steam and vapor hissing into existence as Todoroki attacked, punches and jabs forcing Izuku to dodge as he nimbly continued on, not taking his eyes off Todoroki for one moment. Deku. Oh shit. Izuku groaned, jumping back further as Bakugo came rocketing in, destroying the area where he had just been. You think you can play footsie with Isahot and pretend like I'm not here to kick your ass too? Didn't know you were jealous, Kakin. Izuku taunted, dodging the explosive boy's punches while countering Todoroki's own attacks. The two boys having apparently decided that Izuku was the bigger threat. With a taunting glint in his eyes, Izuku suddenly grabbed Bakugo's arm, grunting with exertion as he swung the other boy into Todoroki, sending them both into a cluster of mines. See, Izuku called, firing off once more, passing the finish line before either could orient themselves. Damn it, that's on you, Isahot, Bakugo snarled, propelling himself forward as Todoroki regained his feet, letting out a huff of irritation before running after them. Izuku groaned as he stretched, grinning cheekily as Bakugo ran past the line, number 2 again. He sighed, you must like that position. Bakugo gritted his teeth, just you wait, shitty Deku. I'm gonna kill you the next round, Bakugo exclaimed, pointing a finger at him as others began filtering in. Guys, Uraraka cried, running over to them out of breath. You guys, good job, she congratulated them, giving both a thumbs up. You guys were awesome. Thanks, Uraraka. Izuku chuckled, while Bakugo scowled. Oh come on, Bakugo, you got second place, Uraraka cheered. Shouldn't you be happy? No, not when Deku gets first. Uraraka rolled her eyes fondly, having grown used to the two's rivalry. What do you guys think will happen in the next event? Not sure, probably team-oriented. Izuku said with a shrug as Midnight began calling everyone together for an announcement. It's now time for our second event, she called as the giant screen behind her came to life. Cavalry battle. It'll work like a regular playground cavalry battle. The rider will have a bandana that has the group's points. The points will be decided in increments of 5. If you came in at 40th place, then you will have 5 points, and each place will increase by 5 all the way to second place. Lot of points, Izuku whistled. And first place will have 10 million. Izuku froze, his face looking decidedly blank as everyone around him suddenly became very interested in the boy. Oh, he whispered, closing his eyes. Oh fuck. You have 30 minutes to make your teams good luck. Izuku looked around quickly, already having a bad feeling as everyone refused to even look at him. Hey Ajiro, he started, heading towards his fellow martial artist, who chuckled awkwardly and waved him away. Sorry Midoriya, he said, walking off. Izuku let his head hang. Yeah, I get it, he sighed, looking about again. Midoriya, Uraraka cheered, running up to him. Let's team up. Thank God, yes, Izuku exclaimed, bowing to her. You are a queen, an empress, truly my thanks knows no bounds. Wow, I didn't think you wanted to team up with me so bad. Uraraka chuckled awkwardly. I was worried everyone would just ignore me. Izuku admitted, how embarrassing would that have been, 30 minutes up and I'm the only one without a team. Can't you solo just about everyone here? That doesn't mean I want to, Izuku sighed, looking about. With you on the team will almost be a shoo-in, but who else? Izuku began walking over to Ada. Hey Ada, join my team with your mobility. And Uraraka's zero gravity. We could easily win. I'm sorry Midoriya, Ada said, giving his friend a respectful bow, but I have already joined a different team. Izuku's shoulders fell a bit. Well shit, good luck then Ada, he said, giving his friend a confident grin before turning back to Uraraka. Well, now what, he asked her. Do you know of anyone who'd be willing to join? I would say Tsu, but she was already talking to Choji. Uraraka began before letting out a startled yelp as someone new practically attacked Izuku. You 10 million join teams with me, she exclaimed, making Izuku jump back a bit. Holly, where did you come from? Izuku asked cautiously, arms up as Hatsune began to inspect him. The name Mei Hatsune, she greeted, support course class 1H. Okay, do you want to partner with me? He asked, relaxing slightly. Because you'll be where all the action is and gives me the perfect chance to show off my precious babies. Your children. Izuku sweat dropped beside Uraraka. Yes, Hatsune suddenly whipped out a case, opening it to reveal several gadgets. Grab whichever one you want. Izuku let out a slightly surprised laugh. Oh, I think you can be on this team, Izuku said, sharing a look with Uraraka, who's nodding fervently. We just need one more. He looked up and moved off, approaching a lounging Takoyami. Join us. We are halfway through the second event and things are heating up. Present Mike cheered, making Aizawa groan as he watched Izuku's team dart around the field. Izuku's fire warding off other teams while Takoyami's dark shadow deflected any attempts at attacking. Midoriyas holding stubborn to that 10 million, and the rest of 1AIS ain't doing so good. They even took out Bakugo, Izuku said in surprise as he looked at the leaderboard. That doesn't bode well for anyone. What do you mean? Uraraka asked as they took off into the sky once more. Bakugo's full of pride. You do anything to hurt that pride. He trailed off as a series of explosions sounded, followed by a terrified scream. Yeah, that. It's a good thing he's not paying attention to us, right? Uraraka asked. Yeah, let's go with that, Izuku said as they returned to the ground. Almost instantly they were attacked once more as ice walls surrounded them. Cover yourselves, Izuku warned, allowing Takoyami to recall Dark Shadow before losing his fire around him. Get ready to move again, guys, Izuku shouted, only to stare ahead in shock as Todoroki's team suddenly darted past, tearing his bandana off of his forehead. Nah, no way, Izuku whispered. And just like that, Todoroki has thrown Midoriya out of the running. Izuku looked back towards Todoroki, eyes narrowing. Takoyami. Izuku began, can you manifest dark shadow as soon as I cut my flames off? I believe I can. Takoyami said with a nod. Good, because we're getting those points back. Hatsumi Uraraka, hang on. Todoroki's eyes widened as Izuku's team was suddenly flying towards them. Ada, we need to move. My engines are still stalled, Ada shouted, eyes widening as Team Midoriya was suddenly beside them, fire gone and dark shadow darting forward. Time slowed as Izuku watched fire begin to creep up Todoroki's left side as he attempts to shield from Takoyami, without thinking. Izuku's own hand moves, redirecting Todoroki's fire and allowing dark shadow to swipe 2 bandanas off of Todoroki's neck. Fall back, Izuku shouted, jolting slightly as Hatsumi and Uraraka activated their hover boots, pulling the 2 boys back as the final buzzer sounded. And first place in the last seconds, Team Midoriya. Izuku grinned as his teammates cheered, letting him down as he looked at the 10 million headband. Good job, Takoyami, Dark Shadow. Izuku said, nodding to the bird-headed boy and his quirk. It was your quick thinking that even gave us the chance, Midoriya, Takoyami returned. Had you not redirected Todoroki's fire, we would have never gotten the headband back. Team effort then, Izuku said easily as his team continued to celebrate as Midnight began to set up the bracket for the one-on-one battles. Izuku narrowed his eyes at the purple-haired kid after Ajiro stepped down. What do you think that was about? Uraraka asked him quietly. I don't know, he muttered at Midnight. Dismiss them. Let's not worry about it for now. Let's just get something to eat. Midoriya, Todoroki called, making Izuku pause as he looked to the half-and-half boy. He was as stoic as ever, but something else glinted in his eyes. Was that uneasiness? May I speak with you? Izuku thought about it, then nodded, following Todoroki into the tunnels with his hands in his pockets. What's this about, Todoroki? He asked. As they walked, I'm kinda hungry. They wanted to apologize, he muttered. For the declaration of war, Izuku wondered. Not the coolest thing you've ever done, but I understand. Not that, Todoroki said pointedly, stopping just shy of actually leaving the stadium. To use my fire, I had promised myself a long time ago that I would never use that quirk in battle, and the second I was overwhelmed, I used it. Izuku slowly leaned against the wall, staring at Todoroki with eyes full of understanding. You know I get it. He said slowly, I was in a spot like you once. You have no idea what I've been through, Todoroki began. I know what it's like being scared of a father's quirk, Izuku said pointedly, making Todoroki stop. Not all of these scars on my body came from foster care. He continued, looking down at his hands. My old man was abusive when he got the mind for it, and in my hate, my fear, and my doubt, I ended up killing him when my quirk finally manifested. He gave a humorless chuckle. After that, I didn't use my quirk for anything. I was so scared I was going to hurt someone, but someone close to me told me that I couldn't let fear control me. That I must master it as I must master myself. He looked at Todoroki. I don't know why you don't want to use your fire. I don't know what Endeavor has done, or hasn't done. But I know what it means to be afraid of your quirk. And I know how all-consuming that fear is, but you can't let it control you, Todoroki. You can't go through life handicapping yourself to prove a point. He sighed and pushed off the wall, walking away from the still shell-shocked Todoroki. A fire quirk is dangerous in the hands of a troubled mind, Izuku said as he passed him. I of all people should know that. Todoroki didn't move until long after Izuku was gone. He doesn't understand, he whispered to himself. He doesn't understand. Izuku walked towards the fairgrounds, intent on getting something to eat before the tournament began, when Ajiro walked up to him. Hey Midoriya, can we talk real quick? Izuku sighed. We're going to eat first. I'm starving. And we're back with our first matchup of the final event, President Mike exclaimed into his microphone, Aizawa groaning a little ways from him. This first fight is against the fiery flame user who's taken this festival by storm. Give it up for Izuku Midoriya. Izuku looked around a bit before crossing his arms over his chest. Think this is the first time a crowd's been happy for me to be somewhere, he said, looking across the way at his opponent. And his challenger, a kid who looks like he needs a nap more than erasure here. Watch it. General Studies' own Shinsu Hitoshi. So, finally get to show us all what you're made of, Hush, Shinsu asked, narrowing his eyes at Izuku. You've actually been kind of impressive. What with that special fire quirk you have? Are both contestants ready? Midnight called. Izuku inclined his head, getting into his ready stance. That monkey told you about my quirk, didn't he? Hitoshi asked with a sneer. He's an idiot. Throwing away his one shot for something as ridiculous as honor. Begin. Watch your mouth, Izuku snarled, charging forward, his fist cocked back. Everyone watched in shock as Izuku suddenly stopped moving, his eyes glazing over as he simply stood in the middle of the arena. It's over, Shinsu said with a smirk. Now turn around and walk out of bounds. Slowly, Izuku turned and began to walk out. What the fuck, Deku? Bakugo snarled from the stands. The fuck are you doing listening to his commands? Damn it, I told him not to talk to him, Ajiro groaned. But what happened? Why is he just walking out? Kaminari asked in confusion. Down on the field, Izuku felt like his head was underwater. So this is his quirk. It's peaceful and dangerous. I have to break it somehow, but how? How? Let the fire of Agni guide you, Izuku. Shinsu was forced to cover his eyes as fire suddenly blazed out of Izuku's hand, scorching the ground and sending a wave of hot air through the stadium. As Izuku whirled around, now breathing heavily as he clutched his arm, now red and raw from burning himself. What's this? Midoriya just burned himself to get out of Shinsu's control. Resourceful. Shinsu began, trying to figure out what to say to make Izuku talk again. Really, you lucked out with that quirk. Faster than Shinsu could follow, Izuku darted forward, his fist driving into the other boy's stomach before a roundhouse sends Shinsu tumbling out of bounds. And the winner is Midoriya by ring out. I was kinda worried for a minute. Izuku watched as Shinsu stood, glaring at him. Izuku didn't flinch or look away. Instead, he met the glare with his own, adding a challenging smirk that made Shinsu crack a smile. Not bad, Midoriya, but I got you next time, Shinsu said, looking forward to it. Izuku said, laughing internally as Shinsu activated his quirk. Deku. AAH. The entirety of Class 1A sweat dropped as they watched Bakugo pounce on Izuku, getting the laid-back fire user in a headlock before punching him repeatedly in the head. The fuck do you think you're doing out there? You almost blew it, you bastard. If I have to go through this festival and not kick your ass, then I'm going to kick your ass. Isn't that redundant? Izuku cried, pulling away from Bakugo as Kirishima stepped in between them. What did happen down there? Tsu asked. It looked like Shinsu took you over for a moment. It has something to do with his quirk, Izuku said, rubbing his head where Bakugo had punched it. Brainwashing, dude almost had me too. But I told you how it works, Ajiro exclaimed. How did you still get placed under it? I'm not really good at keeping my mouth shut sometimes. Izuku sighed, sitting down as he looked at the arena. It's Todoroki versus Shiro now, right? Yep, they haven't started yet. Sato confirmed as they all looked down. Man, Todoroki does not look happy. Does he ever? Bakugo grumbled. Izuku leaned forward. Shiro's about to get fucked, he said plainly. Agreed. Bakugo grumbled. Oh come on guys, Kaminari laughed. Give Shiro some credit, he's really skillful. The match started with a rapid opening attack from Shiro, whose tape wrapped around Todoroki and almost sent him out of bounds. A giant glacier put a stop to that. Izuku stared in slight shock at the ice that had almost covered their class. Talk about anger management, he muttered, shivering slightly at bad memories before looking over to his classmates who were in various stages of shock. Did he have to shut Shiro out like that? Talk about harsh, Kirishima said quietly. I don't think this is about Shiro. Uraraka mumbled as Todoroki was declared the winner and the ice was cleared to the cheers of nice try. Izuku let out a puff of fire, warming himself up as well as those around him. If that's an indication of how the rest of this festival is gonna go, then we'll all need to put our game faces on, Izuku said with a hard stare as Ida and Hatsum stepped into the arena. 15 minutes later, Izuku and Bakugo were hanging off each other laughing as they watched Hatsum basically control Ida like a toy car. I can't believe she fooled him with that sportsmanship bullshit, Bakugo guffawed. Oh poor Ida, Izuku chortled, slowly sliding off the bench as Mina and Shiro joined in on their laughing, undone by a pair of goo-goo eyes. I think it was sweet. Uraraka giggled, until she made him look like an idiot. Mina chortled, earning him some glares from those around him. Either way he won. Izuku chuckled as Hatsum stepped out. He's gonna need to perform even better in the next few rounds to make sure he gets recognized. And now for the next fight, the high-wired dude with a megawatt smile, it's Kaminari Denki. And in the other corner, the silent assassin of Class 1B, Shiozakibara. Izuku's smile disappeared as Shiozaki spoke up. Oh great, he scoffed, leaning back. Bible thumper. Do you know her? Uraraka asked. No, but I know her type. He sneered, holier-than-thou religious zealots who will try and push their doctrine on anyone they can. I very much doubt she is anything like that, Momo said, giving Izuku a disapproving glare. Haven't met one who isn't, he muttered, hand flexing slightly before he stands up. I'm gonna go walk around, see you guys. Man, way to bring down the vibe. Mina pouted as they watched Kaminari's fight begin. The high-voltage user doing a fairly decent job of dodging vines and sending weaker attacks out at the vine-haired girl. At least it looks like Kaminari's training paid off, Mina cheered as the boy tried to get in close, only for a wall of vines to shoot out and slam into him, sending him flying out of the ring. He didn't go dunce. 3 fights later, Bakugo made his way towards the arena entrance, feeling confident for the most part. You just gotta blow cheeks out of the arena and move on, he muttered as he walked, glaring down at the ground. Don't think too far into it. Yo Bakugo, you good? Bakugo looked up, surprised to see Izuku waiting at the exit. You look like you got something on your mind, Izuku said as his friend got closer. Just can't wait to finish this round, he grumbled. These fights need to pick up speed if we're gonna duke it out. Izuku chuckled at that. I'm so glad I rank so high on your priority list, he drawled, putting a hand on Bakugo's shoulder. But don't underestimate Uraraka, she's got some fight in her. TCH, right. I'm serious, man, Izuku said, pulling his hand back. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if she already has a plan to beat you. Will you stop singing her praises already, he snapped. I'm gonna blow her out of the ring just like all these other extras. Then I'm coming for you with that. Bakugo nudged past Izuku, who simply grinned after him. May as well go relax until my turn, right? He mumbled, turning around and almost immediately bumping into someone else. Sorry, Izuku stopped as he saw just who he ran into, number 2 hero, Endeavor. Izuku said, his grin disappearing and his eyes gaining a slight edge. It's an honor, sir. HMPHSO, you're that fire user that Shoto has been talking about. Endeavor rumbled, turning to fully look at Izuku. That's me, he says, putting his hands in his pockets to keep himself from clenching his fists. What can I help you with? You're strong, Endeavor states, stepping towards the younger boy, and your quirk is the perfect one to show my Shoto how to achieve his full potential. If you are able to convince him to use his fire, then I can guarantee a spot at my agency when you... I'm gonna stop you right there, number 2. Izuku said coldly, making the hero's eyes widen in surprise. You see, I'm not here to be anyone's stepping stone. If Todoroki uses his fire, then it will be through his own will, not mine, and definitely not yours. He brushed past the man, not looking back. Don't think that since we have similar quirks that I feel some kind of camaraderie with you, number 2. I will advance myself without your help, remember that. Endeavor watched Izuku walk away. Are all children so rebellious? He wondered out loud with a sniff of disdain. Bakugo slowly lowered his arm, his entire body shaking from the explosion that he had used to clear the rocks from the sky. That was close, he whispered, turning his gaze back to Uraraka, who was slowly pushing herself back to her feet. Deku was right about you. Bakugo called with an elated grin. You really do have some fight in ya. I hope you don't think that's all I have left, Uraraka snapped back, taking off at an unsteady sprint at him. Show me what you got, Uraraka, he snarled, preparing to ward off another one of her attacks, only to rush forward when she suddenly swayed and fell, hitting the ground before he could reach her. Hey Cheeks, you alright? He asked, kneeling next to her as she slowly tried to push herself up. I'm not done, she croaked out, her arms shaking before giving out. I'm not done. Bakugo looked over to Midnight, then back to Uraraka. Hey, he said softly, hey, it's alright. At this point it was apparent to Bakugo that Uraraka was unconscious. As Midnight called him the winner, he slowly picked up Uraraka, carrying her towards the medical bots who were slowly wheeling their way over. Good fight, Bakugo muttered as he set her onto the stretcher, and watched as she was carried away to Recovery Girl. Thank ya, Bakugo. The mumbled words made Bakugo pause for a moment, before he continued towards the tunnel, where Izuku was already waiting. Told you she had fight in her, Izuku said quietly as Bakugo passed her. When you're right, Bakugo muttered. Now hurry up and finish off Isahat. Izuku chuckled quietly at that. Yeah, and hey, make sure to check up on Uraraka. I'm sure she'd love to see you again. Watch it, Deku, Bakugo snapped, glaring at the teen as he walked out onto the arena. It is now time for the second round of this tournament, with our favorite fire user Izuku Midoriya going head-to-head with the stoic half and half Isahat Shoto Todoroki. Izuku watched Todoroki, hands down at his side. Just met your old man. He called over. Guy's as big an asshole as I thought he would be. Todoroki said nothing, simply kept staring at Izuku. I can see why you want nothing to do with him, Izuku continued. In fact, I can even see why you refuse to use your fire. Begin. But that won't stop me. With a huge intake of breath, the arena around Izuku and Todoroki exploded with fire, making many shield their eyes from its intensity moments before another giant glacier breaks through the flames, cutting them off and revealing a tapped Izuku, eyes wide with shock and what looks like fear before anger overwrites both emotions. Unlike his fight with Zero, Todoroki doesn't tell Midnight to end the fight. Instead, he watches as the glacier begins to glow. Within seconds, the glacier was gone, leaving a soaked Izuku in its place, breathing heavily with steam rolling off his body. With a shake of his head, Izuku let loose a puff of fire from his mouth before charging forward, spinning kicks and palm strikes, sending more and more fire at Todoroki as he closed the gap. Todoroki responds with ice pillars, each one countering Izuku's attacks, the fire burning so hot that they turned to steam on contact. A smoke screen, Todoroki muttered, eyes widening as Izuku was suddenly beside him, driving his fist into the other boy's guy and sending him flying. Only a last-minute ice wall prevents Todoroki from falling out of the ring. Quit holding back and fight me, Izuku snarled, jumping into the air, and bringing his leg down in a fiery axle kick, his flames destroying the wall that Todoroki had just been at as the half-and-half user relocated. Take this, Todoroki snapped, sending several spikes of ice at Izuku, who simply roared, his breath of fire easily melting the spikes before they could reach him. The two teens glared at each other, with Todoroki's breath puffing out from the overuse of his ice. After this fight, Izuku begins, making Todoroki tense slightly. When you train with your fire side, I want a serious match out of you. You know as well as I do that this win will be meaningless to me unless I beat you at your strongest. I told you I will never use that man's, Todoroki started, only to be cut off by an angry Izuku. It's your power, Todoroki, he snapped, your fire, your quirk. Don't let the man taint you and be your own hero. Todoroki feels something inside him snap as fire erupts from his left side. Izuku grins fairly as he adopts an attack stance. Come on, Izuku challenges, bringing forth his own fire in a devastatingly large attack as Todoroki sent a two-pronged attack of fire and ice at Izuku. The stadium once more erupted in steam as the ice was instantly vaporized. As it cleared away, Izuku was still standing, his jacket gone and his tank top worse for wear. Across from him, Shoto was lying on the ground unconscious, a single foot out of bounds. Unbelievable, the winner is Midoriya. Izuku sighed in contentment as he stood under the shower head, letting cold water drum against his head and back. Currently he was standing in the locker room shower, his muscle shirt off, simply letting the water clean off the soot and ash that clung to his body. With a small groan, Izuku shut the water off, his quirk quickly drying out his skin and pants before he stepped out and put his muscle shirt back on. The door opened and Kaminari walked in. "Hey dude, you good?" he asked. "Yeah, just cooling down a bit," Izuku said with a smile. "Cool, you're about to be called up," facing Ada. "Good," Izuku muttered, walking out with Kaminari following. "Who won between Bakugo and Kirishima?" "Who else?" Kaminari scoffed. "Took a bit, but Kirishima was already weak after his little fight with Tetsu. And let me guess, he thought it was super manly." "Yeah," he chuckled. "Can't break the guy's spirit. I'll give him that. Good luck, Midoriya. Really hoping you'll pull a win." "Thanks, Kaminari," Izuku said, bumping fists with Kaminari as he walked out into the arena, grinning at Ada. "No support items this time around," he teased. Ada blushed. "That was an underhanded tactic on Hatsume's part. I was appalled at being used like that." Izuku chuckled. Appalled or not, it was entertaining. He shook his arms out, falling into a comfortable fighting stance. "Don't hold back, Ada. I really want to see what you can do. Begin." Ada was off like a rocket, hands coming forward to shove Izuku out of bounds. Izuku quickly dodged the attack, his fists igniting and bathing the area around him with fire, forcing Ada to jump back. "I said show me what you can do," Izuku shouted as Ada began running around him, easily dodging any flames that Izuku sent his way before darting in to deliver powerful punches to Izuku's defense that would send the boy sliding across the concrete. After one of these kicks, Izuku suddenly pitched forward onto his shoulders and spinning, his legs and arms unleashing long sweeping tendrils of fire that forced Ada towards the edge. "Got you," Izuku muttered as he jumped to his feet, right fist shooting out like a viper to deliver a powerful fireball that connected with Ada's chest, knocking the boy out of the ring. "And the winner is Midoriya." Izuku ran over to Ada as the taller boy got back to his feet, wincing at the pain in his chest. "I tried not to burn you," he began. "I'm only a bit singed." Ada reassured him, giving him a good-natured smile. "I have to admit, I thought I had you there before that little spinning move. Was that something your mentor taught you?" "No, I saw it in a music video," Izuku said with a grin. Ada stared at him in shock, then began to laugh. "Only you, Midoriya. Let's get to the stands. I'm actually gonna go sit in the waiting room," Izuku said as they walked towards the tunnel. "I doubt this next fight's gonna last long." "You're probably right. Good luck in the finals, Midoriya." "Thanks, Ada." The time had come. Bakugo had beaten Takoyami fairly quickly, his explosions producing enough light to weaken Dark Shadow and force the bird-headed boy to admit defeat. Now it was the moment of truth, the stadium filled with cheering as Izuku and Bakugo stepped into the arena. Now the moment you've all been waiting for, the final round of the sports festival. In this corner, the coolest fire user this side of Saitama, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku carefully stretched his arms out, his gaze not leaving Bakugo once. And in the other corner, the boy with an explosive attitude and the skills to pay the bills, Bakugo Katsuki. "Are both contestants ready?" Midnight called, gaining a nod from both of them. "Begin." "Deku!" Bakugo roared, explosions propelling him forward as Izuku brought his arms forward, golden flames spewing from his fists, and forcing Bakugo to change trajectory as he sent his own explosions at the firebender. With deft movements, Izuku easily wove through the attacks, sending his own back at the airborne blonde and forcing him to land. "Try this howitzer impact," Bakugo snarled, sending the overcharged explosion at Izuku, and watched with wide eyes as Izuku seemingly parted the explosion with his hands, before unleashing a torrent of flames from his mouth, forcing Bakugo to dodge out of the way. "Gotta do better than that," Izuku shouted, jumping into the air and coming down with a flaming axle kick, one that Bakugo blocked with his forearms. "Die!" The explosion sent Izuku flying back across the arena, digging his heels into the ground to keep himself within the boundary. He exploded back towards Bakugo, a series of combos sending flames at the boy, who utilized his explosions to keep himself injury-free even as his muscles contracted painfully. "Is this all you got, Deku?" Bakugo sneered through gritted teeth. "Generic shitty fire. Where's that lightning I've heard so much about?" Izuku narrowed his eyes, keeping his stance up as Bakugo took a step back. "All I've been hearing is how amazing it is when you summon lightning. How powerful," he spat. "And yet I've never seen you use it. What's the matter? Are all those people just full of shit, or are you full of shit?" Izuku clenched his jaw. "Remember, you asked for this, Kakin," he said, beginning to go through the technique. "Bring it, you shitty nerd," Bakugo roared, leveling both hands at Izuku as blue arcs of electricity began to jump from his body. "Your lightning against my twin howitzer impact. We'll see who number one is." "Midnight, we need to stop the fight," Cementos shouted from the sidelines, hands reaching for the ground as Midnight began to pull on her uniform. Die. ARRRGH. Thunder roared over the sound of an explosion as several concrete barriers sprang up between the two rivals. The concussive impact from both sent a shockwave through the arena, knocking over anyone who hadn't already braced themselves in preparation for what was sure to be a powerful finale. Dust and smoke clouded the arena, making Aizawa jump to his feet as he shouted through the microphone. "Midnight, what's going on down there?" "I don't know," Midnight coughed. "Give it a second. It's clearing up." The crowd watched with a held breath as the smoke slowly cleared out, revealing the destroyed concrete slabs that had done nothing to stop the two powerful attacks from meeting head-on and forming a crater in the middle of the arena. "Unbelievable," Midnight whispered. Their Samantha started in disbelief. "They're both down," Present Mike exclaimed, and it was true. Both Bakugo and Izuku were lying, unmoving, in the arena, both covered in soot and ash. What an unexpected twist. Could this be the first draw that this festival will see? "Wait, Midoriya's moving," Midnight called out. The entire arena took a breath as slowly Izuku began to move, his arms weakly pushing against the ground for a few moments before his chest began to lift up. Izuku let out a pained groan as he pushed himself to a kneeling position, breathing heavily before forcing himself to his feet. "Midoriya is up," Midnight called, "and Bakugo has fallen unconscious. The winner by knockout is Izuku Midoriya." The arena burst into thunderous cheers as Izuku looked up, his eyes slightly out of focus as he looked about. Then slowly, he raised his fist up in victory. All over Japan, people watching the sports festival had mixed reactions. The spiky-haired man with burn marks covering most of his body was impressed. The boy who used to run with him on the street had gotten even better, and he couldn't wait to face him again. The girl with sharp teeth and a knife clasped in her hand was giggling, giddily dreaming of meeting the fire user and wondering if his blood was spicy. Jin watched the fight in the mess hall of the JDC, cheering alongside his fellow inmates for their old friend who had made it out of the life. Haku watched from the teacher's box, still wary of the boy, but undenying of his skill and tenacity. Iro watched from the stands, inhibitor cuffs on his wrists, and parole papers folded in his back pocket as he cheered for his honorary nephew. Izuku and Bakugo walked towards the stadium exit side by side, both covered in bandages and partaking in their favorite pastime, heckling each other. "You got lucky, shitty Deku," Bakugo said gruffly. "Next time I'm gonna blow you out of the ring." "I remember you saying that before, and oh, would you look at that, you're still number 2, Izuku drawled, holding up his first place medal and making Bakugo grit his teeth. "You got lucky, nerd. Apparently that's all I need to beat you." Izuku laughed as they reached the exit. "Come on, man. Just admit that I'm." Izuku trailed off as he saw a familiar form standing beside Aizawa, talking amiably with him. "Uncle," Izuku called, taking off at a jog. Bakugo followed with a confused expression. "Izuku," Iro exclaimed, laughing as the boy wrapped him up in a hug, and returning it happily. "I'm so proud of you." "How'd you get out?" Izuku asked him, pulling back. "Tatsumoto said it would be at least a few years. It seems my parole paperwork was pushed through early," he said with a grin. "All I have to do is wear these cuffs for the next few months and I'll be a free man again." That's great," Izuku said, tears glistening in his eyes. "I really missed you, uncle." "And I missed you, my boy," Iro said, his grin softening into a small smile as he put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "You have done everything you said you would and more, and I cannot be more proud of the man you have become." Izuku sniffled a bit, wiping his eyes quickly. "Uncle, this is my friend Bakugo Katsuki. I knew him from before the incident," he said, stepping to the side to introduce Bakugo, who looked the man up and down. "Who's the geezer?" Bakugo asked, making Iro laugh and Aizawa glare at him warningly. "I may be old, but I wouldn't describe myself in such a way." Iro said good-naturedly, "I am Iro Soran. I was Izuku's foster father for a time. He's also the one who trained me." Izuku added, "I wouldn't be nearly as good as I am now without Uncle's guidance." Bakugo scowled, but politely bowed to Iro. "It is an honor to meet you, sir." "And what an honor it is to meet you as well, young man. I was very impressed with the control you had over your quirk. You must have put immense training into it, ever since it manifested," Bakugo said proudly. "Well, why don't we all go and celebrate your placement in the festival?" Iro asked. "I believe there is a good yakiniku joint close by if that's all right with you, Aizawa. I still have some things to take care of before I can go home." Aizawa droned, giving Izuku a nudge. "Congratulations, son, you really stepped up today." And Bakugo, "I'm sure it won't, but don't let this discourage you from getting better." "I'll crush him next time," Bakugo huffed out, making Izuku roll his eyes good-naturedly. "I'm sure," Aizawa said dryly, walking away. "Well then, let's get going," Iro said cheerfully. "It's all my treat." Izuku laughed alongside Bakugo as Iro finished telling his story about the first time he and former pro hero King Bumi had celebrated a successful villain takedown. "The way I hear it, All Might Tower is still crooked by a few degrees." Iro sighed, peacefully drinking his tea. They had finished eating over an hour ago, and had mostly been sharing stories of their escapades. "Can't believe you knew King Bumi," Bakugo said, impressed. "The way Deku talked about you, I thought you were just some small-time tea shop owner." "Oh, I am." Iro chuckled, "but in my youth I played being a vigilante when the fancy struck me, and Bumi was usually at my side." What's he up to these days? Izuku asked, leaning forward alongside Bakugo as Iro looked contemplative. Last I heard he was somewhere in China, Iro said. He was on the trail of a Yakuza group he said was up to no good. If I know him, he's already taken care of them. Bakugo leaned back and checked his phone. I gotta get home. Old hag's gonna ride my ass hard if I stay out any later. He sighed, standing up. It was an honor meeting you, sir. Bakugo said, bowing to him. Likewise, young man. Don't be a stranger anytime you're around the shop. I'll treat you to my best jasmine tea. Bakugo nodded, then bumped fists with Izuku, later Deku. See ya, number 2. Just you wait, nerd. Izuku laughed as Bakugo kept walking. A strong friendship between you two, Iro said jovially, and an even stronger rivalry. Yeah, he's adamant he's gonna take the number 1 spot, but I trust him with my life. That's good. True friends are hard to come by, and should be cherished. Iro checked his watch. Let's head home. Iro paid for the food and the two walked towards Izuku's apartment. Will you be reopening the tea shop? Of course, how else will people be able to taste the wonders of tea? Will you be needing help setting it up again? I can go after school. No, Iro said, cutting him off. You need to focus on your schooling. Besides, I have more than enough friends who will help me get everything I need to get the old place back up. They stopped in front of Izuku's apartment, but that can wait until the week. Tomorrow, we get back to training. Izuku grinned at that. See you in the morning then, he said, giving Iro one last hug before going into his apartment. The next morning had Izuku going through a new form, his body slick with sweat while Iro and Aizawa critiqued him from the sidelines. You must flow through the transitions, Izuku. Iro commented, you're too jerky and stiff. It's because he didn't stretch after his run. Aizawa stated, giving Izuku a glare, I've told you before, running doesn't count as stretching. That's how you strain muscles. Yes, Dad. Izuku grumbled. I think we can add some extra cardio at the end of this workout. Don't you, Iro? Aizawa asked the retired villain. It will definitely help his stamina in a fight. Iro nodded with a genial smile. Izuku sighed, I've brought this on myself. He grumbled as he once again began the kata. What are the other students doing this weekend? Iro asked, taking his focus off of Izuku. More than likely relaxing and healing up so they can get to class on Monday, though I know one of my students is currently dealing with a family tragedy. Family tragedy? Izuku asked as he finished the set and walked over, picking up a water bottle as he did. What happened? The pro-hero Ingenium was permanently disabled by the hero killer. Aizawa sighed, looking at Izuku. Ingenium is Ida's older brother. Oh man, poor Ida, Izuku said softly. I hope he's doing alright. Is that why he wasn't at the awards ceremony? He left early to go see his brother. Aizawa said with a nod. His parents say he's taking this hard, so be sure to look out for him when you return to class on Monday. Of course. Good, no, back to work. We still have daylight to burn. The remainder of Izuku's weekend was spent training with Iro and Aizawa, going through new forms and more extensive workouts until it was time to return to UA. Izuku walked down the street, leather jacket keeping his uniform dry. I hope Ida's okay, he muttered, thinking of his robotic-like friend. Midoriya. Izuku turned around, surprised to see Ida running down the street in a yellow rain jacket that went down to his ankles. We're late, let's go. Izuku instantly began running when Ida caught up. What are you talking about? We still got 30 minutes. Good students arrive 15 minutes before class, now let's go. Izuku laughed and kept pace with Ida until they were running into the front hall, pulling their shoes off as they went. Ida pulled his rain jacket off while Izuku shook the rain out of his hair. Now, let's get to class, Ida proclaimed. Hold on, Ida, Izuku called, walking up to his friend. You alright? He asked quietly. Of course, Ida said, giving his friend a smile, but it was just a little too wide to be believable. Ida cut the bullshit. Izuku said quietly, look man, I heard about your brother. Yes, that was a bit of bad news. Ida sighed, his smile falling, but I know that right now is not the time to be talking of such things. I'll be fine, Midoriya, I promise. Izuku hesitated, but gave a nod, putting a hand on his shoulder. You can talk to me about anything, man. I hope you know that. Of course, Midoriya, Ida said with a smile. Now let's get to class. Yo, Midoriya, Kirishima called as the fire user stepped into the classroom. How you doing, man? I'm doing good, Izuku said easily, bumping fists with the boy. Feel refreshed and ready to take on anything. That's manly. Hey, Midoriya, Mina called. What was that move you used on Ada during the sports festival? Just something I came up with on the spot, Izuku said with a sheepish chuckle. Well, it was awesome. You got some breakdancing moves. As apt a description as any, Izuku said while sweating, hoping she didn't find out that he had learned that move from the Step Up movies. Everyone, class is about to begin. Return to your seats, Ada proclaimed from behind Izuku, who chuckled and nodded to his classmates before going to his seat. 15 minutes later, Aizawa was walking into the room, scratching his cheek as he went. Mr. Aizawa, your bandages are gone, Tsuyu said in surprise. The old lady went overboard with her treatment. He grumbled, walking to his desk. First off, I'd like to congratulate everyone in this room. You all did great in the sports festival, and have all improved on your weaknesses. But now is not the time to get complacent. It's time to talk about your internships. Internships? Kaminari asked. Yes, this is related to the draft pick I was telling you about. Hundreds of agencies watch the sports festival and will send requests for internships in on the ones who they want to have in their agency. Don't worry if you didn't get any offers, all of you will be doing these internships. He turned to the blackboard. I'll be writing the number of interns each person has received. The class was amazed. Bakugo and Todoroki had received the most offers by far. With Todoroki outranking Bakugo by over 1,000, Takoyami got over 300, the same as Ida. The top 5 so far had the highest numbers. Izuku had received a measly 10. How Uraraka cried out in surprise. Midoriya deserves more recognition. He won the sports festival. How did this happen? Yaoyorozu shouted. There has to be a mistake. No mistake. Aizawa sighed. But this doesn't make sense, Yaoyorozu said strongly. If anyone deserves recognition, it's Midoriya. Drop it, Yaoyorozu. Izuku said pointedly, making her look at him in shock. But Midoriya, they probably didn't send anything because of my record. He said, making everyone look at him in shock, save for Bakugo. So drop it, please. Aizawa gave him a sad look. Now, for the rest of the day, we will be having a special class, as you all need to pick code names. The mood instantly lifted. Remember that while the names you choose today won't be official, there's always a chance that they can become permanent, so choose wisely or there'll be hell to pay. Several of the males in the room perked up as Midnight stepped in, hands behind her head and hips sashaying as she walked to stand with Aizawa. Midnight here will help you choose an appropriate name. I'm going to take a nap. Izuku chuckled as everyone began presenting their names. Izuku was idly drawing little designs on his whiteboard, chuckling when Bakugo's name King Explosion Murder was dismissed as too violent. Did you really think that would work? Izuku asked. Shut it, Deku. He grumbled. Izuku gave him a shit-eating grin while thinking about his own name. I don't want to use Akuma, that's a name that doesn't belong to a hero, and calling myself Agni feels sacrilegious. With a slight grin he wrote down his idea, and raised his hand. I'd like to present. He said. Come on up then, Midoriya. Izuku walked up, then held his whiteboard up. The firebending hero, Kajin. God of fire, I like it. Izuku gave another shit-eating grin at Bakugo, who grumbled angrily as he sat down. Well, that leaves Bakugo, who still has to tweak his, and Ada. She looked at the stoic boy, who slowly stands up and walks to the front, holding his whiteboard up. You'll be using your first name as well, she asked in surprise. Ada just nodded, making Izuku share a concerned look with Uraraka. Bakugo angrily wrote on his whiteboard, then stormed to the front. Lord Explosion Murder. Yeah, no. WW. Izuku sat on the rooftop, looking at the 10 agencies who had sent him an intern request. Edgeshot, Best Jeanist, Gang Orca, Endeavor, Hawks, Death Arms, Mount Lady, Xless, Rocklock, and Fatgum. He sighs. Only 10. He folded the paper up and put it in his pocket as Yui appeared, looking at him curiously. You look troubled, she commented as she settled beside him, quietly eating her food. Just thinking about this intern thing, he muttered, slowly pulling the paper back out. Who did you choose? I'll be working with Native, mostly because he's the only one to send me an offer. How many offers did you get? Only 10. She raised an eyebrow at that. But you won. Yeah, I'm surprised I only got 10, he sighed, but it seems people are still wary of my past. Yui stared at him. She knew next to nothing about Izuku's past, but by his demeanor she figured he wouldn't tell her about it just yet. Slowly she reached out and took his hand. You're warm, she observed, looking up at him. Izuku smiles back and intertwines their hands, giving hers a soft squeeze. Yeah, it helps in the winter. Yui gives him a small smile, before looking across the grounds, leaning into his side. I think you should go with your head, she says softly, and choose someone who has a past like yours, someone who understands. You may be right, thank you, Kodai. Yui, she says, making him look at her. Call me Yui. Izuku grins, then call me Izuku. Yui hummed happily as they both looked at the horizon, spending the last few minutes of lunch in a comfortable silence. Izuku walked with his classmates. All of them were in casual clothes and holding their hero costume cases. Everyone remember, this isn't a break. Aizawa called to all of them. You will essentially be heroes this week. So carry yourself appropriately and don't give your heroes any reason to report you for bad conduct. There was a chorus of agreements before everyone began to disperse to catch their trains. Aizawa put a hand on Izuku's shoulder before he could follow Ada onto the train. Keep an eye on Ada for me, please. Aizawa said, I'm worried he chose Hasu because of the hero killer. Izuku nodded. I'll do my best, Dad. I'll see you in a week. Take care of yourself, Aizawa said as he walked to the train. No unnecessary risks. Izuku chuckled and waved goodbye as he stepped onto the train as the doors closed. With a stretch he walked over to where Ada was sitting and plopped down on the free seat beside him. How's it going, Ada? Izuku asked him. Good, Ada said firmly, not looking at his friend. Izuku raised an eyebrow. You sure you don't sound fine? I promise you I'm fine, Ada said curtly, looking away from Izuku. Izuku sighed as he realized that Ada was done talking, so instead pulled his phone out and texted Yui. The two had gotten closer over the last week leading up to their internships. Small touches and hand-holding was common amongst the two even in the halls, and had been the result of one or more of Monoma's rants against 1A. The first time he had begun to rant against Izuku and implying he was a criminal Neanderthal, Izuku knocked him out with a punch, possibly confirming Monoma's accusations. Probably. feeling satisfaction and seeing Class 1B laughing at their friend's pain definitely. Soon they reached Hasu and Ada was the first one out of the doors, leaving Izuku behind as he watched his friend walk away sadly. Definitely not alright. Izuku sighed, before heading towards downtown, suitcase slung over his shoulder, taking in the sights before reaching ATLA's agency. He looked at the small car that had the agency's address on it, then up at the plain white building in front of him, inconspicuous. He said softly, before stepping into the agency. It was as plain on the inside as it was on the outside, with simple cushioned chairs lining the walls and a single cheap desk in between two doors. Sitting at the desk was a young black-haired woman dressed in a business suit, busily typing away at the old computer that sat on the desk. She looked up as he entered, her hand unconsciously flexing and revealing sharp claws before quickly retracting them. "How can I help you?" she asked cautiously. "I'm Izuku Midoriya," he said, slowly setting his case down beside him. Her eyes lit up with recognition. "Oh, you're the intern," she said, standing up and holding her hand out. "I'm Mia Watanabe, otherwise known as the Sidekick Scratch. Go ahead and get into your hero uniform. ATLA will be back in 5 minutes to pick you up." Izuku nodded, looking at the doors. "Ooh, which one is it?" Mia motioned to the door to his right. "Thank you," he said, entering the room, surprised to find a locker room. A few moments later he was back outside in his hero uniform. "How many heroes work here?" he asked Mia, who sighed. "It's only me and X, but we have several applications for sidekicks," she said. "Several from last year's third years," a new voice said, making Izuku look to the entrance, where ATLA was waiting with his arms crossed, already clad in his uniform. Grinning at the boy, "Good evening, Midoriya. I'm ATLA, as you probably know, and I will be your boss for the next week. I look forward to working with you," Izuku said easily. "First order of business is patrol, so come on, we're killing daylight. Just give up the bag and no one gets hurt." A middle school girl with green skin and red hair cowered against the wall, several thugs around her with their quirks active. Their leader, a hulking man with alligator-like skin and looks, was holding his hand out. "Stall any longer and I'll let my boys have some fun with you as well." "Not on my watch." A burst of fire made the thugs jump away, looking up in shock as Izuku jumped into the alleyway, fist lashing out and engulfing one of the guys in a fireball. The guy was screaming for a few moments before he realized the fire wasn't burning him. By that time Izuku's knee met his chin and he was flying back into the wall, unconscious. "And who's this?" the boss growled, some jumped-up new hero. Izuku smirked as he crossed his arms over his chest, the girl quickly hiding behind him. "You're partially right," Izuku said, sinking down into a defensive stance. "I'm the firebending hero, Kajin. Boys, show this upstart what we do to new heroes who interrupt business." The last three of the thugs charged forward. Izuku darted between them, rolling forward and landing on his hands before spinning, fire shooting out of his feet and burning the guys around him before he pushed himself into the air and unleashed a torrent of fire breath, making them fall back as he fell back to the ground, an axle kick slamming into one's shoulder and making him crumple. The other two tried to use their quirks against him. Clawed bestial hands darted out from one of the guys, while the other pulled a knife and tried to stab him, the blade elongating further as he did. Izuku easily evaded their attacks, spinning between the attacks and landing with his fists against their chests. "Good night," he said before unleashing a torrent of flames, cutting them off a few seconds later, revealing the two had slumped over unconscious. "Are you alright?" Izuku asked the girl, who nodded slowly before her eyes widened. "Look out," she called, making Izuku dodge to the right, narrowly missing the fist that shattered the concrete where he was just standing. "You think you're hot shit," the leader roared. "Now you have to deal with Killer Croc." A red beam suddenly shot through the air, lancing through Killer Croc's shoulder and making him cry out in pain. Izuku used the distraction to engulf the man in flames like he had his cohorts. When he ended the flames, the reptilian villain was passed out on the ground, his skin smoking. "Good job, Kajin," ATLA said with a nod as he walked into the alley, two police cruisers pulling up. "Though next time, wait until I give you the go-ahead," he whispered to Izuku. "Sorry, couldn't help myself," Izuku huffed out, looking at the victim with a tired smile. "You still okay, kid?" "Oh yes," she stuttered. "Thank you for saving me. It's what heroes do," he said, his smile widening into a grin and making the girl blush a deeper green and a small flower to bloom on her head. "Come on, Kajin, we still have more ground to cover before patrol is done," ATLA said, the two walking away from the scene as the cops began taking statements and restraining the thugs. "You're pretty good in a fight, kid," ATLA praised him. "You took those guys out before I could even round the corner. My uncle's been teaching me for years. We have very similar quirks, so he showed me everything he knows." "Stroke of luck," ATLA said with a nod of his head. "Yes, so what made you think of sending me an offer?" Izuku asked curiously. "I don't usually go for interns," ATLA said with a shrug as they passed a few shops. "But when I saw your performance at the festival I figured I had to send an offer to be polite. Then I saw your record and knew I had to send you an offer." He looked at Izuku. "You see, in my youth I spent many days in the JDC. For many of the reasons you did, even when I told people I wanted to be a hero they laughed at me, saying a delinquent can't become a hero. But Shikesue took my application and gave me a chance and now here I am. I want to make sure you get the same chance I did, kid. That's one of the reasons I chose your agency. Izuku admitted, everyone I talked to mentioned your past. Of course that just solidified my decision. ATLA laughed at that. Tell us it's bad and we usually want to do it more. He chuckled, making Izuku crack a grin. Alright kid, so usually I have 2 or 3 psychics to help with patrols, but since most of my psychics are trying to strike out on their own, I've had to collaborate with other heroes in the area. Tomorrow we'll be patrolling with Native. Native, one of my classmates, is interning with him, Izuku said excitedly. Good, that should make it easier to build a good alliance with them. ATLA stopped talking as a guy who looked like a humanoid lion burst out of a corner store, 3 purses and a register in his arms. Help, he robbed us. We'll talk more about it later, let's get to work, Kajin. On it. Later that night, Izuku crashed in one of the beds ATLA had set up for his psychics. Izuku had texted Yui about the team up the next day, and the girl had expressed excitement in seeing him, making Izuku's heart flutter. He frowned when he looked to see if Ada had answered any of his messages, but the class rep had ignored all of them. Don't do anything stupid, Ada, please. Izuku jumped over the mugger, dodging small finger bones that the man was shooting at him from his fingertips. As he lands, he turns around and unleashes a torrent of fire breath that makes the man stumble back into his partner, both of them getting knocked out by ATLA. Great work, Kajin, ATLA said as the police arrived. Second mugging we've stopped today. You're in much better spirits than you were yesterday. I'm excited for this afternoon, Izuku said with a grin as they walked away from the crime scene. Oh right, that Yui girl, right, saw her in the festival. Her quirk was versatile, but I only had 1 slot for an intern, so he shrugged. If she's working with Native, then she'll have a good internship. Now, let's go grab some food. The two walked into a small MG Ronald's and ordered a #1 meal, sitting in one of the booths as they talked. You need to be careful when using your flames. ATLA informed him, I know you can adjust the heat and whatnot, but if you get surprised or blindsided, then you may end up burning someone. I'll definitely keep an eye on it. Izuku nodded. So how strong is your eye laser? ATLA grinned. On full power I can punch through 8 inches of reinforced steel, he said proudly. Wow, how have you not gone up in the rankings? I can only use the laser sparingly, that's why I focus a lot on hand-to-hand combat. Plus, a lot of people don't like my attitude. Can't be worse than Endeavor's. Izuku sighed. You're telling me, kid? ATLA sighed, biting into his burger as the assistant manager ran past after 2 guys who looked scared shitless. You think you can just dine and dash and not expect repercussions? Izuku watched the demon-like asked. Manager tackle the guys, dragging them back to the register with an irritated huff. Shouldn't we do something about that? Oh no, Mao won't do anything to them, ATLA said dismissively. Guy just takes being an assistant manager at MG Ronald's way too seriously. With a quirk like that you would think he was a hero. Oh, he was, ATLA said with a laugh. Pro-hero devil. He only lasted about 3 months before he butted heads with another hero. Wait, are they the 2 that leveled 3 blocks of downtown Tokyo? Got it in one. ATLA sighed. They're married now, funnily enough. Mao shouted, happily walking over as he shrank down to normal human height, losing horns and goat legs as he clasped ATLA on the shoulder. How's it going, buddy? Long time no see. How are you, Mao? ATLA asked. And how is Emmy? She's good, and I'm not doing too bad. Up for promotion in another month. He grinned, and off suspension on my license in another 2. Don't destroy Tokyo again. It's not my fault. Emmy was mad. He grumbled, then looked at Izuku. You get a new psychic. Intern. ATLA said, Sado Mao, meet Izuku Midoriya, also known as the firebending hero Kajin. Midoriya, this is Sado Mao. Nice to meet you, sir, Izuku said, giving a small bow. You too, kid, Sado said. Recognize your name from the sports festival. That fight with that Bakugo kid was intense. Kinda reminds me of when I faced off with the villain Alciel. Bore the kid with your glory days later, Mao. ATLA chuckled, standing up as he picked up his tray. We gotta get back on patrol. Don't let me keep you, Mao said, stepping away from the 2. Stay safe out there. He was nice, Izuku commented as they walked down the sidewalk. He's a major pain in my ass sometimes, but he means well, ATLA said with a small smile. Come on, let's see if we can't run into some more trouble before we need to meet Native. Yes, sir. 6 hours later, Izuku and ATLA quickly ran towards the meeting place, out of breath and talking to each other rapidly. We're late, ATLA grumbled as they came to a stop near a small bus stop. I know, Izuku sighed as he sat down, divided by. You knew we didn't have time, so why didn't you let the police handle that store robbery? Guy was pulling a weapon and the cops weren't paying attention. I had to jump in. Izuku defended himself. I'm proud of you, kid, but now Native is gonna tear me a new one for being late. He's a stickler for that shit. ATLA scanned the area, or he could be late too. That's good. He sighed. Gives us a second to cool down before they reach us. Not a very long cooldown. Be ready to go when they get here. The 2 waited at the bus stop for over 40 minutes, both sharing worried looks as the time passed on. Any messages from your friend? X asked as he pulled his phone out. None, Izuku muttered, phone already in hand. Anything from Native? Nothing, it's not like him. X put his phone up. Come on, let's start walking towards his agency, see if we don't run into them. They probably ran into a mugger or something, Izuku said as they began to move. Right. Let's hope it's that. And wait, do you hear that? X asked, looking around. I don't know. Wait, yeah, Izuku said, ears perking up as the sound of explosions and crashes filled the air. It's coming from the north, ATLA said, pointing to billowing smoke and an orange glow. Let's go. What about native? We'll look for them after no my DORIYA move. Years of training had Izuku jumping to the side, eyes wide as he watched a massive fist crash into the ground where he had just been. Namu, Izuku gasped as he tumbled back, landing in a crouch. ATLA immediately began peppering the large abomination with his quirk, dodging out of the way as it tried to hit him. What the fuck is this thing? It looks like the Namu that attacked the USJ, Izuku called, getting the monster's attention with a blast of fire, vaulting over it as it charged. But it's different. Did the fucker have cousins or something? X snarled, eyes widening as the thing charged at a cluster of frightened civilians. Kajin, stop it. It's not taking the bait, Izuku snapped, his fire scorching its back but not making it change its course. Damn it. He growled, shooting forward with his fire helping him go faster. He placed himself in front of the civilians. Run, he ordered them, shooting his hottest flames at the Namu at point-blank range as the civilians ran. The Namu shrieked in pain and jumped back, its injuries healing at a steady pace. Shit, it's got multiple quirks, he shouted at ATLA as the Namu charged again. We need Tage ATLA cried out as another Namu swooped down from the sky and snatched him from the ground. Izuku cried out as he jumped away from the Namu. I'm coming. Keep attacking that fucker, I got this one, ATLA snarled, blasting the Namu holding him at point-blank range, piercing its chest and making it let go of him with a startled roar. He landed right beside Izuku as other heroes began running in, some looking worse for wear as they fought a third Namu. The fuck is going on? ATLA shouted at a ox-themed hero who immediately tried to engage the largest Namu. These freaks showed up out of nowhere, he called, straining to hold the Namu in place as Izuku attacked it with his fire, jumping onto its head and unleashing his flames on its exposed brain until it bucked him off. Nothing we do is working against them, I can't. Hold him, let out a cry of pain as the Namu suddenly threw him at Izuku, the two crashing into a car as it roared. Kajin, you good? Alive. Izuku grunted, slowly pulling himself out of the wreckage as he checked over the ox guy. He's down for the count, we need paramedics. They're on their way but we need to lock this place down. Manual, get water on that fire. Right. Izuku ran back to ATLA's side, watching in horror as the Namu picked up a bus and threw it at one of the other heroes. Watch out, he shouted, firing off towards her and tackling her out of the way. Are you alright? Fine, she stuttered out. Thank you. Don't sweat it, Izuku said breathlessly as his phone pinged a message. Against his better judgment, he hid behind a car and pulled it out, going pale at the message. Kajin, what the hell are you doing? ATLA demanded to know as he ran over. We need you on the front line. Right now is not the time to be checking your phone. It's from Yui, he said, showing him the phone. It was her location with one simple word: help. ATLA hesitated, then sighed. Go. He commanded, go help Native and your friend. We'll take care of these guys and reinforce you when we're done here. You have my permission to do whatever it takes to keep yourselves and others safe. Thank you, Izuku said, taking off down the street. The flying Namu tried to follow, but ATLA drove it back with a powerful blast from his eyes. Kick it into high gear, people, we need to finish this fight. Yui was scared for her life, lying immobilized in a back alley while her mentor was being tortured by the hero killer. She had high hopes for the day when they had set out to join ATLA on patrol, and got sidetracked by muggers. Native had suggested cutting through an alley to save time and Yui had readily agreed. That was when the hero killer struck, incapacitating both of them before either knew what was happening. It seems the League of Villains have decided to become bothersome. Stain sneered, I'll deal with them after I take care of this false hero. You son of a bitch, Native gritted out, likewise frozen like Yui was. I'll kill you. Not a very heroic thing to say, he sneered, raising his blade as Yui closed her eyes tightly. The sound of a familiar engine quirk made Yui open her eyes once again as Ida came barreling onto the scene, trying to hit Stain with a powerful kick and almost getting a katana run through his chest. Another pretender, Stain sneered as Yui's eyes widened. This is my chance, she thought as her eyes looked over to her phone, only a few inches away from her face, with her location and message for help ready to be sent. She just needed to hit the send button. My name is Ingenium and I will defeat you. Ingenium, that's the name of that fake I defeated a few days ago. He was my brother, a good man and hero that didn't deserve what you did to him. I'll kill you. Stain stabbed Ada through the shoulder. You should focus on saving them first. He sneered, a real hero would, and you're as far from one as you can get. He pulled the blade out and licked it, paralyzing Ada as he raised his blade. You have shown your true self. You will be called along with this other fake, for the betterment of society. No. Yui's shout was all the warning Stain had as he jumped back, a giant nail impaling the wall directly behind where he had just been standing. Yui got shakily to her feet, phone falling from her hand as she grabbed Native, and began dragging him towards Ada. Rule, get out of here, Native pleaded. Go save yourself. I won't, she said with a quick shake of her head, letting out a gasp of pain as a blade cut her shoulder, her eyes widening as she found herself paralyzed once more. You have the makings of a true hero, girl, Stain said as he walked past them, not only engaging me, but attempting to save these false heroes when you could have easily saved yourself. He stood over Ada once more, sword poised to strike. Sadly, your efforts count for nothing. No, Yui shouted as Native closed his eyes in defeat. Get away from them, Izuku roared as he ran into the alleyway, sending several blasts of fire at Stain and forcing the man to dodge. Rule Native, you too, okay? Don't let him cut you, Yui called as Ida struggled to look. Over at him, the fire user looked worse for ear, with several cuts and scrapes visible on his arms and face, his uniform looking particularly haggard as he typed out a message into his phone and sent it. Midoriya, Ada, you're here too. Shit, this just got complicated. But don't worry, he ran forward, keeping his friends behind him as he got into a defensive stance. I'll protect all of you. Pretty words, boy, but they won't do you any good, Stain snarled, flying towards Izuku with his blades poised. Izuku grunted in exertion as he sent a massive wave of fire at Stain, forcing the man to climb higher on the walls to avoid getting burned. Oh shit, Izuku growled as he sees a glint behind him. With a backflip, he barely had time to snatch the knife out of the air before it impaled Yui. Stain slammed his shoulder into Izuku's chest, further driving the boy back as he dodged his blades. Izuku did his best to keep up with Stain's onslaught, a burst of fire from his mouth every now and then keeping Stain from trying to push his advantage too much. It finally came to an end as Izuku overcommitted an attack, his left arm reaching out just a hair too far and giving Stain the chance he needed to drag a blade across Izuku's arm, licking the blade clean of blood and sending Izuku to the ground as the paralysis took effect. Such fire in the youth of today. Stain laughed, walking towards Native, eyes narrowing as his breath fogs in front of him. Stain barely had enough time to evade Todoroki's opening attack, ice shifting the downed heroes away from Stain. You need to put more details in your messages, Midoriya. But then again, you're not one for cryptic messages, are you? The half-and-half teen asked as he stepped into the alley, eyes scanning the injured heroes and the angry assassin. The pros will be here soon. You've lost, hero killer. Yui grunted as she pushed herself up to a standing position, picking up rocks as she moved. His quirk has something to do with blood, Izuku called. He ingests it and it paralyzes. For how long, I don't know. This is the second time Yui's gotten back up, Native muttered. Is there a difference between our blood? I'm typo, Yui mumbled. Typo, Ida grunted out. Oh, Izuku muttered as Stain charges again. Without thinking, Izuku opens his mouth, unleashing a torrent of flame that forces Stain to jump away, landing against the wall before having to dodge Todoroki's ice. Still using your fire even when you're paralyzed? Yes, boy, a true hero lies inside of you. He bounces from wall to wall, going straight for Todoroki, only to dodge again as a car-sized boulder flies towards him, crashing into the street behind him, and Yui laughs, eyes locking onto Yui, who is picking another rock up. Twice I've paralyzed you, and twice you come to the aid of friends and false idols just like him. You are a true hero. Enough, Todoroki snarled, stomping his foot and sending ice straight at the man, who jumps over the attack and throws his knives, catching Todoroki on his left side and giving him an opening to attack. No, Yui shouts, jumping in front of Todoroki, making Stain redirect his attack and coming face to face with the fiery fist from a revitalized Izuku. Stain jumped back, clutching his stomach, his voice raspy. You shouldn't have been able to get up for another minute, he mutters, glaring at the boy as fire crept along his figure. Guess this fire is good for something else. Izuku says, getting into a stance. Yui, get Native out of here, he's too injured to be of much help even if he gets unparalyzed. Ida, how are you holding out, buddy? Better, now. He mutters as he makes an attempt to stand up, eyes widening as he darts in front of Yui and intercepts two knives that dug deep into his arm. Yui quickly runs forward, grabbing Native by the back of his costume and dragging him away, trusting. Izuku snarls as he charges forward, fire flying from his limbs while Ida intercepts two more knives meant for Todoroki. Izuku was a whirlwind of flame, eyes alight with fury as he drove Stain down the alleyway, trash catching fire as he jumped at Stain, fist cocked back ready to deliver a powerful attack on Stain, only for it to meet air as Stain dodged the attack and drove the blade of his katana into his stomach. Time froze as Izuku and Stain stared at each other, Stain with conviction in his eyes, and Izuku with a face of shock. Stain let out a snarl as he twisted the blade and yanked it out, making Izuku collapse. Midoriya, Ada shouts in concern, barely able to dodge Stain's renewed attacks. Midoriya, are you alright? Izuku was on his knees, hand over his new injury. The gash was just below his ribs on his right side. It had missed any internal organs as far as he could tell. With gritted teeth he summoned his fire, on the highest hate he could manage as he placed his hands on either side of the wound. He screamed as the heat seared the wound and cauterized it. Looking up as Stain turned to look at him, shock evident in his eyes at watching this boy cauterize his own wound. With another pain-filled scream, Izuku charged again, driving his fist into the still-stunned hero killer's chin just as Ada drives his leg into the man's gut, finally putting him out of the fight as Izuku collapsed, gasping in pain as Ida ran to his side. Midoriya. Fucking hell, Izuku whispered as Shoto reached his side as well. You're an idiot, Ada. His declaration made Ada pause in his worrying, staring at Izuku stunned as the boy slowly forced himself to his knees. Check on Stain. Make sure he's down for the count. Won't matter if we catch him if he wakes up to bite us in the ass. Alright, I'll see if I can't find anything to bind him with. Midoriya, are you okay? Todoroki asked as Ada began searching through trash, looking for something to restrain the hunter-killer. That injury looks bad. It'll hold until the hospital, Izuku muttered, giving Todoroki a tired smile as he stood, hunched slightly as he held his side. Let's focus on restraining the hero killer. We need to disarm him as well, Ada said, walking back over with worried eyes, holding a surprisingly strong coil of rope. He's right, let's get started. Yui carefully applied the bandages from Native's first aid kit to Native's injured shoulder. If they aren't back in 5 minutes, we go back in, Native muttered with gritted teeth as Yui finished taping off his injuries. Do you still have items to resize? Yui nodded, gesturing towards the small pile of rocks, old nails and glass shards. She won't need them. Yui looked up, her entire posture relaxing as she saw Ada and Todoroki walk out leading Stain out. The man looked as if he had seen better days. Any exposed skin was covered in soot, and the man was limping heavily as he walked. Yui's eyes widened as she saw Izuku limp out behind his classmates, the injury on his right side looking raw and aggravated as the boy practically dragged himself to Native's side and collapsed beside the pro hero. Quickly Yui began treating him. You burned your wound shut, she whispered as she looked at his stab wound, Midoriya groaning as she began gently applying burn salve to the cauterized wound. Only thing I could do to keep myself alive, Izuku mumbled, watching Yui work. You did good back there, he mumbled, closing eyes as she stopped what she was doing, placing a shaky hand on his chest. Be quiet, she mumbled, her cheeks a deep crimson. Any unnecessary strain will reopen the wound. That sounds bad, he mumbled as he heard multiple footsteps approaching. Kajin X-Less called as he and the other heroes approached. Where are you, kid? He's here, Yui called, holding her hand up as X-Less and another hero broke off from the main group to approach. He's been injured badly, we need an ambulance. I'll call them in along with the police, the other hero said, pulling his phone as X-Less knelt down beside his intern. Jesus, kid, I said protect yourself and others, not fuck yourself up. X muttered. Had to fight them somehow, right? Izuku muttered, grunting in pain as Yui pressed down on the gash in his shoulder. What happened with the Namu? X chuckled quietly, putting a gentle hand on the boy's chest. Endeavor showed up, took out 2 of them and injured a third. He sent us here to reinforce his son, so don't worry about that. You just try and relax while we wait for the ambulance to get here. Right, Izuku muttered, letting his head fall back as he closed his eyes, listening to the sounds of the other heroes fussing over Todoroki, Ada and Yui while others began to pull out their handcuffs to properly restrain the hero killer. The shrieking cry of the Namu made Izuku open his eyes a split second before it snatched him up in his claws. He screamed out in pain as the Namu took to the sky, its wound dropping splotches of blood on the shocked heroes. Kajin X shouted, trying to get a clean shot on the Namu. Izuku, Yui cried, picking up one of the rocks. X put his hand in front of her. I'll take care of it, the newly arrived Endeavor said, raising his hand to conjure his flames. Careful, you missed time and you'll hit. Kajin X snapped as the hero killer pulled a knife and cut through the rope. Before anyone else could react, Stain was licking the blood off of the nearest hero, pouncing onto the Namu, stabbing the knife into its exposed brain and killing it, slowly looking back with crazed eyes. Endeavor, he gritted out. Hero killer. Endeavor growled as he stepped forward. Wait, Kajin still in the way, X shouted, narrowing his eyes to try and get a clean shot on the man as he tore the blade from the Namu's head. Izuku could only stare at the hero killer as the man loomed over him, an aura of death surrounding him as he addressed not only Endeavor, but the other heroes as well. You false hero, he snarled, taking a step forward. I'll make this right. The heroes present froze. Even Endeavor could do nothing but stare as the injured villain stalked forward, knife brandished at his side. Come on, he roared. Just try and stop me, you fakes, he laughed as Endeavor took a step back, noticeably disturbed. There's only one man I will let kill me, he declared. All might is worthy. Yui shut her eyes tightly, shaking in fear as the declaration was yelled. She reopened them when the knife fell from the man's hand. To think, one hero began as he slowly began to approach the immobile man. I think he's out cold. He must have used the last of his strength to save Kajin from that Namu. X muttered, still not moving as Yui suddenly ran forward, sliding to a stop beside Izuku, who was unconscious, his breath shallow. The Namu reopened his wound, she cried out to the heroes, her already blood-stained hands pressing into the wound. X-Less shook his head. Taurus, help Manuel and Kesajiri man restrain the hero killer before he regains consciousness. Endeavor, we need to try and cauterize his wounds before he loses any more blood. Can you do it? Of course, Endeavor scoffed, regaining himself as he walked over to Izuku. Little fire user does have spunk, doesn't he? Yeah, really does. X-Less muttered as multiple cop cars and an ambulance began to rush the scene.